Hanmaru is not a hero. He is a man who survives by the grace of a stomach that demands the flesh of monsters. In a world choked by yellow dust, these toxic mists hide level 5 demons, predatory entities that turn the mountains into a slaughterhouse. To stay alive, Maru must force himself to consume the raw, pulsating meat of these beasts, a gruesome act that grants him the very powers he despises. But as he faces a creature that perfectly mirrors his own gluttonous abilities, he realizes the hunt is no longer one-sided. Now, he stands on the brink of being consumed by the hunger he uses as a weapon, fighting to protect the only life that still matters, his mother. Everything began when an ordinary failed job applicant walked into an interview that would seal his fate. He screams in agony as a hand claws into the earth, dragging him into the soil. Nearby, a character looks down at the dying man and dismisses the scene with cold indifference, calling it a pity. Two companions observe the victim, wondering why he entered a restricted area, so they prepare to file a report. Because the footprints suggest a large creature, they decide to hunt it immediately to avoid working overtime, though the woman grows suspicious. The team stands in the woods, and Hanmaru decides that if he cannot catch the culprit, he must force it to reveal itself. King Chana prepares her knife and deliberately cuts her own hand, letting her blood drip to draw the target out. She grips the bloody blade, struggling in pain as her own technique begins to take hold. A woman points as a menacing, shadowy figure emerges from the dust, signaling the entity's arrival. Kang Chana stands before her companions, declaring she will handle the threat as the ominous figure looms from the forest. A member of the Ministry of Environment's Special Yellow Dust Task Force watches the storm, preparing for the upcoming operation. Hanmaru walks away into the sunlight, carrying a long, glowing red sword. Another applicant sits curled in a bathroom stall, trembling with anxiety and clutching his chest because the pressure is becoming too much to bear. Hanmaru splashes water on his face at the sink, attempting to steady his own nerves. Gasping for air, he reaches for his medication to suppress the frantic pounding in his chest. He freezes under the bird's gaze as it watches him from the branch. Returning to the sink, he catches a news report announcing the disappearance of 4 people on Ganhwa Island. At 29, he carries the heavy burden of 5 years spent failing the civil service exam 4 times over. Now standing at the threshold of his final interview, he walks with stiff, measured steps toward the door. When an interviewer asks his motivation for joining the service, he masks his internal dread behind a practiced answer. He weighs the promise of a stable life against the moral cost of obeying potentially unethical orders. A slip of the tongue forces him to scramble, his panic mounting as he contradicts his own admission of social isolation. Prompted to describe his greatest challenge, his mind drifts back to a childhood trip to the mountains with his father. Suddenly, a phantom grip tightens around his throat and a vision of carnage flashes before him. A child standing amidst a pile of bloodied corpses. Disoriented by the violent intrusion of his past, he remains trapped in the interview room as his buried trauma forces its way to the surface. His vision blurs as he glances sideways, struggling to maintain a grip on reality. A man in a suit calls his name, shaking him firmly to snap him out of his catatonic state. He gasps for air, retching as the suffocating sensation of the vision finally recedes. Back in his room, he collapses, thinking, "I bombed the interview, I can't get a job." The man in the suit reappears in his thoughts, but a sudden sharp knock at the door causes him to jump in fright. He looks up to find his mother, who berates him for not picking up his phone. He hopes for meat, but she hands him kimchi and braised beans instead. Attempting to shield the mess of his apartment, he shrinks away as she mocks the squalid state of his living space. The conversation turns to the interview, forcing him to hide the humiliation of having vomited on the interviewer. She sighs in annoyance before offering a perfunctory pat on his shoulder, though he remains visibly rattled by the encounter. When she produces an envelope of money, he pulls away, insisting he is old enough to secure his own part-time work. She forces the cash into his hands, warning that a fortune teller's prophecy regarding his failed interview may point to a deeper, darker issue, telling him he must return to the mountains. She leaves him trembling with confusion and dread over what that journey might demand. Determined to take control of his fate, he arrives at a coastal pier, harboring deep reluctance about returning to the place he has spent years avoiding. He makes his way toward the mountains, his expression growing increasingly pensive as the destination looms closer. His mother's words continue to echo in his mind, revealing that the shaman claimed his troubles stemmed from something far beyond a simple panic disorder. Pushing through his exhaustion, he reaches the mountain, driven by the shaman's insistence that a ritual for his deceased father is the only path to passing his civil service exam. He locates the destination and slides the door open, his expression chilling the moment he peers into the abandoned room. Watching a small boy dart away, he stands at the threshold to survey the desolate space where his father once resided. As the child steps into the light, calling out for his father, he realizes the suffocating weight of history trapped within these walls. A sudden, sharp pain constricts his chest, forcing him to gasp for air as he struggles to maintain his composure. Once his breathing steadies, he arranges his offering, hoping to appease his father's spirit and secure the employment necessary to support his mother. He pours liquor onto the earth, silently pleading with the mountain spirit for a stable future that might finally ease his mother's burden. Without warning, yellow smoke billows into the air, prompting him to scramble toward the exit, his instincts screaming of wildfire or something far more supernatural. He freezes when his own words are echoed back to him, turning to find a grotesque, spear-wielding creature emerging from the haze. Rubbing his eyes in terror, he prays it is merely a hallucination, yet he knows the cycle of predation has begun and that running is his only chance for survival. A green pole suddenly impales his chest, leaving him gasping in agony as the realization of his mortality takes hold. Behind him, a headless monster looms, forcing him to lament a life wasted on study and debt as he considers if death offers a final release. Straining to focus, he realizes he is entirely alone, with no one to mourn him. Peaceful memories dissolve into the ether, replaced by the suffocating weight of his current, dire reality. He cries out for his mother, teeth clenched against the searing pain as he struggles to stay upright with the spear still lodged in his torso. He refuses to die, gripping his blade as a muscular entity emerges from the dust. The creature mocks his pathetic attempts at safety before striking with blurring speed, forcing him to face his attacker head-on. Shock paralyzes him when he spots an eye inside the monster's maw as it lunges. He screams in terror, fighting to break free from the creature's grip as an unnatural, freezing pressure constricts his body. As the monster's teeth sink into his neck, he lets out one final, agonizing shriek while his grip on sanity begins to snap. Driven by the gluttony Rakshasa awakening within, his reason shatters, replaced by a singular, desperate and primal demand to eat. He screams in pain, his eye igniting with a red glow as he counters the force. He stands over the carnage in a bloody victory, yet the screech of another grotesque entity signals that the cycle of predation in this abyss never truly ends. A glowing green eye watches from the shadows, leaving him to wonder if this entity is the true architect of his waking nightmare. Collapsing to the earth, he is haunted by visions of the countless lives he has consumed, the weight of the abyss pressing down upon his soul. Surrounded by a swarm of shrieking entities, he feels his eyes flare with fiery energy, preparing to devour them all in a bid for survival. An army of skeletal creatures rises from the shadows, exerting the abyss's influence. Tasting blood and contemplating his own death, Maru wonders if the voices whispering in his mind are his own or something else entirely. His confusion shatters when two figures confront an intruder, jolting him awake to the sudden realization that the monsters and the yellow dust have vanished. A man in a floral shirt demands an account of the attack, forcing Maru to gasp through the pain in his stomach where the creature struck. As the teen debates the suspicious failure of the alarm system, they warn him that the Rakshasa abilities coursing through him cannot be mastered in a single moment. Time slips through his fingers as he realizes he has been unconscious for a full day since the encounter. Onlookers whisper that he must have gained unnatural power to survive, prompting the man in the floral shirt to aggressively draft him into their current operation. Confused by the demand, Maru stares at the mysterious object in his hand, wondering what it represents as he is ordered to change his torn clothes. He finds himself thrust into a formal orientation for government officials, stunned and questioning why he has been dragged into this clandestine environment. Anxiety claws at him while he observes the somber, unsettling expressions of the other attendees, his teeth digging into his fingers in a desperate attempt to steady his nerves. Yu Young-yoon, a chief from the Seoul headquarters, steps to the podium to welcome the new recruits to the Ministry of Environment. Stepping toward the podium, he hesitates and attempts to decline the unexpected invitation to the event. Young-yoon cuts him off, stating he has been hired as a special official, leaving him baffled since he never applied. A sharp warning follows as she reminds the recruits that leaking their work violates national security laws, a revelation that leaves him reeling. She explains that only those with demon abilities are recruited, and he denies being bitten after she accuses him. Detailing the threat, she clarifies that yellow dust levels 1 through 10 signify the power of the demons that emerge. When she confirms that Seon-woo Eden has already attained an ability from a level 7 demon, the man pledges his best to the cause. Pressed for his own status, he admits to the room that he has no idea what nature his own ability takes. A fellow recruit mocks his ignorance, drawing sneers that leave him seething and desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere. The tension spikes when Young-yoon abruptly announces a demon sighting, immediately forcing the group into an emergency mountain training exercise. He struggles through the dense forest, fighting to reach safety as the familiar, dreaded yellow dust begins to swirl around him once more. His breath hitches as he witnesses a woman nearby with a mutated skeletal arm, a grim realization of the true danger lurking within the abyss. The group freezes before an impaled creature as they sense the calamity's lingering power. Young-yoon initiates the training by identifying the gargantuan beast as a level 1 demon that has been incapacitated by Chana. A womanized Meru questioning how he managed to defeat a demon solo immediately after awakening his abilities. As the instructor orders a girl to step forward and fight, the sight of the grinning monster paralyzes Maru with terror. Panic constricts his chest, his heart hammering against his ribs as a dark, unnatural energy pulses within him. Gasping for air, he finds himself disoriented by a sudden ravenous hunger as a shadowy creature pulls itself from a pool of blood. The monster looms over him, its eyes and teeth signaling him to eat. Overcome by an urge to feed, he drools while muttering that he wants to eat. A man in a suit asks if he is laughing from fear, and Maru claims his hunger is just pain. Rubbing his stomach to steady himself, Maru watches as the woman redirects everyone's attention to explain the mechanics of their power. She warns that demons emit yellow dust, which fuels their regeneration, demonstrating the process by slicing her own hand. Disgust ripples through him as she clarifies that while the dust heals, it cannot prevent death from a truly fatal blow. The recruits learn their abilities dissipate without the dust, though Mara finds the lengthy lecture increasingly tedious. Suddenly, he freezes, his expression darkening as he grits his teeth in silent, mounting frustration. He experiences a surge of power, realizing he can harness the yellow dust by wounding himself. Racing for the encroaching threat, He triggers his ability as the cycle of predation demands a response. He strikes down a creature, but a violent golden sandstorm immediately scatters the team. As a creature emerges from the dust, a muscular operative slams the ground to stop it. Hanmaru delays a conversation while invisible forces strike the team and others intervene to prevent interference. The instructor refuses to allow training, insisting that if they cannot handle these monsters, they will simply die. He senses danger as a creature reveals its maw and his allies rush past him in panic. The creature attacks with its paw mouth, but a silhouette drags it away and strikes. He agrees to meet later, unaware of the figures standing over the defeated. Terrified, he faces a clawed entity while a centipede demon ensnares a humanoid monster. Energy explodes to reveal the centipede demon, while an ability user manifests a spectral form to counter it. A masked character launches a high-speed assault, slashing into the shadows to reach the monster. The Hojo demon user reveals a clawed form, and the monster roars in pain from the strike. The survivors celebrate their victory, though the woman remains confused by the chaos that unfolded. Hanmaru unleashes a burst of energy, striking the beast as the abyss of predation demands its due. The creature boils and growls, but the team watches in shock as its wounds knit together instantly, proving the cycle requires a more lethal touch. It lashes out with a segmented limb, swinging at the group with murderous intent. Nearby, a mysterious attacker kicks and strangles a man, but the narration does not identify the victim as a member of the team. He gasps in confusion, his memories slipping away while a creature looms over a terrified victim crying for help. Hanmaru clashes with the monster, striking the creature's gaping maw to disrupt the cycle of destruction. He grabs his opponent by the throat to prevent an escape, declaring himself a temple demon user before the monster lunges again. He removes his glove to restrain the beast and struggles to overpower it. After the monster's neck crunches and its head is pierced, he slams it into the dirt and crushes its skull to ensure it stays down. He explains that severing the throat halts the flow of yellow dust, earning the awe of his team for his solo efficiency. A colleague immediately accuses him of recklessly breaking her knife to provoke the demon, putting everyone at unnecessary risk. He denies the claim, leading the woman to snap that he should try breaking her fingers next if he truly dares. A purple-haired woman claps in mockery, praising the first-timer's performance, before noticing a recruit is missing from their formation. The terrified newcomer, overwhelmed by the sudden assignment to kill demons, bolts from the field in a desperate bid for survival. He stops abruptly, paralyzed by a new threat, while the instructor dismisses him as entirely unqualified for the task force. She contemplates the strange events, wondering aloud why the monster seemed to target the recruit specifically. As the team discusses the disappearance, they notice the yellow dust persists despite the monster's death, and others begin to vanish into thin air. A traditional gate emerges, pulsing with dark energy, and the recruit turns to face the encroaching abyss alone. Maru stares in confusion at the gate pulsing with an unnatural, heavy golden energy. A skeletal entity rises from the flames, looming over the field to enforce the cycle's rules. He gasps for air, terrified that despite his desperate flight, he must now face another predator within the abyss. Hiding in the nearby bushes to observe, he prays the monster has moved on, while a woman watches him, questioning his erratic behavior. Stammering, Maru realizes he cannot shake the feeling that he is being hunted again. He hides in the foliage, watching a figure emerge while wondering if the creature has finally left. Suddenly, a man rushes toward Channa and the other officers, shouting to deliver urgent news. He informs her that the office has issued a level 3 Raksasa alert, leaving her reeling because such entities rarely appear concurrently. Elsewhere, a shadowy figure strikes with a lethal sweep, ignoring the sign that marks the area as restricted. Lunging forward in a blur of motion, Maru throws a punch in a burst of desperate anger, crying out for salvation. A powerful force strikes him, sending him crashing to the ground as agonizing pain overwhelms his senses. Spotting a nearby structure, he scrambles to hide, haunted by the fear that the entity is stalking his every move. Peering through a door, he freezes at the sight of the monster's silhouette and the strange, leaf-like object crowning its head. A drop of sweat rolls down his face as he feels the creature's pressure, trapped once again. She waves a hand against the thick yellow dust, confused by how the day has suddenly plunged into such suffocating obscurity. Looming over the scene, a gaunt, pale creature bares its jagged teeth in a low, threatening growl. Maru peeks through the door, desperate to find a way to use his powers to save the woman. He understands he must act, though the warning echoes in his mind that a fatal wound can still kill him, because the cycle of predation remains unforgiving. Terror grips him as he considers hiding to survive, but he forces himself into a defensive stance to protect the stranger. The woman calls out for Changsik's mother, only for the creature to mimic her voice with chilling, hollow precision. The entity reveals its form, causing the woman to collapse in shock as she realizes it is Changsik's mother. Maru launches a desperate strike surrounded by floating stone shards, but the impact leaves him bleeding heavily from the recoil. Enduring the agony, he ignores the woman's notice of his severely injured arm and urges her to flee the area immediately. He collapses, lamenting his level 1 Raksasa ability as a worthless trait that perfectly mirrors his own failed life. As the creature closes in, Maru begs for a stronger person to save them, terrified that he will perish without ever having achieved anything. As death nears, his body undergoes a transformation and his veins glow red as he enters a feral state to survive. Driven by this newfound, savage instinct, he tears through the forest with feral intensity, desperate to reach the source of his agony. Amidst the wreckage of the destroyed structure, Channa reacts to the sudden, violent shift in the air. A monster strikes at him, but he lunges forward, countering the blow with the raw force of his transformation. China watches in panic as a skeletal hand slams into him, forcing the one who defied the rules to face his end. Defying the odds, he smirks and slams his opponent into the earth, shattering the natural order to claw his way towards survival. He tears into the creature's flesh, swallowing hard as blood stains his neck, channeling the essence to fuel his rising power. Though the skeletal entity looms over him, his bite strips away its power, rendering it unable to regenerate its shattered form. Recognizing this critical vulnerability, Chana lunges forward, casting aside her paralyzing fear to engage the shadow. Maru reflects on the chaos of his ruined life for a fleeting second before narrowly dodging a monster's desperate strike. He grabs a jagged shard and slashes through his opponent, acting as the force that finally cleans up the carnage. Nearby, an iron Rakshasa user readies a weapon as a creature lunges at a defenseless figure. Chena dashes across the debris-strewn floor, turning sharply as the intensity of the battle escalates around her. He gathers his energy and unleashes a golden explosion against his foe. He drives his blade into the creature, while Chana descends to deliver a blow. Mid-air, she executes a powerful kick as the monster roars, shaking the very earth with the force of its impact. Wounded and breathless, she kneels with the fleshy weapon in hand as the surrounding spectral entities begin to merge into one. Though a life is disintegrated in the fray, she rushes to her colleague, checking frantically for any sign of consciousness. She dismisses the entire incident as a mere attack by a wild boar, shielding the confused elderly woman from the horrific truth. As the yellow dust settles, she vows to manage the aftermath, ensuring the cycle of predation remains hidden from the world. She offers a polite nod of gratitude to her contact, then pivots to fix a piercing, focused gaze on the intruder. The woman glares at Maru, clearly irritated by his unexpected appearance in his casual athletic attire. Watching his severed arm knit itself back together in seconds, she stands frozen in shock while he clenches his fist in quiet, simmering resentment. She demands to know if his power is truly limited to a level 1 Rakshasa ability, prompting him to reflect on his limitations before he cries out in raw distress. A sudden notification pings on his device, delivering the jarring news that he is expected to report to the Special Bureau for Yellow Dust Management by the following day. Before he can process the order, a skull-faced monstrosity lunges from the periphery, its mutated hand clawing through the air toward him. Exhausted, he collapses onto his bed, his mind fractured by the impossible choice between his desperate financial need and his desire to reject the Bureau's call. He slips into a fitful slumber, finding his consciousness adrift in a vast, desolate void. Nightmarish humanoid shapes swarm together, dragging him deep into a suffocating vision of the abyss. As phantom voices howl for his return, he jolts awake in a cold sweat, lungs heaving for air. Trembling, he is haunted by the lingering dread of the orientation training, only to realize the morning sun has already bled into his room. A sharp, unnatural noise draws him to his feet, and he creeps toward the window to peer out into the darkness. He spots a fire-consuming Changi mountain and knows he must investigate the source. A fiery beast erupts from the inferno, and he realizes with mounting fear that these entities possess strength far beyond his previous encounters. He weighs his options, unaware that a woman hovers above the scorched earth, slipping into a mysterious, aquatic transformation. Maru and his team struggle to suppress the lava-skinned creature as an ice Rakshasa user funnels energy to lock it in place. The monster falters under the ice, leaving Maru to catch his breath behind his barrier. Chana warns Deokman about the nocturnal threat, but he orders the team to focus on the wildfire. As a secondary creature freezes solid, a grim-faced man steps forward to brief Maru, who readies his ice-enchanted chained blades in response. Charging headlong into the fray, Maru offers a fleeting, sharp smile as he watches a dark, mysterious power suppress the entity. The man pauses to offer Maru a moment for questions, but a molten rock creature erupts from the shadows, demanding its target be surrendered. The entity roars and releases a shockwave, forcing Maru to attack the magma-clad monster with his chained weapons. The creature clenches a fist, but Maru intercepts with a flame-infused strike that triggers a golden explosion. The sheer force of the collision sends Dokman crashing into a tree, leaving him wounded as Chana screams out in terror. A magma-infused stone giant awakens, and Maru realizes the truth as flames erupt from its body. He gazes at the burning behemoth and wonders why his enemy keeps getting stronger. In a distant room, a figure demands a reward for their service, while at Seoul headquarters, a controller reports simultaneous attacks erupting across 20 mountains. The staff realizes the Rakshasas have fundamentally shifted their behavioral patterns since the event a week prior, just as an urgent transmission arrives from the Busan branch. The headquarters chief answers the call, but a chilling voice from the darkness greets her with a familiar, mocking, "Big sister." The Seoul chief listens in stunned silence as Busan branch director Myeonshik reports a critical crisis unfolding on his end. He explains that a portal on Jumjeong Mountain has remained open for 3 days, pushing his local team to the absolute brink. Constant waves of Rakshasa crawl from the rift, leaving the exhausted unit trapped in relentless, draining cycle of predation. A skeletal entity emerges from the crack, babbling nonsense, while the frantic observers demand to know why the gateway refuses to seal. The creature demands a specific target be surrendered, a condition that causes a young girl nearby to suffer a sudden, horrific infection. As a mysterious, winged, skeletal beast descends from the night sky, the authorities are forced to admit they have no answers for this anomaly. They conclude that only one solution remains, issuing a direct order to bring Maru to the site because his presence is now deemed essential. Maru receives the urgent update that the situation in Busan is spiraling out of control and requires his immediate intervention. He boards a helicopter, promising to check in only after he has neutralized the mounting threat. Diving from the sky, Maru strikes the earth. Bracing for his confrontation with the entity, he lands beneath the full moon, fully prepared to face the spatial inversion caused by the encroaching abyss. He lands beneath the full moon, his arrival silent as he surveys the chaos from the rooftop. Onlookers recoil in shock as he materializes directly in front of the pulsating yellow portal. A nearby attacker suddenly slams a victim into the earth, inhaling the scent of fresh blood with cruel satisfaction. The monster raises a bladed limb to strike, leaving the woman beneath it to stare up in paralyzed terror. Cutting through the dark energy, Maru tears a rift in his own chest and fires a magical arrow that pierces the entity. He holds a severed spinal column to the moonlight, channeling energy as a multi-armed figure appears. The crowd watches in disbelief when a giant foot crashes down, and a newcomer steps forward to command the exhausted team to stand down. Tears of relief stream down the team leader's face as he recognizes the legendary Jeong Il-du. Il-du prepares to end the conflict, driving his hand into the soil to unleash a torrent of purple energy. As the ground erupts, the survivors watch the purple shockwaves shatter the landscape, finally understanding why spatial abilities command such dread. Maru stands before the rift, straining his power to rip the fabric of space wide open. Maru tears through the rift, inflicting deep damage on the lava-skinned monster while he struggles to breathe in the sweltering heat. Gasping at the ember-filled sky, he questions if this is his end before a looming shadow shifts behind him. The magma creature attempts an interception, but an attacker slams its head into the earth with an explosive shockwave. This fighter rains heavy blows upon the target, sending a man in a yellow shirt reeling backward into the roaring flames. As that man strikes the ground in retaliation, a second lava creature crawls forth from a dark, swirling portal. A man with purple hair seizes this new monster by the head, channeling a technique to crush its skull instantly. Despite the creature hissing in defiance, a man with blue hair steps into the fray, ready to confront the remaining entity. The purple-haired man smirks, asking if he should clear another sector as he signals his units to advance. Across the country at Sorak Mountain, a monster stomps on a victim before a pale, clawed hand impales the man through the chest. Horned creatures descend upon their prey while fresh portals tear open across Mudon Mountain and Jeju Island. On Hala Mountain, onlookers scream as energy blades slice a monster apart, exposing that a hidden observer has been watching the entire time. The yellow dust suddenly clears everywhere except for Busan, where the woman in the red suit smiles, certain that Maru has arrived. The blue-haired man sighs, watching the gathering demonic figures as they descend upon the landscape to claim their prize. Facing an encroaching pack of skeletal monsters, the protagonist flashes a grim smile, ready to initiate the final cycle. The creatures roar in anticipation of the slaughter, and the abyss begins to claim its due as the cycle of the rule demands. Maru repels the surrounding attackers with a powerful burst of energy, blasting the pack backward. He engages the charging monsters, unleashing a spatial rend that bisects 3 creatures instantly. After piercing the dark monster, he obliterates the swarm with an energy-infused explosion. Onlookers watch in terror, stunned by the raw power they have just witnessed. Standing over the carnage, he looms above a defeated, glowing armored creature emerging from the shadows. He grabs the head of a lava-like monster and gestures to his team, determined to uncover why these entities keep appearing. A girl commands the group to bring him to her, prompting Maru to question the identity of this mysterious target. Realizing the creature is merely mimicking human language, Maru decides to act after suffering a violent facial injury. He channels dark energy into his hand and strikes down from atop an energy-infused spike. Observers watch the devastation, relieved by his strength and surprised by the power he displayed. Remaining focused, he manifests his power while standing with his colleagues in the field. He senses interesting prey nearby, wondering if his success stems from his spatial abilities. Later, a woman in a red suit finds him at his desk to question him about the status of the gate. He explains that he has stored the rift in his dark space, though the woman admits she would rather die than enter it. Maru admits to being overwhelmed, feeling the limits of managing the organization on his own. She displays information on new recruits, questioning his sudden interest in their files. He examines the portraits, determined to discover who the regresses are hunting and the reason for their obsession. Haunted by visions of suffering souls, Maru fears the horde of monsters rising from the shadows. A powerful entity shrouded in crimson energy suddenly tears through the crowd, forcing him to awaken his own ominous powers to counter the encroaching threat. These mysterious figures demand he be brought to them, convinced that his recruitment is the only way to achieve their dark goal. Later, he arrives at the Gangwon Island Dust Emergency Department headquarters, his anxiety mounting as he recalls his mother weeping with joy over his new government position. Though he feels deeply conflicted about this role, he resolves to handle the situation to protect the happiness his mother has finally found. He wonders why he was assigned to this specific branch, but his arrival is immediately met with hostility from a man in a floral shirt who reeks of cheap alcohol. When Maru confronts this team leader about his sudden reassignment, he is met with mockery and invasive questions about his past, feeling a silent vow to turn the office into a battlefield. The leader grins and welcomes him, but Maru senses a presence lurking behind the office door. He witnesses a brutal, bloody act performed by his new colleagues and feels a sudden, disorienting wave of vertigo wash over him. As he hesitates at the threshold, the leader demands to know why he is lingering, leaving Maru stunned by the grim reality of his new assignment. He is introduced to his reinforcement team, Go Deokman, a veteran with 12 years of service, the composed Yoon Yuon, and Kim Yibak, who is busy trimming a bonsai. After meeting the young Inspector Nam Yosok, Maru asks for his specific duties, but receives only silence and dismissive stares from the veterans. Exhausted by his first day, he avoids his busy colleagues and offers an awkward greeting instead. The response he receives is one of pure aggression, leading him to conclude that his new team members are completely insane. Frustrated that his elite status is being wasted in such a place, he attempts to glean information about the department and the 13 headquarters of the Special Yellow Dust Task Force. Elite personnel reaching level 7 or higher secure assignments at headquarters for high-priority missions. In contrast, Hanjik sectors like Dongwa Island Warehouse those the bureaucracy deems incapable or flawed. Maru realizes his stationing here marks him as a liability, so he quietly observes the erratic behavior of his co-workers. While he hears rumors that some capable individuals join these backwater teams voluntarily, he struggles to believe anyone would choose such a fate. The station manager receives orders to head home, but she only sighs, remarking that leaving changes nothing. A sudden, deafening confrontation erupts, during which Maru blacks out. Waking later with no memory of the preceding chaos, he discovers sharp fangs protruding from his gums, and learns he will receive a substantial living allowance, realizing his survival now depends on his ability to fight. The sheer scale of this payout, 5 times his standard salary, leaves him reeling with unexpected excitement. He chooses to wait patiently for the alarm, rather than pestering his aloof colleagues with endless questions. Though ordered to simply listen and observe, he finds the combination of his light workload and excessive pay dangerously intoxicating. As the shift finally draws to a close, a coworker approaches with uncharacteristic enthusiasm to welcome him to the team. Maru finally breaks his silence to demand a straight answer regarding the origin and nature of the Rakshasa. His colleague offers only a vague claim that they descend from above, leaving Maru deeply frustrated by their callous indifference toward humanity's impending doom. The group invites him out for drinks, but he remains utterly bewildered by their detached, casual attitude toward the horrors they hunt. Deep beneath the surface, a woman in a red suit navigates the silent, lightless corridors of the basement. She reports that Rakshasa patterns are stabilizing while Maru struggles to breathe through his mask. She questions if their progress indicates they are nearing their goal, while Maru fixes his gaze on the chained, mysterious figure. The leader demands absolute vigilance, warning that if the organization discovers the truth, total chaos will follow, leaving the man in visible shock. Gathered for a meal, the group ignores the encroaching threat until one member reveals a prophecy of Rakshasas raining from the sky within a year, triggering sudden panic. As the team drinks to excess, Maru grows distressed by their chilling indifference, wondering why they remain unconcerned about the coming end. Claws burst from the floor, tearing through golden energy as the predation begins. Accepting the grim reality, Maru feels his form engulf in energy just as a frantic alert flashes on their phones, signaling danger in the dead of night. When she moves to depart, a colleague offers to accompany her, but she refuses, insisting that Maru join her instead. Inside the car, Maru feels crushed by the weight of the prophecy, gripped by the fear that he lacks the strength to stop the invasion. She tells him to set his worries aside, reminding him that their duty is simply to track and eliminate the Rakshasa, though he openly admits his lingering terror. A compliment regarding his unique ability leaves him flustered, forcing him to recall the visceral, unsettling nature of his power to consume the flesh of monsters. She watches him study the pale, toothless creature, wondering aloud if it is a gluttonous Rakshasa that sustains itself by cannibalizing its own kind. The woman confirms that his unique ability is the only way to neutralize the monsters. By consuming their flesh, he prevents their regeneration, leaving Han Maru horrified by his own biology. As the creature shrieks, she stabs it in the mouth with her staff and commands it to shut up. He recoils in visceral disgust when she orders him to eat, but she remains firm, insisting that consuming the raw flesh is the only method to suppress its regeneration for a full week, forcing himself to rationalize the act by comparing the monster's texture to an octopus. He bites into the tentacle-like mass with grim, trembling resolve. She watches him closely, urging him to continue and demanding he eat with more conviction if he expects to survive the cycle of predation. Back at the Gangwon-do headquarters, he slumps over his desk, racked with nausea, only to be mocked by a colleague who scoffs at the incompetent rookie getting sick after a simple field mission. Han Maru questions what he expected from this life, his frustration mounting as he remains benched from active duty due to his perceived physical and mental weakness. His colleague reminds him that he is the sole survivor of the training, then storms off, branding him an incompetent asshole who is wasting everyone's time. Wincing at the harsh critique, he realizes he needs to pull himself together, but his focus shatters when a woman calls his name in genuine alarm. He retreats to the restroom, his mind spiraling as he struggles with the internal conflict of whether he can ever truly consume a Rakshasa while fully conscious. Hoping to catch his breath, he tries to isolate himself, but the woman follows him inside, her eyes narrowing in suspicion at his attempt to hide. He blames food poisoning for his behavior, but she cuts him off, telling him he is not cut out for this work. She explains that he is free to resign from the government post, though the alternative is signing a strict non-disclosure agreement and living the rest of his life under constant surveillance. Her voice hardens as she demands he quit if he cannot handle the risk of accidentally harming civilians, adding that they are not so desperate for recruits that they need his shaky help. They stand in a tense, suffocating silence, the weight of her rejection pressing down on him as the finality of her words sinks in. The office erupts into a frantic scramble as staff members panic, desperate to track down the rookie who has suddenly vanished. Far from the chaos, Maru stands on a bridge, determined to hand in his resignation rather than risk his life in a war he cannot win. He stares into the void, feeling entirely nihilistic about the future, yet his resolve wavers when he impulsively dials his mother. Her voice drifts through the phone from In-Wing Mountain, triggering a surge of terror that forces him to scream at her to flee just before the line goes dead. Horror washes over him as he realizes yellow dust is already saturating the mountain, marking the arrival of a high-level threat. Near the summit, the security team watches in frozen despair as a monster, perched in the canopy, tears into a severed human arm. Maru arrives in a blur of motion, but he is too late. He finds his companions already slaughtered by the level 5 demon. The dying leader orders the rookie to call for backup, while a teammate manifests a duplicate to hold the line. They scramble toward a restricted zone, forced to rely on an archaic corded telephone because the dense dust has rendered every smartphone useless. Back at headquarters, officials scramble to process the desperate signal, knowing that if the entity breaches the perimeter, the civilian death toll will be catastrophic. Unaware of the nearby predator, a mother walks with her child near the danger zone. A blood-stained grin emerges amidst the crashed van and casualties, leaving a child's backpack in the dust. Watching the carnage, a woman urgently warns that time is running out, demanding an immediate strike against the demon before it reaches the civilians. Ignoring the chaos, a man screeches his car to a halt on a forest road and sprints away from authorities to reach the mountains. Though the hiking trail is closed, Maru searches the crowd in a panic, realizing his mother is missing. Convinced she is still on the mountain, he attempts to rush in, but a man in yellow blocks his path to warn of dangerous demons. Maru shouts that it is a demon and begins scaling the cliff to find her. He pulls himself up the jagged rock face, praying for his mother's safety. Deep in the forest, a man in a bucket hat tends to a woman with a severely injured ankle, offering to carry her to safety. Maru spots his mother buried in the debris, while a witness on the cliff watches in shock at his sudden appearance. He admits he tracked them via social media, ignoring shouts about his job as his parents boast to others about his life. Panic sets in as Maru realizes the demon is watching them from the trees, and he finds himself paralyzed by terror. He triggers the crystal, but collapses, suffering another panic attack. Doubting his ability to save his mother and recalling his frequent fainting in Ganhwa, he resolves to wait for the right moment. When observers notice him swaying unsteadily on the ledge, he screams in agony and collapses from the overwhelming pressure. A man strikes out in a desperate, failed attempt to intervene, watching in horror as a creature lunges toward the man in the bucket hat. As the creature looms, blades suddenly erupt from the earth to impale its back, leaving the onlookers stunned by the impossible strike. Maru gasps in terror as sharp stones and knives begin to levitate around his head, defying the laws of physics. He recognizes these as the precise techniques of a demon he once defeated. But before his mind can process the threat, a spike tears through his own spine. Wincing against the agony, he watches in disbelief as he finds he can command and manipulate the floating shards himself. The abyss functions as a prison. He realizes his power to consume allows him to absorb abilities. Officials from Seoul arrive to loom over the trembling survivors, branding their inability to contain the demon as a pathetic failure. They demand an account of the collapse, questioning how even a level 7 operative could be dismantled by a level 5 threat. The truth hits. They face a mirror demon that mimics every ability it encounters. Before he can brace himself, he is struck by a volley of his own levitating shards, coughing up blood as the surprise assault catches him off guard. Stunned that it mirrored his power, he attempts to activate his reflection but is impaled by stone spikes. The creature mimics his every motion, gesturing mockingly as it leaves the bleeding man to collapse in the dirt. Clutching his chest in agony, he catches sight of his mother's injury and forces himself upright, ignoring the searing pain to reach her side. He insists he is fine, hiding his blood-soaked clothes to keep her from despairing, knowing full well the yellow dust offers no healing to civilians. Determined to shield her at any cost, he orders her to find cover, bitterly reminding himself that his duty as a civil servant is to protect the vulnerable. He dashes forward to suplex his opponent, clearing the path as a colleague shouts a warning. Moments later, he drops to his knees, his body trembling as the overwhelming exhaustion of the fight threatens to pull him into darkness. He must keep the monster away from his mother, banking on the desperate hope that the In-Wing Mountain team will arrive to provide reinforcements. Elsewhere, the massacre continues as a strategist observes the mirror regresses successfully copying the team leader's ability to self-duplicate. While the strategist struggles to identify the true body among the shifting clones, a crazed man ignores the mounting risk and demands a reckless, all-out assault. Maru struggles to his feet to keep the regenerating beast at bay, fully aware that the cursed spirit remains a persistent and lethal threat. He screams at the entity to stop mimicking his mother, but the beast only lunges forward with a deafening roar. Watching his projectiles miss their mark, he feels a surge of frustration as the creature effortlessly weaves through the air. The monster suddenly turns his own crystal shards against him, driving them into his chest and pushing him into a state of boiling rage. He bellows for his opponent to take the hit, bracing his body to absorb the impact. After landing a desperate, forceful blow on the creature, he allows himself a moment of ecstatic celebration at the successful strike. That triumph is cut short when the beast yanks the blade from his shoulder and heals the wound instantly, proving his speed cannot outpace its regeneration. Clutching his own bleeding torso, he is struck by a memory of his instructor, scolding his hesitation during their past training. Exhaustion threatens to overwhelm him, as he questions his worth as a fighter, wondering if there is any real chance for him to survive. A voice echoes in his mind, reminding him that fear of vulnerability is his true enemy, and that the yellow dust exists to sustain them. He realizes that to turn the tide, he must consume the Rakshasa's flesh to trigger his gluttony, desperately scouring the area for a viable opening. Though he knows decapitation is the only way to finish a Rakshasa, he lacks the lethal technique required to execute such a precise move. The memory shifts to his instructor's voice, insisting that his inherent healing is his greatest strength, and he must not fear the consequences of the fight. Stealing his resolve, he embraces the dual nature of his healing and the lethal potential of gluttony, diving back into the fray. The creature mocks his poor aim, goading him until he realizes he must force a path to the beast's neck. Committing to a direct, high-risk approach, he closes the distance and narrowly weaves through the creature's swift, lethal counterattacks. Abandoning range, he lunges forward, shouting that he will stab the monster's throat himself. He delivers a downward strike, convinced he has finally won. The celebration abruptly dies in his throat as the creature catches the blow, leaving him choked and reeling as his plan collapses. The monster pins him against the rock, its grip tightening around his throat as it demands to know why he persists. He grabs the wall to steady himself, but the creature slams into him and kicks his chest. The impact leaves him gasping on the ground, his lungs burning as the entity looms over him, ready to finish the kill. Desperation takes hold. He decides he must unleash his gluttony power to consume the creature, sensing it is his only hope for survival. The creature bites into his neck, forcing a scream from his throat. He stabs at the beast while tearing at his own skin, only to realize with a jolt of horror that he has been bitten back. As the creature swallows his essence, he feels his life force straining away, leaving him dazed and dangerously weak. His wounds refuse to knit together, and he realizes with sickening clarity that the monster has copied his gluttony ability, effectively nullifying his own recovery. He wonders how long a human can survive such blood loss, fully aware that if he falls here, the consequences for everyone will be catastrophic. Later, young Yoon stands over his exhausted form, her gaze sharp as she questions how many times he has collapsed from his panic disorder. Though his heart races with a frantic, uneven rhythm, she warns him that he must overcome this fear, because failure here means certain death. She reminds him that he stands as the last line of defense, and if he falters, the civilians behind him will be left completely unprotected. Elsewhere, a disembodied voice calls out to him, yet he remains trapped in a suffocating cycle of exhaustion and despair before the looming mountain. Panting heavily, he grips a makeshift blade as the creature's forehead emits that same mysterious, glowing light once more. The monster prepares for a final strike, while a woman nearby shouts her grim resolve to take her enemy down with her. He stumbles forward, biting his lip until it bleeds, to force himself into focus before unleashing a primal, defiant scream at the creature. He lunges to attack, but the monster pursues him relentlessly through the swirling dust, stabbing and biting him in the vicious struggle. He fights back with his sword, narrowly avoiding a crystal shard that crashes into the earth. The entity mocks his motives as it bites down again, forcing him into a desperate, close-quarters grapple where only one of them can remain standing. A sharp, tearing pain surges through his body, forcing a scream of pure agony from Mara's throat. He counters with raw, desperate force, snapping the creature's spine before driving his twin blades deep into its flesh. The monster retaliates, lunging from behind to sink its teeth into his shoulder. Ignoring the pain of magical spikes piercing his back, he ruthlessly decapitates the beast and repeatedly stabs the remains to ensure it stays dead. He crushes the creature's shattered skull underfoot, gasping for air as the relentless cycle of predation demands its toll. Collapsing to the ground in total exhaustion, he whispers to himself that the battle is finally over. Staring at the cooling carcass, he wonders if this victory truly ended the threat as the surrounding clones flicker and vanish. The realization that the main body perished elsewhere hits him, just as a mysterious man in a pinstripe suit turns to walk away, alone. Mars spits an insult at the fallen parasite, feeling a wave of relief as his wounds finally begin to knit together. He touches his bloodied neck, realizing he nearly died. A dark, internal presence looms behind his consciousness, demanding he feed and forcing him to confront his own fractured memories. He questions why his father urged him to consume these entities, even as the headless corpse lies motionless before him. Recognizing the unique signature of the creature's ability, he decides to use his gluttony to absorb its power for himself. The memory of the prophecy that Rakshasa will rain from the sky flashes through his mind, hardening his resolve to grow stronger for his mother's sake. He kneels over the body, grinding his teeth as frustration gives way to a cold and grim determination. Blood drips from his mouth as he vows to hunt and consume every powerful Rakshasa he encounters from this day forward. His eyes ignite with a menacing, predatory intensity, leaving the nearby observers stunned by his sudden, chilling transformation. Waking up later in a bed at Salem University's Sacred Heart Hospital, he is jolted by the realization that he has no memory of how he left the mountain. he breathes a sigh of relief that his mother remembers nothing of the mountain, unaware that a nearby creature mourns the lost opportunity for salvation. Without warning, a monster lunges at a screaming man and strikes him down. Noticing the yellow dust has wiped his mother's memory of the trauma, he warns a fellow patient to avoid the mountain after seeing news reports of a fire there. The patient mentions spotting someone resembling his father, Suan, on Inwang Mountain, leaving him to wonder if the Rakshasa is somehow linked to his father's disappearance. A sudden, haunting vision rips through his mind, causing him to cough up blood as he realizes the cycle of the abyss is tightening its grip on him. As a shadowy creature drags a victim away, he realizes the Rakshasa's connection is physically destroying his own body. Confused and drenched in sweat, he struggles to separate his own memories from the trauma of his powers, only to be startled by a voice calling his name. When a man in the hospital asks why he looks so pale, he forces a calm facade, reassuring him that he is simply adjusting to the demands of his duties. Later, back at the office, a colleague confronts him, aggressively demanding to know where he disappeared to the previous day. While the coworker mocks his retreat, he apologizes, desperate to keep his cover as a simple civil servant. A woman in a turtleneck intervenes, claiming she sent him home because he looked ill, leaving the rest of the room shocked by her sudden revelation. She pivots immediately from shielding him to berating her colleague for poor work performance, declaring that she must leave at once to handle a level 2 threat. As a tense silence falls over the office, a voice cuts through the air, demanding that everyone prioritize the unfolding crisis over their petty questions. Deep in the forest, a girl apologizes for their earlier conflict, but he stands his ground, insisting he has returned because he is finally ready to fight. A figure emerges from the fog, and as the team prepares to fight, the creature charges to restart the cycle of predation. A pale creature charges, prompting a warning that these level 2 entities are more dangerous than those that wiped out the Inwang Mountain team. Han Maru recognizes the entity from his previous encounter, though the others present remain convinced that the elite Soul Headquarters squad already neutralized the threat. Desperate to avoid admitting he was abandoned, he panics while struggling to reconcile his own harrowing experience with the creature's current erratic behavior. The beast begins rubbing its armpits in a grotesque, baffling display, forcing him to order his companions to retreat so he can engage the monster alone. His allies scoff at the idea of a level 1 user challenging such a high-tier threat, yet he stands his ground, driven by a desperate need to prove his worth. He triggers the Mirror Rakshasa's power, channeling a stolen technique to prove how much he has evolved. Toxic green gas erupts from the monster, identifying it as the source of the foul stench, and he lunges directly into the smog to retaliate. Fighting through the overwhelming nausea caused by the chemical-like odor, he swings at the creature while his teammates recoil in disgust. As a companion stumbles, overcome by the fumes, he shouts for her to stay alert, fearing that his failure to intervene will result in the entire team's death. The physical toll of his powers mounts, but he pushes his speed to the absolute limit, determined to turn the tide of the skirmish. He pours his strength into a final blow, slamming the monster into the earth until it collapses. Panting and drenched in sweat, he grins in triumph, savoring the victory he has craved throughout this grueling ordeal. By a nearby rocky stream, his teammates slowly recover, though he complains bitterly about the stinging irritation in his eyes from the lingering chemical residue. He explains that his gluttony power allows him to absorb the abilities of the Rakshasas he devours, which is how he successfully mirrored the monster's techniques. When a companion mocks the absurdity of the creature's armpit smell ability, the group finally breaks into laughter, providing a brief reprieve from the tension. Though he feels self-conscious about his strange new power, his ally praises his sudden growth, confirming that his actions made the difference between life and death. The woman leans in close, her intensity unnerving Maru until he blushes in sudden embarrassment. She voices her disgust at his need to consume Rakshasa flesh, a grim necessity for his powers that makes him recoil in shame. His companions urge him to rest while they monitor the yellow dust levels, leaving him to collapse, utterly exhausted in the forest. Humiliation washes over him as he reflects on his past failures, and he covers his flushed face while lamenting a lost opportunity to prove his worth. A mysterious man in a suit approaches the group, forcing Maru to look up and question his sudden presence. The stranger confronts him about the Inwang Mountain incident, mocking his level 1 status and forcing a tentative, guarded response. With a smile masking hidden intent, the man offers to scout him for the Soul Headquarters. Maru asks why he was chosen, nervous that he knows too much about the elite team's work. Dismissing his modesty, the recruiter claims he can recognize true potential, though Maru remains deeply skeptical of his own value. Elsewhere, a woman confronts the recruiter for missing a scheduled meeting, but he remains preoccupied with his new interest in the recruit. She suspects he is discussing his son Eden, yet the recruiter insists his focus lies entirely on someone else. Suspecting Maru is linked to the recent high-level Rakshasa appearance, he orders his team to begin monitoring Gangwa Island. Deep within the secret facility, a stone figure remains motionless, guarding the abyss. Back at the Ganwa headquarters, Maru sits at his desk, feeling smug and excited by the prospect of a potential transfer. Despite his underlying fears, the pride of being acknowledged by the top elites consumes his thoughts. A colleague notices his smirk and taunts him, claiming he only likes the office because he is too incompetent to make it at headquarters. He bristles at the jab, snapping back with a sharp retort that silences the office and leaves his tormentor visibly stunned. The room devolves into a cacophony of shouting and disbelief as Maru refuses to back down from the escalating hostility. Exhaustion washes over him amidst the relentless jeering, leaving him desperate to distance himself from his petty, bickering peers. Young Yoon suddenly steps in to silence the room, commending his recent growth while he shifts uncomfortably under her unexpected praise. Still, the stifling atmosphere grates on his nerves, and he burns with the urge to abandon this scrutiny for a fresh start. Finding himself increasingly isolated, he contemplates reaching out to Eldu to finalize his escape to the Seoul branch. Before he can act, a level 2 alert blares through the station, compelling him to seize this chance to prove his competence once and for all. He's paired with a nervous newcomer for the field operation, though he finds the prospect of working alongside such an amateur utterly tedious. As they trek through the dense forest, Maru struggles to maintain his patience while his companion oscillates between manic energy and pure dread. He pushes forward, determined to resolve this mission with lethal efficiency so he can finally put in his request to the director. The trail leads them to a secluded house bleeding yellow dust, and Maru advances toward the source of the corruption without hesitation. Stepping into the thick, swirling haze inside, he signals his partner to stay sharp and keep his senses locked on the threat. The rookie tries to hold him back when they encounter a reinforced door, fearing what might be waiting on the other side. Ignoring the warning, Maru removes his gloves and channels his strength to smash through the barrier. A violent discharge of energy instantly seals them within a suffocating, smoke-filled void, their screams muffled by the sudden surge of the abyss. The men in yellow jackets recoil, their initial confidence evaporating as they confront the mist-shrouded door. A lone figure hunches in the dust while they struggle with the barrier, frustrated that it remains sealed, despite appearing fragile. A sudden warning halts them, identifying the dust as level 7 and signaling a Rakshasa far more dangerous than any threat encountered on Ganhwa Island. One recruit feels the thrill of the challenge, forcing his companion to demand they retreat and report to headquarters. Their escape attempt fails as the door refuses to budge, leaving them ensnared in a cycle of predation where the rulemaker traps those who try to break them. Finding the exit sealed, they realize the Rakshasa is responsible just as a looming shadow begins to dominate the cramped space. Trapped alongside a Rakshasa-obsessed psycho and a level 7 entity, the man realizes he is caught in an impossible scenario. An ancient face emerges from the gloom, mocking them by muttering "loner" as it reveals its true form. Even after breaking his fingers in the frantic struggle, the man finds the door completely undamaged and wonders what inexplicable material holds it together. He swings a chair against the wall in a violent rage, only to find the room itself unnaturally sturdy, reinforcing his belief that the loner Rakshasa has imprisoned them. Thrown against the wall and disarmed, he feels his panic spike as hours pass and the fear sets in that the office has completely abandoned them. 2 hours of isolation curdle his anxiety into bitter resentment toward the outside world, setting the stage for a desperate confrontation at the Ganhwa Yellow Dust Countermeasures headquarters. Inside the office, the staff scrambles in a frantic rush to meet deadlines, shouting over errors and missing files. Maru forces the data through, triggering a pulse of blue light as the urgent files are finally delivered. With the task complete, the group exhales in relief, sharing a quiet moment of respite. This calm shatters upon the realization that 2 rookies have been missing for 3 hours, leaving the team leader frustrated. Yosok and his companion move to investigate the disappearance, joined by a woman who senses that something is fundamentally wrong. As they prepare to depart for the hazardous site, one member hesitantly pleads for more time, delaying the mission. They discover the missing men collapsed and terrified, having barely escaped a room where a door now threatens to seal them in. Standing before the ominous green door, the group confirms the Rakshasa is contained inside before thick smoke forces a retreat. A woman draws a red blade, unleashing a strike against the barrier to breach the threat. The strike leaves the group stunned, prompting another woman to step forward to deploy her own specialized abilities. She reveals a dark parasitic mark on her arm and manifests a spider Rakshasa to infiltrate the room through the cracks. Despite her success, the creature struggles to enter the small opening, leaving others unsettled by her affection for the summon. The team questions Yosef's lack of combat utility and pressures Maru to use the gluttony power he took from the mirror Rakshasa, but the distance renders his ability ineffective. Trapped and desperate, they call for help, but Yibok suddenly appears. Yibok explains his arrival, stating he realized no one else was coming back to save them. The team stares in disbelief as Yibok enters, prompting one member to press an ear against the door to monitor the silence within. Ji-won urges him to take action, but he simply pins a man to the floor, leaving the rest of the group to watch in stunned stillness. They observe the peculiar display, wondering if the man is merely sleeping, as no one has ever witnessed Yibok manifest his power before. Ji-won suggests finding an alternative exit, yet the group spirals into a heated argument over whether they should continue waiting for their missing team leader. Panic sets in as one man voices his dread about lingering with the entity, while the others remain trapped in the dusty, shrinking room under the watchful gaze of a girl. Noticing Chaina's unnatural silence, the man wonders why the Rakshasa remains so motionless, feeling that this predator's sudden restraint is a dangerous omen. The walls begin to contract inward, forcing Maru to realize that the loner Rakshasa is tightening its predatory grip on them. The creature orders the house to dissolve into nothingness, seeking to eliminate all obstacles until only it remains as the sole survivor. As the stone monster lets out a piercing scream, the Rakshasa vanishes into the shadows, perfectly embodying the cruel cycle of predation within the abyss. Maru realizes they will be crushed if they fail to strike now. and he loses his composure as a violent blast of energy erupts. Amidst the chaos, his mind flashes back 4 years to a simple day in the garden where his family once lived in total peace. Chana arrives at that same home to a warm welcome from her grandmother and the young boy, who eagerly invites her inside. They spend a quiet, peaceful night together, making promises to reunite every university break, blissfully unaware of the ruin to come. Lying on the floor, Maru dwells on these memories, yet he forcefully rejects the image of the drawing that depicts his former life. The memory of the girl holding that sketch haunts him, as the faded portrait of his family now exists only as a painful, distant phantom. King Chana cries, "No!" and strikes the barrier with her red blade to break it. Her body falters as the weapon leeches her blood for power, leaving her to grapple with the shadowy entity even as it tightens its grip on her throat. Ignoring a companion's frantic warning, she channels her remaining strength into one final explosive leap. The resulting impact hurls a figure through the ceiling, the sudden force shattering the unnatural phenomenon instantly. Mara rushes to the floor, finding Chana unconscious and scrambling to check for a pulse. He realizes this is her grandmother's home, the site where she lost her family to a Rakshasa and first awakened her own combat abilities. A sudden clarity settles over him as he understands why she remains tethered to this place. Feeling a wave of relief that the structure still stands. With the walls threatening to collapse, they prepare to evacuate, Maru hardening his resolve to hunt the monster and unearth the truth. Elsewhere, a man hacks wildly at the encroaching walls in a fit of frustration until he and his companions slump over, utterly spent. As they scramble to shift positions in the suffocating dark, Chana steps forward to take command of the situation. She confesses that she keeps this house preserved, waiting for the specific Rakshasa that slaughtered her family to return to the scene of its crime. Her hands tremble as she speaks, and a demonic entity emerges from the shadows to answer her. Maru watches the figure emerge from the dust, struck by how the Rakshasa moves with an intelligent, calculated purpose rather than mindless violence. He senses the lingering threat as the entity manifests, fully aware that it will rise to the surface again once the Rakshasa surge begins. Chana presses a blade to a man's throat, demanding to know why he wastes his ability on the lackluster Ganwa team. He shrugs, admitting he only cares about the salary, leading her to correctly predict he will soon transfer to the Seoul headquarters for better pay. She mentions spotting him in the forest before, and despite his flustered denials, she urges him to pursue the higher-paying position. As she explains her motive, the ground trembles and they flee, shouting, "What is that?" They sprint toward the hallway, though Mora remains frustrated that the deafening roar of the earthquake drowned out the rest of her confession. The team huddles in the dark, anxiously waiting for their leader, and fearing he might have taken a detour from Busan. Maru keeps watch over the unconscious Ibak, his stress mounting as the officer remains dead to the world while the danger tightens its grip. Abruptly, the situation turns lethal as a man nearby begins to dissolve, his face hideously consumed by supernatural energy. He gasps that he used his mold spore ability to strike, a technique that requires a slow activation but proves fatal upon impact. His teammates apologize for misjudging his silence, but Maru cuts them off, shouting for everyone to stop talking and watch the approaching shadows. A swarm of gaunt, pale figures tears through the walls, screaming that the protagonist is a loner as they surround the group. Maru panics, realizing they are outnumbered by a pack of level 7 ghosts instead of a single recluse. As the horde closes in, one teammate screams, demanding to know who their true adversary is. The group races for the onslaught of emaciated spectral figures surging out from the darkness. A man prepares to detail their dire situation while Chana urgently orders Yosuk to shield the team. Maru triggers his zero presence ability, casting a golden barrier to encase his allies. Chana shouts, "Yah!" and lunges to carve through the monsters with her blade. A gaunt, monk-like figure leaps through the dust, drawing a gasp of shock from a nearby fighter. Maru kicks the creature's face, but another bites him, causing him to scream. Withered hands emerge from the gloom, forcing Maru into a struggle against his foe. Panicked, a teammate shouts that the ceiling is collapsing, but Maru invokes the mirror ability to stabilize the structure. Maintaining the barrier through mounting pain, Maru receives a nervous thumbs up from a teammate. A wounded man remains paralyzed, as a decapitated head spins through the air, severed in the chaos. Subduing his opponent, Maru bellows a desperate warning to his allies as his own wounds begin to fester. Despite a creature sinking its teeth into his shoulder, he fights back as beams of light pierce the swarm. A lethal blow strikes a giant spider just as a sharp claw descends toward Maru. Focusing through his forehead implants, the team splits up, with Eden moving to reinforce Chana. While Chana slashes through the front line, an ally obliterates another monster with a powerful energy blast. They unleash a combined strike against the barrier, leaving the observers to cower and laugh in hysterical fear. Peering into the room, they realize the endless stream of Rakshasas is pouring from the singular source. Maru ignores the shouting and screams, "Let me go in the room right now!" Fighting through the shifting shadows, the team narrowly avoids lethal strikes as the chaos intensifies. Inside the room, Maru freezes as he discovers a group of mysterious, indistinct figures waiting in the haze. Shouting at his opponent, Maru accuses him of cowardice for hiding behind clones before preparing to unleash his power. As an object thuds nearby, he is struck while screaming, "Just stay in the room." Maru manipulates floating skulls before lunging through a portal, gasping in pain as his allies watch the desperate struggle. When a trapdoor opens, they scream for him to run, but he is suddenly overwhelmed by a violent surge of energy. The two men grapple, but Maru is slammed to the ground and both collapse as they struggle to catch their breath. Gathering in the blood-stained hallway, the survivors watch as the girls praise Maru for his impressive mirror technique. Young-yoon gazes ahead, and later, the trio sits together to share a meal at home. Looking at her in surprise, Maru laments that he can no longer use his mirror ability now that the Rakshasas are dead. He prepares to act against a fallen figure, though he is momentarily distracted by the distress of others, while the beating continues on the floor. Reflecting quietly, he realizes he can still utilize the remaining smoke in the house to fuel his next move. A woman firmly stops him, and they share a moment of gratitude in the sunlight as he recalls a fading memory of his family. Later, a man arrives at the Ganwado headquarters with bread, only to find the office entirely empty and express his confusion. He checks the night duty room, unlocks the door, and answers a call from the director to ask why he is being contacted. After the call, the man in the floral shirt smirks while discussing why Maru declined to transfer to the headquarters. He wonders if Maru has finally found his place with the Ganwa team. But a sudden, violent energy beam cuts through the air, forcing him to scramble for cover. 7 hours earlier, Maru trudges toward work, his body aching with profound exhaustion from the recent battle. A man in a suit pulls up in a car, but when Maru asks for a ride, he says, "Get lost." Watching his colleagues mock his personality while admiring their own fancy vehicles, Maru feels a sharp pang of jealousy toward the easy camaraderie shared by others like Eden. Back at the office, the team greets him with unexpected warmth, congratulating him on using gluttony to consume the level 7 Rakshasa. This rare praise for his growth leaves him feeling genuinely acknowledged for the first time in his life. The mood shifts abruptly when a coworker slams the table, demanding they get back to work and leaving Maru to wonder if the man's constant animosity is personal. Later, Chana approaches him on the rooftop to talk, a quiet moment that acknowledges their shared history. She leans in closer, her intensity pressing him for answers until he is left stunned by her sudden, intimate turn. Questioning his status as a mere level 1, she points out that his rapid healing and consumption abilities are far too advanced, sparking a heated argument in the park. He begins to doubt his own identification of the gluttony Rakshasa, leading her to press him on whether he faced other entities long before joining the task force. Disturbed by the possibility that his history is far more complex than he remembers, he struggles to piece together his fragmented memories. A creature emerges from the shadows, shattering his focus and causing him to hallucinate its presence. Though she suspects his history hides deeper secrets, the tension breaks when others arrive and crudely accuse them of dating on the job. He frantically denies the claim, insisting that the constant threat of the Rakshasa makes romance a death sentence, even as he doubles over from a painful internal injury. The man in the floral shirt mocks him for being dumped, then lashes out with a kick, feeling conflicted by his own sudden violence. Afterward, she gathers the team to monitor the yellow dust warnings before their shift concludes, knowing the cycle of predation demands constant vigilance. Maru hikes through the forest, feeling awkward and frustrated by the earlier misunderstanding with Thokman. Pausing to check a sensor device, he realizes he cannot afford any distractions because the looming danger of death remains the only rule that matters. He contemplates the total lack of information on their enemies, wishing he could communicate with the monsters to better understand how to survive. A phone rings and Yosuke screams a desperate warning that a Rakshasa has struck Daeokmin in Zone 3 and is currently closing in on their position. Nam Yosuke's frantic voice crackles through the receiver, leaving the woman reeling in disbelief at the report. She struggles to process how a creature could overpower Go Daeokmin, a veteran holding a level 10 ability. Maru and his companion ready their weapons, the weight of facing a monster capable of downing such a powerhouse settling in. A skeletal figure with a red circle on its face emerges from the haze and looms over them. The entity surprises them by speaking in a clear, human tone, casually inviting them to talk. When it requests an audience with their leader, Maru freezes, unnerved by the creature's ability to hold a conversation. Despite its facade of seeking peace, the monster's clawed hand twitches with a sudden, predatory intent. The wounded officer screams through the phone for Maru to cease all contact and attack the beast at once. Ignoring the warning to gain intelligence, Maru demands to know its origin, only to be told it hails from Naraka, the very floor of hell. It claims Naraka is a prison for those who committed grave sins, chillingly revealing that all Rakshasa were once human. The implication that his previous meals were actually people hits Maru with such force that he collapses and retches in horror. As the creature poses a question, his companion yanks him back, reminding him that this monster is the one who crippled Daeokmin and Yosuke. She charges, but the entity ignores her plea to stop and blasts her with energy. Taunting her about the futility of seeking vengeance, the monster strikes, wounding her before she can recover. A faceless monster taunts the group, while Chana readies her blade to fight. Suddenly, an invisible strike pierces Chana's chest, leaving her vulnerable as dark entities emerge from the shadows. Maru confronts the creature, but his ally is struck from behind, despite his desperate warning to flee. He discovers his ally is fatally wounded, his hand falling limp as the cycle of predation claims another victim. Chana collapses, suffering under the monster's psychological taunts that she failed to protect those she loved. A colleague shouts for her, horrified to find her struck by an attack they could not perceive. The entity mocks their confusion, claiming these psychological assaults are unavoidable as long as they harbor human emotions. Maru refuses to be tormented and lunges to strike the creature. He strikes the monster's head, but it taunts him about his romantic rejection as he fights back. Without warning, his body locks up and he coughs blood as an invisible force pierces his own heart. He struggles to keep his emotions in check, mourning the colleague he thought he knew as she lies wounded nearby. The monster claims emotions are a weakness, while Maru realizes his vulnerability stems from his lingering humanity. Pinned down, he learns that even a level 10 team leader cannot withstand such mental assaults. The entity prepares to finish them, leaving the fallen officials to wonder if anyone cold-blooded enough to resist can save them. The entity strains, his body convulsing as he forces a surge of dark power to the surface. He adjusts his sleeves, looking down at the fallen man to mockingly demand why a level 1 is lying on the ground. Maru laughs, claiming the attack only tickles because his vocal cords are too resilient to break so easily. Eden reels from the insult, his anger flaring as he and his ally face the mocking creature amidst a backdrop of flames. Ministry agents arrive, warning each other that the enemy relies on telepathy and psychological manipulation to break his targets. Disregarding the warning, an agent prepares for battle, though he grows visibly irritated by the creature's speech patterns, which mimic those of a rakshasa. He stretches his muscles and lunges with a gloved hand to pierce the enemy, but stumbles as he loses his footing in the dust. The creature taunts him, claiming he will never earn his father's approval as it watches him struggle. Sneering, the monster questions if he is as hollow as it is, while mocking the tragic suicide of the agent's mother. Haunted by the revelation, he remembers a dark room where he once found a hanging body, realizing the weight of the tragedy he carries. He stares in disbelief, realizing he had misjudged his opponent as a pampered rich kid, unaware of such a painful history. Fearing Eden cannot withstand the psychological onslaught, the agent decides to intervene, though he is startled by the creature's sudden shift. Laughing at the attempt to blame his mother for his weakness, the monster prompts the agent to lunge forward, shouting that only the strong survive. The monster mocks his effort, declaring that he will not survive because he is weaker than Maru. It strikes, its blade finding its mark as the cycle of predation tightens its grip. Wounded, the agent realizes the pattern, seeing that the monster used a psychological lure to mask the strike of its tongue blade. She narrowly dodges a strike, but a blade pierces her arm, causing the creature to shriek in agony as it lunges. Scanning the dusty surroundings with searching eyes, Shanna wonders who among them will be the one to finally kill her. He remains dazed after being told he is weaker than Maru, unaware that Maru is watching him with a smug, knowing smile. A teammate tells him to ignore the insult while a man is beaten nearby for admitting his opponent is stronger. The man flinches at the sensation, only for his attacker to condescendingly dismiss him as a mere level 1 simpleton. They encounter the masked Rakshasa in the storm, but they cannot close the distance because the creature's tongue blade remains too dangerous to approach. Sheena prepares to attack while the enemy falls silent, yet she gasps in shock upon realizing her wounds are not healing, as the Rakshasa's psychological assault suppresses her recovery. Realizing they must kill the monster to break the curse, Maru charges toward the shadow to force an opening. As the creature lunges, he yells for Eden to protect Shanna, intending to use his newfound power to end the fight. His teammate warns that the power only works in confined spaces, while Shanna begs for someone to save Maru. Maru asks if it is his turn before fleeing into the woods as the creature pursues him with a whip. Finding no shelter in the trees, he spots a car and runs toward it as a man inside frantically calls him over. He curses the waste of the vehicle while jumping a fence, only to be ambushed by arrows as a figure descends from above. The creature shrieks while charging, forcing him to dive into the car just as a powerful impact strikes him. He slams the door shut, cutting off his own shout as he is jolted by the sudden movement. Looking back with intense eyes and a stitched cheek, he prepares to strike back at the source of the cycle. The entity strikes with its tongue, but Maru lunges through the attack to pin it by the throat. Behind him, a creature emerges from the shadows, commanding a horde of identical students to swarm the area and tear at the struggling man. A vampire-like force surges forward and bites the monster's neck to finish it off. A spectral hand reaches toward Maru's hiding spot, while a frantic colleague punches the car window, terrified that he will not emerge from the wreckage. Searching the debris, the colleague finds only a woman standing amidst the ruin, severely wounded and bleeding from a deep chest injury. The assailant taunts them to settle the conflict with talk, then turns his mockery toward Maru, asking if he is as violent and broken as his father. Maru trembles in dread as the shattered figure chokes a helpless boy, taunting him with the agonizing memory of his father's sudden disappearance. Maru shouts for the attacker to stop, but is met with a strike that shatters his eye. He yells to drown out the voices while the antagonist grins. Stop playing around with people's emotions. As Maru is restrained and beaten, the woman screams in distress, throwing herself forward to shield the wounded survivor from further assault. The intensity of the confrontation wanes as she notices the yellow dust beginning to fade, forcing the enemy to retreat with his companion. She demands they pull Maru out, but her companion objects. It's too late, he must already be dead. Cursing Moro for his reckless, self-destructive fighting style, she inspects the bloody evidence he left behind in the dust. Left behind in the silence, Moro drifts alone in the dark void, sinking into the abyss and curling into a fetal position as he succumbs to the relentless cycle of predation. Sinking into the dark void, he loses all sensation of his own body, drifting in complete, suffocating isolation. He wonders if he escaped the Rakshasa until a hollow-headed entity emerges from the shadows. The creature screams that the abyss is hunting him, forcing him to confront the dark purpose he has been trying to ignore. Cornered by this giant monster, he struggles to make sense of the entity's ominous, cryptic demands. When the beast commands him to wake up, a surge of intense agony tears through him, dropping him hard to the ground. A shadow creature pins him down with a violent impact, pinning him in place as his senses are overwhelmed by the pressure. The monster looms over him, mocking his fear while taunting him to recall exactly who it is. Sudden intense shock paralyzes him as glowing eyes pierce the darkness, locking onto his trembling form. Licking its lips with a guttural growl, the creature prepares to consume him, serving the insatiable demands of the endless cycle of predation. Flashes of a memory surface. His father, face twisted, grabbing him by the hair and insisting they must fight rather than run. The young boy asks why, only to be told that they must seize the Rakshas's unique ability, leading them both into the abyss. Snapping back to the present, he is ambushed from behind by the creature while he remains paralyzed by terror. He attempts to channel the remaining yellow dust for defense, but a vicious slash leaves him bleeding and broken on the earth. With the yellow dust finally vanishing, his ability to recover dissolves, leaving him completely exposed to the finishing blow. A woman in a yellow jacket frantically calls out to Maru, who lies bloodied and unresponsive, gripping his hand in a desperate search for a pulse as the shadow of the abyss looms. Her companion watches, frozen in horror, as Maru's wounds begin to knit together with a strange, unnatural yellow dust, marking him as something far more than human. Lying on the ground, Maru's eyes flicker open, struggling to remain conscious. He lets out a guttural scream, his body convulsing in a violent physical reaction as his companions realize the sheer intensity of his forced recovery. After the immediate danger passes, Maru falls into a dead faint on the grass, leaving the pair to stare at his prone form in a heavy, stunned silence. Frustrated by the lack of answers, one man demands the truth about Maru's identity, only to be struck down by a sudden, unseen force, leaving him coughing up blood. Maru shouts in confusion, reeling from the reflexive assault, while the man wonders if this surge of violence is the mark of the gluttony Rakshasa. As memories flood back, Maru realizes this hunger was never a recent acquisition. It was a curse forced upon him by his father during a traumatic childhood. His companion frantically checks his vitals, pleading for an explanation as Maru struggles to pull air into his lungs. Stepping between them, a woman urges the teen to let him rest, citing his recurring panic disorder, while demanding they keep these events strictly confidential. Exhausted, he paces toward her, though she eventually admits that despite her defensive posture, she harbors deep, lingering doubts of her own. Days later, Maru sits on a train, his commute heavy with exhaustion as he stares into the dark, wondering if he is truly becoming the very thing he hunts. He catches his reflection in the glass and recoils in horror, seeing a pair of sharp predatory fangs staring back at him from the pain. Maru finds his breath hitching when he spots Yosoke on the train, his hand flying to his chest as a wave of sudden, inexplicable distress washes over him. He attempts to reach out for guidance, but his coworker shuts him down with a rigid refusal, setting workplace boundaries that leave Maru stinging from the cold rejection. The tension only deepens when an unexpected call from the deceased Kim Wooju vibrates in his pocket, adding to his growing unease. Later, at a local izakaya, a man pours out his emotions while demanding that a member of the Jiang Mountain team be cast out. Maru slips inside to listen, nursing a drink, while he studies the stranger sitting beside his companion, desperate to decode the source of their internal friction. He confesses, "I'm having a hard time and don't want to be alone," blaming the team's internal feud. When it becomes clear that this is a case of one-sided bullying, a suggestion is made that he should simply burn the bridges, cause a scene, and walk away. Maru freezes as he learns that Yosoke was once the target of this cruelty, confirming that humans can be just as vicious as any Rakshasa. As shadowy figures linger in the periphery, Maru watches them and wonders if he harbors a similarly dangerous nature beneath his own skin. He grapples with the fragility of his humanity, terrified that he is slowly morphing into the very monsters he has sworn to hunt. Yosoke hauls an exhausted man toward Ruju's parents' shop, intending only to drop him off and vanish back into the night. Their quiet arrival is shattered by a sudden, violent confrontation that freezes them in their tracks. A muscular stranger lunges out of the gloom, slamming into Yosoke, with the clear intent of hunting him down. The fighter unleashes a heavy, bone-jarring strike, catching both men completely off guard and leaving them reeling. He kicks his opponent. "If you're going to transfer, do it peacefully," and defends burning the office. Maru steps into the fray, identifying himself as part of the Ganhwa team and challenging the assailant to explain his actions. The man sneers at them as a bunch of defectives before delivering a punch that sends Maru flying across the room. Disgusted by their perceived weakness, the attacker continues his savage assault, leaving them battered and broken on the floor. Pinning him to the ground, the red-haired assailant reveals he spent months hunting Maru to retaliate for his report to headquarters, mocking him for hiding among the rejects of the Ganhwa team. The attacker strikes as his accomplices grin, forcing Maru to fight for focus as his power flickers. Suddenly, a tattooed fighter intervenes, slamming a punch into the redhead before following up with a high kick that demands to know their identity. Recognizing the newcomer as another member of the Ganhwa unit, the group of assailants ignores the warning and launches a fresh, coordinated strike. In the chaos, Maru catches a glimpse of Chana on the subway, his surprise mirrored in her eyes as their paths cross unexpectedly. Struggling to reconcile their conflicting behavior, he turns his focus toward Yosoke, who remains broken and sprawled on the floor. The attackers block Yosoke's path, indifferent to the cost, as they declare they have unfinished business with their former co-worker to settle. Stepping forward, a woman challenges the group regarding the disciplinary repercussions of attacking fellow civil servants, then strikes one of them down to assert control. Rage consumes the red-haired man, who decides that since they are already facing consequences, they might as well finish the job, and he leads his allies in a desperate charge. They shout for Eden and order Maru to stay still, warning, "You shouldn't transform, be careful." As the team begins to ferry their wounded to safety, the attackers unleash a final blinding assault, threatening to consume everyone in the vicinity. The red-haired officer takes a hit, then retaliates with a baton swing and a kick to regain control. A shadowed figure orders his opponent to cease before he is permanently crippled, yet the violence only intensifies as the red-haired fighter is kicked squarely in the face. The Gaiyang team leader steps into the chaos to ask why they are attacking civilians, but he is swiftly cut off by a woman from the Ganhwa team who demands he answer for the assault on her comrade. While one man pauses to tie the fallen team leader's shoelace, a sudden punch sends the woman crashing into a table, prompting the team leader to demand an explanation for the violence against his subordinates. This confused attacker watches in silence as a man in a suit steps forward to greet Nam, marking an abrupt and unsettling shift in the tension. Han stares at the unconscious girl, his body trembling as his eyes flare with a sickly yellow light and sharp fangs cut through his gums, signaling that his gluttony power is spiraling out of control. A teammate screams for him to stop, but Han ignores the plea, lunging with unnatural speed to dodge a projectile before launching a vicious counterstrike. He lunges with predatory intensity, leaving the onlookers frozen as they witness his transformation. As a teammate kneels in distress, the leader rushes to check on Channa, who scolds him for recklessly leaking yellow dust, despite his apology for losing his temper at the sight of her injury. Nearby, the man laughs hysterically at the discovery that Han can release yellow dust without being a true Rakshasa, openly questioning what he really is. Although the man invites him to switch sides, Han rejects the offer with disgust, repulsed by their trash-like personalities. Yet the man only mocks him, vowing that he will not be allowed to escape so easily. The Ganhwa team stands their ground against the Gaiyang members, exhausted by the relentless, repetitive cycle of hunting demons. Maru keeps his cool while the Gaiyang squad closes in, their erratic behavior radiating a clear, unhinged hostility. Inside the restaurant, the Gaiyang leader sets a formal condition. A 3-on-3 brawl will determine Nam Yosok's fate. One jittery fighter promises to drop the grudge over Nam's past if they win, while others growl threats regarding Maru's concealed yellow dust abilities. The leader demands they stay quiet to avoid causing a public spectacle, though his own allies bristle with resentment, eyeing him for a potential mutiny. His opponent suggests a friendly spar, where surrender settles the score, strictly prohibiting lethal force as they view killing as beneath them. Ignoring the provocation, Maru readies his stance and whispers to his teammates, ordering them to stall for time to secure a tactical edge. The man identifies the opponent as a Temple Rakshasa user who breaks his own body to fight, prompting a volunteer to step forward. Unfazed by the gruesome transformation, Maru merely snaps his fingers and settles into a focused, ready posture. The rival claims he can control broken branches, binding his target in red tendrils while mocking the man's inability to fight back. The antagonist tastes a captive's shoulder, mocking his inability to use abilities and threatening to break him to force a surrender. The blue-haired fighter lunges to choke his opponent, warning that he will break the man's fifth vertebrae. As the victim's spine fractures under the pressure, the attacker forces him to stand and stay conscious. He threatens to finish the job by shattering the man's neck, tightening his grip to push the suffering toward a breaking point. Though the woman intervenes in a desperate bid to stop the violence, the opposing group celebrates their victory as the round concludes. Maru stands before his two companions, who criticize his failure to stall, though he argues his actions bought them necessary time. A woman steps forward, identified as an Iron Rakshasa user who weaponizes blood, and she is urged to face the next challenge. Just as Maru prepares for combat, a bone knife Rakshasa user suddenly turns and stabs a comrade in the stomach. The woman lunges with daggers and spits blood in frustration while blocking her opponent's spear. Pinned by red claws and stabbed through the chest, she struggles to keep going. She retaliates with a glowing slash and a powerful kick, launching a relentless assault with her dual blades. Attempting to strike lightly, the fighter is interrupted when a spider-like entity viciously impales Officer Park, turning the sparring match into a slaughter. The woman explains she has only ever killed Rakshasa, never humans, as she struggles to restrain the lethal power she just unleashed. An observer realizes the Ganhwa team is far stronger than expected, marking Maru as the final target. The antagonist reveals the competition is merely a test for Maru, raising the stakes to 3 points for the final round. Refusing to back down from the escalating rules of the Abyss, Maru challenges his own team leader to the duel. Shock ripples through the team at this escalation, though the judge only smirks, savoring his tactical advantage. Deep within Maru, the gluttony Rakshasa screams, a demonic presence clawing at the walls of his consciousness. As he bleeds, his companions recoil, questioning his humanity, while the Abyss tightens its grip on the rulebreaker. Maru stares into the swirling red void, steeling himself for the inevitable clash. The judge mocks his defiance, offering to pit his elite squad against him instead of engaging directly. He drags a struggling boy away, cold-bloodedly assuring him that his parents have already abandoned him. Forcing Wuju forward, the judge ignores Channa's desperate pleas, dangling a promised transfer as bait. Maru confronts his tormentor, bewildered as the stolen power of the language Rakshasa surges to the surface. Cruel, disembodied voices echo in his mind, dissecting his past and mocking his status as a pathetic outsider. He realizes he is witnessing Wuju's buried trauma as the younger man is slowly consumed by the entity's malice. Blood drips from Maru's lips while he fights the internal blade of the Rakshasa's influence, struggling to suppress his own urge to slaughter. The judge taunts Wuju about the relief he felt when Yosake was bullied instead of him, then abruptly impales him. Rushing to the fallen man, Maru can only watch as Wuju offers a final, weak apology. A wave of acidic slime erupts as the judge unleashes the deadly venom Rakshasa, drowning Maru in the corrosive substance. Chana shouts in alarm, but the judge silences her, insisting the match must reach its conclusion. As the acid dissolves his insides, the judge revels in the cycle of agony, demanding a total surrender. Maru refuses to yield, so the judge looms over him, goading him to reveal his true power to end the game by the rules. Defying the constraints, a bloodied Maru screams with fangs bared, determined to crush the judge and shatter the game by force. The man in the suit adjusts his tie to prepare for the confrontation, leaving Maru to endure the pressure. Battered and pinned to the floor by his attackers, Maru gasps in agony as the beating continues. The Gaiyang team leader exerts a level 9 Gravi Rakshasa ability, pressing the entire team into the ground with immense force. Caught off guard by Maru's rapid recovery, the antagonist decides to intensify the gravity to test his physical limits. As Maru vomits blood, his captor notes with interest that the extreme physical pain is forcing his body to produce yellow dust. The captor wonders aloud about the nature of the Rakshasa that granted such power, while Maru struggles to suppress the entity's dark presence. Forcing himself to move, Maru realizes he must harness the language Rakshasa's power to survive this encounter. The attacker grows frustrated by Maru's mental resilience, unable to break his spirit despite the relentless pressure, labeling him a psychopath. The antagonist pulls out a knife, intent on dissecting him to locate the source of the dust. Threatening to cut his throat, the man lunges, but Maru snaps the blade in half with his bare hand. Maru shouts a command and retaliates by pinning his opponent to the floor with gravity increased to 20. Maru lands a blow to his opponent's neck, leaving him defeated on the ground as his knife shatters. Struggling to remain conscious, Maru calls out to Chana as he fights to overcome the lingering gravity. He yanks on the pulsating limb of a shadowy entity, declaring that the disturbance is finally over. The battle pauses, but Maru remains desperate, as the residual gravity threatens to make him pass out. Gunshots ring out and the man in the suit decides to end their session for the day. 3 figures sink into dark, murky water as Maru collapses, his teammate reaching out to touch the strange black substance spreading across the floor. A voice expresses relief and frustration at the arrival of reinforcements, triggering a sudden lunge and a coordinated charge from 2 muscular men. Fearing the situation is doomed, one person taps another on the back, sending a silent message to a phone to handle the unfolding incident. Maru stands before the space Kalgaksu shop, suddenly suffering a supernatural transformation as black liquid pours from his eyes. While 3 individuals drift into the dark depths of the water, Maru awakens in a suffocating, strange environment, confused and distressed. He finds himself restrained by shadowy, puppet-like strings, while a man in a suit stands nearby, contemplating his next move with the blade. Alienated and unable to sense the world, Maru crouches in the dark, clutching his head in physical and emotional agony. As he collapses in a state of physical ruin, a menacing figure looms over him, radiating an intimidating, oppressive aura. He screams in panic as he loses all sensation, struggling against the man strangling him while dark shadows overwhelm the room. The man in the floral shirt stares at his own bloody chest, unfazed, as a figure harvests eyes and grabs another person by the face. Dark energy engulfs the victim, causing him to recoil in sudden, sharp pain as blood sprays from his face. The floral-shirted man confronts Chana and Eden, demanding to know why they kept Maru a secret from him. He sternly questions if they want to quit their service, but Chana apologizes and refuses to negotiate with the Gaiyang team leader. Convinced he can no longer let the situation slide, the leader decides the cycle of conflict demands a final accounting. 3 officials watch their captive through the glass, where he sits handcuffed and trembling as he awaits his fate. During the tense meeting, a woman announces that she and her associates will now take over the management of Maru. The room falls into a stunned silence, but she insists he is a volatile threat because he produces yellow dust like a Raksasa. She pivots to blame the Gaiyang team for the recent violence, warning the others that those men are fundamentally malicious. Turning to the staff, she demands to know if it is truly their responsibility to keep that psychopathic team in check. While the surrounding officials react with immediate outrage, she remains composed, stating that her only concern is the war against the monsters. She claims the Gaiyang leader is a necessary evil, unlike Dokman, whom she accuses of hiding on Ganhwa to avoid his duties. Asserting that Maru is essential to their survival, she challenges the room to name who would take responsibility should he lose control. As the meeting adjourns, she orders Eden to remain behind, causing him to flinch in visible distress. Back at the station, Dokman and his team receive formal notice of a 3-month disciplinary suspension and a severe pay cut for the recent disaster. Dokman laments his lost salary, but is warned that any further mistakes will lead to his termination. The team realizes Oldu is far more dangerous than they imagined, fearing he will not hesitate to execute Maru if the boy slips into insanity. Eden confronts Eldu, expressing his bitter disappointment at the cold, clinical reception he received. Oldu orders him to sit, stating that Maru is no longer a normal Rakshasa user because he generates yellow dust. He warns that a human capable of producing this substance is essentially a Rakshasa, and may eventually become their greatest enemy. Ignoring the danger, Maru stumbles toward the entrance, clutching his government ID card with blood-stained fingers. He finally reaches the Ganghwa dormitory, only to find their shared living space in a state of absolute, chaotic neglect. A colleague informs Maru that they are living together now, a measure taken to keep him under constant surveillance and prevent further incidents. Demanding they stick together 24 hours a day, the man ignores Maru's shock, leaving him to struggle with the insanity of this new, forced proximity. Back at the Ganghwa headquarters, Maru walks through the office doors, feeling the weight of his superior's intense, watchful gaze. Yu Young-yoon warns him that any release of yellow dust within these walls will result in his immediate termination, while his coworkers whisper, terrified that even a simple sigh might trigger his transformation. They surround him and forcefully inspect his face and mouth to check for signs of stress, treating him less like a colleague and more like a dangerous beast. Shaken by the scrutiny, Maru retreats down the hallway, biting back his frustration as he forces himself to endure their cold suspicion. Nearby, a man watches Maru's reflection in the glass, internally concluding that he is no longer a human user but a threat that must be monitored as an enemy. Maru asks if he intends to keep nagging, but the man dismisses him, saying he does not care about his well-being. The tension breaks when a new recruit arrives, greeting Channa, before she immediately pulls Maru aside to inspect his eyes for any trace of yellow dust. She explains that the team is on their final warning and cannot afford another mistake without losing their protection, leaving Maru feeling deeply distressed by his status as a liability. Sitting alone in the quiet office, he realizes Go Datman is intentionally benching him to avoid any further legal or professional fallout. The silence is shattered when two men in pinstripe suits materialize in the room, prompting Maru to demand to know who they are. Without warning, one attacker lunges, slamming a punch into Maru before grabbing him by the collar and screaming for him to release his yellow dust. Panicking as he tries to maintain control, Maru is threatened with further violence, the man promising to smash his face if he refuses to comply. Maru kicks his assailant to the floor, but the second man steps forward, identifying them both as agents sent from the Seoul headquarters. Bleeding and visibly irritated, Maru demands to know if this is some kind of sick test, only to be told that one of his attackers is actually his fan. The fan in the suit approaches, shouting his excitement at meeting King Maru, but Maru only stares, bewildered by the man's intensity. These agents praise him for his ability to release yellow dust, claiming his power is highly impressive. Injured and tired, Maru accepts the title and declares himself the best, just as a fist looms toward his face. A long-haired figure orders them to listen, while elsewhere, a man struggles to force a malfunctioning meter to work in the woods. The man with glasses confesses his mistake, but Maru reassures him that the Ganhwa team is kind, prompting a sincere thank you. Dismissing the gratitude, they both soon freeze, confused by the sudden appearance of yellow dust they did not cause. Maru turns, annoyed, as a pale, multi-eyed creature emerges from the forest. The man with glasses panics, fearing the alarm is disabled, but Maru dismisses the threat as a mere level 1 Rakshasa. After being lauded as the best, he asserts his dominance by pinning the creature to the dirt with raw force. Maru bites the creature's neck to finish it, but the entity remains standing, kneeling in the dust. The boy applauds the strike, yet Maru stands stunned as he watches the creature collapse and then begin to shift. He watches in shock as the creature survives and evolves into a level 2 Rakshasa, its body mutating. Maru struggles to breathe, sensing the entity's power rising rapidly. A 6-dotted creature emerges from the mist, forcing the man with glasses to warn that it has reached level 5 strength. As the man with glasses flees, he screams for Maru to watch out, but the creature lunges. Reacting to the speed, Maru strikes, leaving his opponent screaming in agony under his energy. A spectral entity strikes, leaving the creature to scream as its exposed chest sustains a grievous wound. Maru panics, however, when he realizes the Rakshasa's fatal injuries are forcing its body to harden into a protective cocoon. As the creature's head splits open, a new, stronger form prepares to tear itself from the stone-like shell. Identifying the evolving threat, he braces himself for combat amidst the swirling, suffocating dust. He wonders if the entity will reach level 10, a possibility that defies comprehension. Recognizing the sheer scale of the danger, he decides his colleague must retreat to safety at once. He orders the officer to call for reinforcements, yet his colleague stubbornly refuses to abandon him to face a level 6 Rakshasa alone. Intimidating him with a sharp, bloodied smile, Maru claims he is far stronger than he looks because he's consumed his previous foes. He lunges forward, knowing that sustaining a truly fatal wound is the only way to trigger his own latent evolution. The Rakshasa counters with speed, leaving him choking on his own blood as he is thrown back. Collapsing as his ribs shatter, he realizes with frustration that he failed to trigger the transformation. He suspects his own rapid healing rate is actively preventing the creature's power from taking root within him. Desperate to force the process, he taunts the monster to hit him harder and unleash its energy. Ignoring the danger, he unleashes a torrent of green energy to push the confrontation to its limit. When the poison proves ineffective, he hammers his fists into the faceless entity to maintain relentless pressure. The fight turns visceral, with headbutts and punches spraying blood across the forest floor. In a final, desperate struggle, he viciously bites into the creature's neck, wounding it severely. He pauses to check on his colleague, who laments that his own cowardice has led to this tragic outcome. Realizing he cannot abandon his injured ally to the monster, Maru stands firm, knowing the Rakshasa will hunt them both down if he falters. Battered and bleeding, he realizes that survival hinges entirely on his own strength, since no reinforcements are coming. He faces the stone-skinned Rakshasa, calculating that it requires 3 more evolutions to reach its final form, and swears to eliminate it before that happens. Knowing he cannot allow the entity to hit level 10, he lunges to punch the creature, determined to tear into its flesh before it fully exits the cocoon. Deep within the darkness, the monster pulses with an ominous energy, signaling that the evolution process is still underway. He attempts to rip the mass apart to halt its growth, but his silhouette strikes him with a crushing blow. Coughing up blood, he collapses onto the forest floor, feeling the weight of his defeat and the severity of his injuries. As a featureless warrior looms over him, a strange, agonizing sense of triumph washes over him, signaling that his own evolution has finally been triggered. The monster seizes him by the head, slamming him down against the earth with overwhelming force. A strike follows, subduing him as the creature lands another blow. Enduring the searing pain, he offers a silent goodbye to his life before being hurled into the swirling dust. He goes flying through the air, shouting in denial as an explosion tears through the forest canopy. Red energy begins to crack his skin, and he gasps for air, reeling from the force of the attack that caught him from behind. Although a mysterious figure looms over him, he finds that his own evolution has granted him a sudden, sharp increase in speed. He lunges forward in a blur, only to find nothing but abandoned bags in the woods, as both the yellow dust and the Rakshasa abruptly vanish. Staring around in confusion, he is jolted when his phone vibrates, revealing the entity has shifted its location to the next district. The man on the other end asks if he saw the warning about the level 7 threat, then sternly commands him to stay home. Left alone in the forest after the call ends, he ignores the order, driven by a singular determination to track down and rescue his colleague. A shrill notification pierces the forest silence, snapping Maru out of his daze as he frantically scans the tree line. He lunges toward a nearby thicket, finding his colleague sprawled face down and motionless on the damp earth. Gazing at the blood-soaked uniform, Maru feels his pulse stall, paralyzed by the chilling possibility that this nightmare is final. He frantically shakes the officer, pleading for a sign of life or the activation of yellow dust, but the body remains chillingly still. Pulling the limp form close, he clutches the torn fabric for a heartbeat before rising to confront the encroaching shadows. The forest remains deathly silent, leaving his back exposed as he calculates the only path left to take. Miles away, China demands her team leader's location, her voice sharp with urgency as she closes in on the mountain. He battles through heavy traffic, shouting that the alert has surged to level 10 and ordering her to hold her position. Realizing the scale of the catastrophe, she cuts the connection, determined to confront the calamity before it claims more lives. Stuck in a gridlock, the leader watches helplessly as she sprints headlong toward the village to intercept the beast. She skids to a sudden halt, finding Maru standing amidst a thick veil of smoke, his hollow expression jarring her. He bellows at her to retreat, his voice cracking with a desperate need to keep her clear of the mounting threat. Refusing to back down, she grabs his arm and demands to know the status of the evolving monster lurking in the haze. An armored humanoid looms from the dust, its chitinous skin signaling the completion of its final evolution. Seeing the monstrosity, she grasps the toll the solitary fight has taken on him, yet he insists on finishing the cycle himself. He raises a splintered stake to strike, but she catches his wrist, only for him to declare with cold certainty that he has already consumed his prey. Maru realizes that sustaining fatal injuries allows him to evolve just like the Rakshasa, leaving his allies stunned by his chilling detachment. He rejects their assistance and drives a blade into his own heart to trigger the process. Fully prepared to sacrifice his humanity to survive, the blade strikes, leaving him gasping as his team collapses, forced to witness the cycle of predation that now defines his life. As the dust settles, the toll of his choices becomes clear, while the monster surges forward, perfectly mirroring his own self-destructive path. The creature attacks with speed, but Maru intercepts it, tearing through its flesh to seize power in his prison. He delivers a punch with a blank, blood-spattered face, even as a heavy blow to his own throat pushes his stability to the breaking point. He slams his opponent into the earth, burying it beneath the debris of their struggle. His body surges with newfound energy as he grapples with the armored beast, desperate to finally break the iron rule of the abyss. Moments later, he stands over the wreckage, gasping in raw frustration as the distant sound of the next incoming threat reaches his ears. His cold, vacant demeanor shocks his companions, who no longer recognize the man who originally arrived to answer their desperate plea. He continues the assault, his expressionless face startling them as he engages a giant to survive. Maru severs the creature's arm and delivers a final, explosive punch, feeding the cycle of predation to maintain his lethal edge. Energy blasts tear through the forest until Chana screams his name, forcing him to yank her away from the path of total destruction. Someone warns Chana that they cannot handle a level 10 threat, urging the team to retreat to avoid further casualties. The team leader questions who was lost, only to be shocked by Maru's presence, despite explicit orders to stay away. Acknowledging the weight of his actions, Maru watches as reports confirm a level 10 Rakshasa has manifested on the island. Jumak reports Incheon has dispatched personnel, while others recall the Sirak mountain loss 2 years ago. That past tragedy looms over the survivors, though Dokmim remains the team's steady anchor. A man emerges from the rubble, his anger mounting as he spots Maru charging toward the looming threat. Maru lunges into the fray, his reckless speed leaving his allies in a state of sheer disbelief. He engages the monster, trading heavy blows and suffering strikes. The combat escalates into a violent collision as the cycle of predation demands blood from both fighters. A mysterious creature ambushes Maru, tearing his arm away in a spray of gore. Determined to prevent further death, he fights through his injuries, refusing to remain a passive bystander. Maru triggers his quick recovery, channeling the gluttony Rakshas's power to force his body back into the fight. He drives his hand into the creature's skull, tearing its head off to break the cycle of the abyss. Grappling the entity, he sustains a mortal wound to his chest, but ensures the monster cannot regenerate. The violence continues as Maru relentlessly beats his opponent, his humanity slipping away into the fray. Though his allies shout for him to stop, he ignores them, stalking the remains of his enemy. The battlefield turns into a slaughter as the fight reaches its final conclusion. He decapitates the beast, then stares at his blood-stained hand as the abyss claims yet another victim. Shock ripples through the team as they process the reality that Maru defeated a level 10 Rakshasa entirely on his own. He remains silent, acutely aware that the time he has squandered in this endless cycle is now gone forever. Later, the team gathers at a somber funeral, mourning Wuju as the sun sets on their shattered peace. Young Yoon asks if he is holding up, but he admits that he can never grow accustomed to such tragedy. Headquarters officially labels the death an accident, swiftly arranging a memorial service to honor what remains of their colleague. With the island no longer secure, the team grows frantic because Maru has vanished without leaving a trace. Young Yoon vows to track him down, though she knows he will not return, having survived the loss of her own team in the past. He hides, unable to face his old life after his comrade's death, as she warns he can never return to the past. A rift tears open in his room, and a bloody hand forces its way through the fractured wall. An intruder lands on the floor, startling him as he demands to know how anyone bypassed his defenses. The bloodied man mocks the death of his friend as a natural consequence of weakness, leaving him in utter shock. He warns Maru to keep his humanity, fearing he will spiral into the same obsession that consumed Suwon. Shock washes over Maru as he realizes this intruder possesses intimate knowledge of his father's final days. The stranger reveals they were both original squadron leaders, the very first to face the Rakshasa and ignite the cycle of predation. Memory shifts to a battlefield where Eldu struggles against a masked combatant, their rapid gunfire forcing the squad to hold their line. Suwon barks orders for his men to concentrate their fire, though the soldiers falter before an enemy that defies conventional tactics. A subordinate screams for Eldu to take command of the 6th Squadron as their defensive perimeter begins to shatter. Watching a comrade fall, the troops throw every grenade they have in a suicidal attempt to survive. A concussive blast tears through the clearing, forcing the survivors to scramble for cover against an overwhelming, unseen force. As golden mist begins to choke the forest, the soldiers creep forward, bracing themselves to encounter the monsters hiding within the haze. Breathless and trembling, they freeze at the sight of a mysterious, red-haired warrior emerging from the swirling dust. The creature's wounds begin to knit back together, while the air grows heavy with the suffocating scent of yellow dust. Coordinating their final stand, the soldiers fire relentlessly to halt the regeneration, only for the warrior to retaliate with arcs of sparking energy. Maru watches the scene unfold, listening as his visitor recounts how their entire squad was decimated in that inaugural slaughter. The field lies silent among the bodies of the fallen, a testament to the failure that haunts them. Suwon stares at his dead comrades, finally grasping that the monster's power is a relentless cycle of death he has no hope of breaking. Amidst that golden haze, Suwon refuses to yield, his resolve hardening as he acknowledges the grim necessity of the fight. He sustains a deep wound, prompting his comrade to scream for him to retreat before the devastation claims them both. Turning toward the commotion, the soldier sees Suwon transformed, standing defiantly before a multi-eyed horror tearing through the dust. Watching this, Maru realizes he must accept this power if he hopes to survive. He bolts through the suffocating woods, skidding to a halt before a pulsating purple rift and a looming dark silhouette. A jagged force erupts from the portal, slicing across the soldier's chest and leaving him gasping on the forest floor. Later, an ally explains how Rakshasa bloodbursts ability users, leading Maru to press for the truth about his father. He learns Suwon actively pursued the abyss, convinced that mirroring the monsters was the only path to their annihilation. His father had forcibly dragged him toward that dark destiny, leaving Maru to grapple with the horrific legacy of his own bloodline. Every user harbors the potential to descend into that void, ensuring the cycle of predation continues unabated. Staring at an old photograph, Maru is warned that turning his back on the war makes him no better than the creatures he hunts. He is haunted by the accusation that he might eventually discard his humanity, just as his father had done before him. Back at the Gangwa office, officials deliberate on Maru's resignation, growing anxious over his prolonged absence. Driven to uncover the truth, he finally strides into the office, openly challenging the narrative Ildu spun about his past. Standing alone in the gloom, he steps forward, determined to reclaim his place and forge his own path within the special civil servants. He watches the chained entity, waiting for the cycle of predation to shift. Back at the Gangwa department, the staff prepares for lunch, though one man sits slumped at his desk, crushed by exhaustion. The team heads out together, their mood heavy as the recent tragedy involving Wuju leaves everyone reeling under the weight of the endless cycle. Officers whisper their concerns about Maru, noting that the atmosphere in the department has become suffocatingly bleak. Later, a teammate stands in the doorway of Maru's room, suggesting he take out the trash while he prepares ramen. Surprise flickers across Maru's face as he realizes Chana lives in the same building, finding it convenient for her rapid deployment. She explains that Jiwon and Yubak live downstairs as well, while Maru silently carries the trash outside. Chana insists on helping, telling him not to blame himself for Wooju's death, though he remains trapped in his own remorse. Confused by her tone, Maru asks what she meant as they carry the bags down the stairs together. An alarm suddenly blares, signaling a level 6 Rakshasa, and the team is immediately dispatched to contain the threat. Eden steps forward to replace Maru, questioning his reliability and fearing his emotional state will compromise the mission. The group finds a colleague already collapsed, while Eden voices his irritation at Maru's lingering depression. Navigating a foggy forest, an officer scolds Eden for his blatant insensitivity toward the broken man. As they track the beast, Maru chooses to follow the group, hoping that staying close will eventually reveal the truth he seeks. Nam-Yosuk wakes in the forest, struggling to accept his defeat. Doubts gnaw at him, forcing him to question what truly transpired, as accepting the failure feels like admitting he has already lost everything. His internal monologue breaks when a sudden, violent injury announces the arrival of the very monster he feared, leaving him exposed in the brush. He frantically adjusts his gloves to mount a defense, but the creature is decapitated in a flash, its remains discarded before he can even land a blow. Baffled by the sudden resolution of the threat, the team inspects the disturbed ground to confirm if the danger has truly passed. They uncover a large, grumpy cat, and Yoseok is stunned to recognize the beast as his own pet, Jang. He decides to carry the creature back to the office for food, even though the animal feels inexplicably heavy in his arms. Upon reaching headquarters, Yoso proudly presents the cat to his colleagues, who stare in utter disbelief at his choice of companion. Young Yoon yells at him to put the animal down, but he insists on its innocence, convinced that the creature is merely cute. The cat drops its disguise, and the team shoves the creature away after it teases them. They recoil in terror as the monster bolts, with Yoseok scrambling to chase the entity through the winding corridors. The pursuit takes a dark turn when they reach a corner, where a sudden, shocking encounter leaves the entire group paralyzed in place. Yoseok collapses, confused and in pain as he asks what the Rakshasa was. Inside the office, he tries to justify his actions to the team, despite their visible disbelief and mounting frustration. Jiwon warns them to cease their bickering, as the team begins to suspect their entire environment is a dangerous Rakshasa illusion. Young Yoon draws her blade, her eyes scanning the room as she senses the true monster lurking within the shifting, yellow-dusted shadows. A spider Rakshasa looms over the team, threatening them. Yoon watches a peaceful memory of a child embracing his mother, only for the scene to warp into the sight of a dying man cradled in her arms. She shouts for her son, but an ally holds her back to stop her panic. They realize the duplicator Rakshasa is feeding on their memories to manifest these illusions, forcing the team to dismantle the cycle of fear. Maru readies himself for combat, suspecting that because they share Rakshasa blood, the entity is mirroring the very monsters that granted their powers. He dreads the potential manifestation of the gluttony Rakshasa, the personification of the abyss as an eternal, starving prison. Recognizing that failure will unleash that insatiable hunger upon them all, the team frantically searches for the creature's true position. Maru worries the gluttony Rakshasa will kill everyone, but his ally tells him no one is dying. Working in tandem, they launch a coordinated strike against the spider Rakshasa to shatter the illusion before it consumes their minds. Maru hunts for the duplicator behind a new door, haunted by the lingering trauma Yoon carries from the tragic death of her husband. Suddenly, the environment shifts as they are engulfed in spores, signaling that they have stepped into a memory belonging to the late Kim Yebak. A figure emerges to reveal their true self, promising a swift end to the pair as the abyss continues to drag them into its depths. A teammate shouts an alarm as a Rakshasa crawls across the ceiling, sending Maru tumbling through the air. This mossy, multi-limbed creature skitters across the floor, its movements disrupting the cycle of predation as it stalks its next target. Maru inhales dangerous spores, coughing up a blue substance that begins to aggressively colonize his lungs. He realizes he is too late to save his team, finding several members already incapacitated by the toxic infection. Wondering if his own regeneration is fueling the parasite, he gruesomely tears away his facial flesh to purge the infestation. He launches a violent assault, relentlessly striking his opponent to shatter the cycle of the abyss. Maru tackles the foe and tears into its flesh, but his teeth meet only hollow air. Unable to absorb any ability because the creature is merely a tasteless duplicate, he turns to check on his team. He stands over the survivors as they gasp for air, until a woman weakly calls out his name. Watching her dissolve into ash, he mourns the loss just as he recalls Yebok losing his own wife. Realizing every teammate has suffered such a loss, Maru resolves to push past his despair. He forces his way past a frustrated teammate, only to be struck by the shock of a sudden, inexplicable discovery. Ignoring warnings to remain cautious, he insists on tearing through the wall to hunt the duplicator, Rakshasa. He finds a monolith in the woods and asks who is standing before the gate. Maru confronts his own memory, enraged to see a mocking version of himself standing there. A red entity with hands for a face emerges from the portal and lands. A man kneels before the temple Rakshasa, begging for power greater than his father's to survive the prison of the abyss. Though others call him insane for seeking such a pact, the man insists it is the only way to oppose his father. The figure reaches out and breaks a leg, demanding the next sacrifice. Maru hides his true nature, staring into the abyss to decide his next move. He lands a bone-cracking strike on the red creature, screaming a threat as the monster retaliates with a claw-covered arm. The force of the impact sends a man collapsing suddenly, while Maru lunges forward into the heart of the fray. A woman readies her blade, restraining her ally as the multi-armed red entity lashes out to feed on their fear. Maru notices his own hand glowing with danger as the creature contorts its body, preparing for total annihilation. Exhaustion overcomes him. A man trembles on the ground, gagging and gasping as the temple Rakshasa looms over them. The multi-armed monster emerges, leaving Maru shocked to find Xianwo collapsed and frantically demanding he use his ability. Realizing the dire truth, Maru watches as Xianwu lies in defeat, mourning his failure to surpass his father as an ability user. A hand reaches out from the darkness as the monster approaches, forcing Maru to react with immediate alarm. As the creature's fingers twitch and transform, Maru struggles because his own evolution ability is blocked, preventing any hope of recovery. He collapses to his knees, lying defeated before the red demon while the onlookers scream in sheer terror. The team leader remains pinned, unable to move his hands, while his ally feels entirely useless in the face of the abyss. The others urge Sanwu to act, but he only groans in agony as the red entity looms over them. A force strikes the creature, but Maru yells, "Shut up, I know that," as his hand transforms. He bites his lip until he bleeds, losing his arm before kicking back to fight. His strike lands, but the blade fails to bite deep enough, leaving the red monster standing firm. Though it claims his bones are shattered, the creature drags him into a desperate mid-air struggle. He stands amidst the carnage of his fallen companions, reeling from the sheer confusion of the fray. Glancing toward Channa, he momentarily mistakes her stance for floating, until the grim reality of the blood-soaked scene pulls him back. The cycle of predation deepens as a limb is severed and victims are dragged into a pooling mass of blood. A headless figure looms as shadowy hands pin him with red tendrils. His leg snaps under the assault and he screams, "Kya!" He pleads for the slaughter to cease, yet he remains trapped, choking on the thick dust of the encounter. Realizing that only raw power will ensure his survival, he is seized by an invisible hand and hurled through the air. Panic surges because his attacker remains unseen, confirming he is pitted against a lethal, intangible force. Gambling on his potential to mimic the temple Rakshasa, he wounds himself to forcefully claim that same ability. Collapsing in a pool of his own blood, he screams a command, engaging in one final, forceful struggle against the monster. He watches the carnage, his body buckling as he suffers a neck wound. A spider pierces its prey and the survivors whisper, "We won." Exhaustion finally claims them all, leaving him to reflect on his burden as the only one who can see the true system. He contemplates his status as a rank F hunter, realizing the duplicator has fundamentally altered his understanding of reality. Weary, he instructs an ally on how to wield the ability, only to be cursed as a scavenger who devours everything in sight. Tension spikes at a sudden noise from within, and the horrifying realization hits: he is the gluttony Rakshasa. The final confrontation looms, and the team walks toward the sealed wall to face the truth of what he has become. He pushes open the heavy stone door, his heart hammering against his ribs as he calls out for his father. The team stares in collective shock, finally identifying the gluttony Rakshasa and realizing with horror that the entity actually possesses eyes. Nearby, a man aggressively drags a crying child away, their path leading toward the abyss because that is the only way to gain the power needed to protect others. The warning echoes: to safeguard those he cares about, Maru must obtain the gluttony Rakshasa's ability, forcing him to confront the cycle of the abyss. Contemplating the weight of this choice, he stares in disbelief as he struggles to reconcile the directive to protect others with his growing internal darkness. He realizes Older deceived him about his past, leaving him to wonder if he is destined to abandon his humanity just as others did. Meanwhile, at headquarters, the discussion shifts to the quality of ability users, noting that the number of level 7 users remains dangerously low. Oldu hints at a ruthless plan to forcefully create stronger ability users should the situation demand it. Staff members recoil in horror, warning the director that using civilian casualties as bait is a reckless and unforgivable violation of their duties. An assistant interrupts the tense meeting shortly after to report that contact with the Ganwa Island team has been lost entirely. While Maru resolves to proceed, the manager erupts in fury, demanding to know why the team is missing and if they have abandoned their posts. A monstrous creature roars, its teeth sinking into prey as it expresses a desperate, eerie desire to return home. Ildu challenges his subordinates, but the sudden disintegration of the gluttony Rakshasa into a dripping, viscous mass draws everyone's attention. As a magical rift manifests, the team questions why the creature simply vanished, noting its strange appearance compared to typical Rakshasa. The tension remains, and as the group processes the encounter, they realize it is now Channa's turn to face the mysterious stone door. She commands the others to remain behind, insisting she must cross the threshold into the mysterious chamber alone. Though Maru warns of the extreme danger, she remains resolute, intent on facing the threat to prepare herself for whatever comes next. She steps into the passage, saying, "I'll be back," while the team braces for the fight. Doubtful of her survival against the Temple Rakshasa's abilities, Maru creeps forward to peek through the opening. A creature lunges from the gloom and he moves to block the strike. The reveal of a second Rakshasa lurking in the darkness leaves the group paralyzed with terror. while the creature begins to disintegrate like the gluttony parasite. It remains a lethal, blood-red nightmare. He shouts a desperate warning to Channa, but she snaps back, demanding he stay out of her way so she can finish the fight. Realizing the beast is ironclad, Maru urges her to observe the creature's rhythm and strike at the opening. Sensing she has seized the advantage, he finally ceases his interference and allows the stone door to seal shut. She emerges from the chamber victorious, but utterly spent, collapsing into his arms as the adrenaline fades. Watching her, Maru reflects on the disparity between their battles. While he required assistance to fell the temple entity, she achieved victory on her own. Their relief is short-lived as they discuss the remaining threats, and Maru grows uneasy realizing a hidden enemy is mirroring Yosok's techniques. Haunted by the memory of losing Jang a year ago, he recalls how he first stumbled upon a Rakshasa while frantically searching for his pet. They linger in the dust, pondering the true nature of Deokman's shadow power and questioning if the duplicator Rakshasa has truly passed them by. The team exhales, clinging to the relief that they escaped a level 10 threat, and that everyone survived the ordeal. Maru nods in agreement that safety comes first, while the others drift into casual chatter about mundane chores and searching for a missing cat. Anxious to confirm if Channa finished the threat inside, they resolve to get her to a hospital before grabbing a celebratory meal. Without warning, Maru lunges forward and strikes the man in the floral shirt, his sudden violence shattering the calm. He pins the man to the ground, screaming that he is a Rakshasa, while his colleagues shout in confusion and alarm at the outburst. Maru insists this cannot be Deokman because the real leader was suffering from a stomachache yesterday, leaving the group stunned by the realization. As the imposter doubles over in pain, the team turns on him, unleashing a barrage of attacks now that they recognize the deception. The creature begs them to stop, then offers a mocking bow before bolting away, forcing the team to give chase. Their pursuit is cut short when a car slams into the fleeing entity, sending it hurtling through the air. They find a fleshy infant on the pavement that dissolves, signaling the end of the trap. Back at the office, a recuperating Deokman confronts them for their reckless secret mission, warning that discovery will cost them their paychecks. Later, Maru tracks Channa down, insisting there is something vital he must confess to her. He reveals he recognized the Rakshasa from her own memories, identifying the entity as having a connection to Eldu. Overwhelmed by the weight of this truth, Maru retreats to his bed and demands to be left in complete isolation. 20 years earlier, a young boy clutching a sword wanders into the basement to find his father, only to be told the man has no love for his family. The boy approaches the house, pressing his hand against the frosted glass to peer into the dark, shifting shadows of the room. Inside the room, a shadowy, purple-clad Rakshasa begins to levitate, its dark aura pulsing with power as it recites the cycle of predation, the one who creates the rule, the one who breaks it, and the one who cleans up the mess. Maru stares in shock, asking if the entity is truly the one from his past, and he reveals a jagged scar on his chest as grim proof of his harrowing history. He recalls finding that monster instead of his father, haunted by the question of why Eldu stood by and watched his family suffer. Determined to find answers, he explains that he joined the Soul headquarters as a civil servant solely to observe Eldu and eventually expose his secret. He tells his ally he has a plan to prove the truth, arranging a meeting outside the administrative center to finalize the details of his accusation. Elsewhere, a man in a suit shouts at them, refusing to participate in what he dismisses as a ridiculous conspiracy theory regarding Eldu. Later, the group gathers in a conference room, and Eldu arrives, apologizing for his delay as he sits down to address their discussion. Tension rises when the team brings up the day Channa received her power, though Eldu feigns ignorance to deflect their scrutiny. When they finally accuse him of being the Rakshasa with eyes, he scoffs, accusing Eden of poisoning their minds and questioning why his own child would blame him for the death of his mother. Maru demands Eldu reveal his true identity, urging him to release Yellow Dust to expose the director. A man in a suit dismisses the scene, warning Maru that unnecessary use of Yellow Dust will cost him the Gangwa team's protection. The woman insists they drop this, refusing to manipulate Maru to uncover the truth about her family's death. The memory of a shadow figure attacking a man haunts them, causing a violent reaction at the mere mention of that day. When told to take responsibility, Sayumber replies, "Of course," and puts on his gloves. When asked why he acts this way, Maru tells his father, "I've never thought of you as my father." The environment shatters around them as Maru sprints forward, slamming his father into the glass until he falls incapacitated. As a man is sent flying, he vows to kill the director, shocking his allies who fear the consequences of such a reckless act. After the exhausting struggle, the man lies on the ground, finding the entire situation deeply annoying. They scream that something is coming as a dark shadow descends upon them. Dark energy swirls as the director releases a torrent of yellow dust, proving the team's warnings about his true nature were justified. Panic surges through the group as they press him for an explanation, struggling to breathe amidst the suffocating, unnatural fog. Hanmaru exposes the director's direct role in his family's destruction, using the grim history to justify their desperate confrontation. Jungyoldu scoffs at their accusations, his cold gaze shifting to pointedly ask about the whereabouts of the rest of the Ganwa team. Dismissing the younger generation with a sneer, he begins to manifest dark, jagged energy in preparation for a lethal assault. Hanmaru lunges forward with his own power, but the group is instantly caught in a spatial distortion that tears the world apart. Disoriented by the sudden shift to a desolate construction site, the team scrambles to react to his relentless, erratic movements. Yu Young-yoon demands to know the director's intentions as he stands there. He justifies the violence with chilling detachment, claiming he cannot allow their interference to stain the sanctity of his office. Raising a hand, he channels raw energy into a razor-sharp spatial slash, aiming to erase his opposition from existence. The barrier breaks, allowing him to land a kick on his opponent. He muses on the dark origins of the dungeon, smiling as he wields a purple energy blade that forces the team into a desperate dance of evasion. Their clash intensifies with every exchange, leaving Hanmaru physically strained as he struggles against the overwhelming power gap. Cornering them on the rooftop, the director remains unmoved by their pleas for mercy or their visible exhaustion. He declares he is pruning the rotten elements from his organization, expressing a twisted regret that Young-yoon was caught in his purge. Though he laments they could not be utilized as assets against the Abyss, he concludes that eliminating Maru is a necessary convenience. Maru shouts his defiance into the void, but Eldu merely mocks the frailty of human emotion while preparing a final, lethal strike drawn from the Abyss. Eldu readies a lethal strike, but a shadow figure suddenly emerges to impale his agents from behind. Maru stares at the carnage with intense focus, realizing the cycle of the Abyss demands a bloody price for his defiance. As the team gathers their resolve, Maru feels his heart race, his hand warping into a jagged, clawed form. Tension spikes when Young-yoon approaches the director, striking him with a force that leaves him reeling and bleeding. The hand rips the heart from the victim. Someone whispers a warning that Maru must defeat the 100th floor boss to escape, forcing him to confront two looming, mysterious entities. Observing that his opponent has not changed, the Time Rakshasa ability user sacrifices 5 years of life to rewind the flow of time. A spectral ticking echoes through the air as the figure reaches out through the distorted, fracturing reality. Maru watches intently, mentally reviewing his absolute will and wind blade skills to steel himself for the coming fight. He confronts Young-yoon, urgently questioning why she would shorten her own lifespan just to reverse the clock. Young-yoon stands stunned that he noticed her secret ability, as only the late director should have been capable of detecting it. The man tells him to forget the time because they are done holding back. They launch a perfectly coordinated strike, but their target looms over them, sending out a shockwave that leaves them reeling. As the dust settles on the construction site, Maru confronts his opponent, asking in disbelief if he was just killed in the previous timeline. He cries out in agony, then cracks his knuckles, preparing to face his opponent in one final desperate clash. The man in the suit adjusts his gloves, looking down to clarify that he is not actually Maru's father. He vows to be the one to end Maru's life, channeling dark purple energy into his palm. Eden lunges forward as the team erupts into a violent struggle, crashing onto the concrete floor. A comrade warns his allies to keep their guard up, questioning if the chief truly wants to die again. Maru's eye glows as he taps into his hidden power, while Young-yoon orders the immediate capture of Eldu. They resolve to give everything they have as one member prepares to invoke the Time Rakshasa ability. The bald man pulls his wire weapon to strike, but he suddenly clutches his chest in agony. Invoking the power of blood, the attacker leaps forward, channeling dark energy into a lethal blow. The head is severed, and Maru reacts with fury. The team watches as Maru is punched in the face. Their attackers scream in triumph, boasting that they cannot die as long as their bloodstring remains intact. The director mocks the attempt as a display of filial piety before bidding them a cold goodbye. The siblings fight with red strings, prompting the man to remark on their double standards. Maru realizes Eldu is slipping into the black dimensional space to evade their combined assault. Surprised by the sudden interest shown in him, Maru realizes they are being misled about the true target. They are told to keep watching while Maru is restrained by red threads. A man pulls the string tight with his teeth, ensnaring and attacking the man in the pinstripe suit. Young-yoon urges her team to strike, commanding them to destroy Eldu's arms. Two men in suits trade precise strikes as they parry the incoming assault. The attackers bind Eldu with red energy threads, forcing him to roar in sudden, intense agony. Young-yoon shouts for Maru to bite and stop the regeneration, though he hesitates at the thought of consuming a human. A gaunt, decaying arm lashes out, prompting Maru to leap forward and strike at his wounded opponent. The man with glowing eyes smiles, leaving Eden frozen in dread. Dark tendrils consume the area as the antagonist smiles. The heavenly demon stands revealed, and the two opponents lock eyes in a tense, silent confrontation. They trade heavy blows infused with dark energy until a shadowy force strikes Maru, engulfing him in lethal magic. Purple energy blades erupt, leaving Maru panting and exhausted. He vanishes into the black space, leaving the shadowy entity to loom over the remaining defeated men. A shadowy entity appears, grinning as it claims to be the one who creates and breaks this cycle. Someone confronts Eldu, who is asked about the situation. The mysterious figure apologizes to Young-yoon as they reveal their true form, shocking the observers. Maru realizes the man he knew as his father is a fraud, and wonders what became of his real father. The creator expresses regret at having to destroy the soldiers they brought into existence. Holding a grotesque organic weapon, the figure tells Maru he must kill to survive, leaving him in disbelief. The entity confesses to summoning the Rakshasas to their homes, a truth that leaves Maru stunned. It explains they chose Maru for his potential as an elite athlete turned ability user. As someone begs Chaina not to leave, a masked woman swings a bloody sword in the darkness. Maru steals his resolve, declaring he is the one who will decide the fate of this world. A shadowy entity with a grin looms over Maru, claiming to be the one who creates and breaks this cycle. The opponent screams in a fit of ruin-faced rage, yet Maru strikes him down with a blade slicked in blood. Using spatial removal, he erases his remaining attackers, though the woman in red pays a heavy price as her arm is severed. Young Yoon lunges forward to intervene, warning that any further reckless attacks will result in certain death. When pressed for an alternative, she falls silent, leaving Maru to steel himself for his inevitable departure. He glances back at a sleeping figure, confessing that even he is uncertain of the truth behind their desperate situation. His form has changed and his allies realize they cannot even approach him. They debate how to bring him back, but the injured man knows it is impossible to escape the black space the director created. Stumbling into the darkness, Maru falls while gasping for air, realizing he is completely trapped. He drifts through the void, lamenting that no matter how far he runs, there is no end in sight. Suddenly, he spots a faint, glowing light and rushes toward it, desperate to find an exit. A figure with long blue hair bows in the gloom, and Maru is shocked to recognize the director's face. The entity questions how a mere human arrived here, prompting Maru to explain he was trapped while battling a doppelganger. When he demands to know the creature's identity, it identifies itself as a regresses that escaped the abyss. Stunned that the monster can speak, Maru listens as it explains it is one of the 8 gods, an existence far superior to the rest. A surge of dark red power erupts from the entity as its eyes glow with star-shaped light, marking its status as one of the 8 regresses, empowered by the supreme king of the abyss. Unlike the mindless beasts driven purely by the urge to slaughter, this Rakshasa moves with a cold, calculated purpose. A grotesque, skeletal figure tears itself from the shadows, looming over its target with a chilling, toothless grin. Acting on its own volition, the entity taunts the man who dares to defy it, mocking his futile struggle after the wrongs he has suffered. The bodyguards shield their chief, shouting that if she dies, it is all over, but the attacker cuts them down. 5 seconds ago, the assailant decapitated the victim and ripped a beating heart from the corpse. 3 individuals brace against the light, but the woman in the red suit erases them into dissolving husks. An injured man shouts a warning that no normal ability user can withstand one of the 8 gods, as their power exists on an absolute level. The entity mocks Young Yoon, questioning how many times she has reset the timeline before cruelly demanding she simply give up and die. Struck by sudden regret, the man realizes with horror that he has been fighting for a monster all along, though the entity only sneers at his persistence. Creatures swarm through the gateway, forcing the team to prepare for a final stand. The woman fights back with her blade, while Maru feels a strange, long-forgotten sensation stirring deep within him. He questions the motives of the space Rakshasa, an outcast who now uses humans to wage war against the supreme king of the abyss. Realizing with shock that the civil servants were merely pawns, he wonders if killing this Rakshasa will finally bring the war to an end. A spectral figure warns him that the war against the abyss has already begun, and despite his troubled thoughts, he remains resolved to face the creature. The entity suggests that killing this space Rakshasa could restore his body, but he remains trapped, his consciousness bound to this dark, inescapable location. He mentions that his son is waiting outside, and when the figure asks about Eden with a mysterious smile, he reaches out, desperate to bridge the gap between them. Exhaustion colors the entity's words as they note that speaking is taxing, yet when he searches for a way back to his family, they insist that any escape is impossible. Elsewhere, the battle intensifies as he strikes down waves of enemies, only to realize with a jolt that the data he holds is corrupted. A shadowy entity looms over the carnage, contemplating the absolute destruction of all Rakshasas, while the very space begins to shrink, trapping everyone inside. As an injured woman wonders if the end has finally arrived, he leaps through the void, suddenly grasping a desperate method to break free from the encroaching darkness. Completing his escape, he launches a powerful strike against the shadow, leaving his enemies stunned by his sudden, violent emergence from the black space. He lunges with a punch, while his opponent suggests he must have plenty of questions about the truth. Moments earlier, while trapped in the void, he panics as a pale, blue-haired entity looms right behind him. A skull-like creature grabs him, forcing him to strike back with a punch. He freezes in absolute shock when another Rakshasa manifests from the swirling dark smoke. Memories flicker of a conversation regarding a one-pillar gate in Busan that once remained open for 3 days. Though officials praise the director for finally sealing the gate, he ignores the distraction to check his status window for any usable skills. He runs in frustration, shouting curses until he finds a fiery portal. Unsure of what lies beyond the threshold, he reaches into the light as his only remaining chance for escape. The light fades and he emerges into a desolate, rocky landscape, utterly confused by these new surroundings. Suffocating concentrations of yellow dust flood his lungs, causing his consciousness to slip away. A disembodied voice promises to take care of the situation, but he reacts in alarm as the ground beneath him begins to tremble. Inside the cavern, a red-haired entity commands a horde of creatures. As she contemplates her next move, he reels in agony, sensing the encroaching horde of monsters closing in across the red wasteland. Maru lunges forward to attack as he flees the monsters, screaming, "Rune!" He spots a glowing pillar gate and sprints toward the entrance, convinced that sealing it remains his only hope for survival. A heavy impact rocks the ground as he lands in the fiery chaos, sending a shockwave of energy rippling through the air. Skeletal entities emerge from the shadows to drag him toward a pit, their giant hands closing in from every direction. He shouts in relief, lunging forward with a punch to break free from the immediate trap. Standing on the cracked earth, he is suddenly forced back by a mysterious figure wielding a swirling vortex of energy. Maru unleashes his own dark energy to counter the shadowy entity looming over the ruined hull. The warrior adopts an ominous, powerful form as he prepares to confront the glowing entity head-on. He looms over his defeated enemies, ignoring the warning that he cannot face the space Rakshasa by himself. Struggling against his own limitations, he stands firm, convinced that his current strength is enough to win. The mysterious figure questions how he escaped the black space as it manifests amidst the shifting scaffolding. A green energy blast overwhelms him, forcing a scream of agony from his throat as his arm undergoes a painful transformation. Falling through the abyss, he reflects on his deteriorating physical state with mounting dread. He realizes he must seal the one-pillar gate even as the Rakshasas begin to retreat from the ruins. As the director begins sealing the gate, Maru watches with red-eyed focus before leaping to attack his final target. The team surveys the carnage left in the courtyard, where the corpses of monsters lie scattered across the ground. A towering entity laments the loss of powers granted by the Supreme King of the Abyss, as these abilities were his only connection to his origin. He clenches his fist in frustration and blames Maru for his current plight, knowing the cycle of predation demands someone pay for his weakness. The entity lunges forward in a furious, energy-charged attack, forcing the young man to stand his ground against the incoming strike. Allies scream, "Han Maru, avoid it!" But the strike lands and beheads him. As the figure walks across the cracked landscape, a woman clutches her damaged chest, realizing her time is running out. She grabs the creature's clawed hand to stop it, while another agent alerts his chief to the impossible sight unfolding before them. The headless man bows to the onlookers, standing firmly on the dust as he prepares for the final confrontation. The stone structure shatters, and Maru lunges forward with an intense emotional outburst, exerting every ounce of his remaining strength. He dashes across the rooftop to attack, but the entity punches him in the chest. Shocked by the power he faces, Maru is knocked to the ground as the entity unleashes another dark energy strike. Terrified, a witness questions if the boy is even human, while the entity looks down with a calm, ominous smile. Reflecting on the people trapped in this cycle, the entity watches the group stand against the hazy sky as they realize the end is near. He walks away from the defeated, shouting that this is the end, while reaching out to finalize his victory. The shadow figure looms over Maru and shouts, "Die," while swinging a blade. The young man dodges, but when he defies the entity, it simply replies, "Nah." Pinned down in a desperate struggle, Maru stands his ground as their powers clash in an intimate, violent confrontation. Against the sunset, the tension peaks. The woman in the suit declares the end, signaling that the cycle must finally break. Confused and dizzy, Maru wakes to his predatory instincts, biting into his partner as his gluttony powers feel dangerously altered. Blood drips from his lips as the sensation of his partner's flesh triggers a sudden, jarring shift, thrusting him back into a moment he has already lived. A voice warns him of regret, so he turns to face the shadow standing behind him. The entity sneers, taunting that consumption will only invite ruin, as it exposes the truth that the gluttony Rakshasa within him was a tool designed for theft. Laughter fills the void as the figure demands to know if he truly craves a return to the abyss, that eternal prison of endless slaughter. He screams his refusal, yet the entity only mocks his resistance, noting how even one of the 8 gods finds it difficult to fully master a human vessel. A monster appears to throttle him, forcing the gluttony Rakshasa to seize control. With a twisted smile, the entity proposes a dark union, insisting that since all humans who wield their power inevitably shatter, they should join forces to defy the abyss. Reeling from the violent shift in his own physiology, Maru rejects the offer, his rage burning at the realization that they treat all ability users as expendable pawns. Tooth-lined appendages erupt from the darkness, lashing out to constrict his throat until he is left gasping for air. Blocking a lethal kick, he declares he will never allow the Rakshasa to claim his body, vowing instead to devour his tormentor and shatter the cycle for good. He lunges forward in a desperate strike, but the creature counters instantly, piercing his shoulder and leaving him coughing blood as the grueling war for his humanity rages on. Blood spills from his mouth as he swallows hard, his desperate screams swallowed by the unfolding chaos. Mocking his resistance as foolish, the entity sneers that he cannot hope to survive without its stolen power. He lunges with his blade, but a shadowy hand delivers a blow that knocks him back. As he collapses, his companion cries, "Han Maru," and tends to his wounds. Later, he lies gaunt and depleted on the rooftop, his hand searching for stability as the sun sets over the abyss. Donning his jacket, he remains determined to finish the job, knowing the cycle of predation demands he be the one to clean up the mess. The team gathers to confirm that Maru has finally finished the task, leaving them to stand together amidst the wreckage. Watching the sunset, they fear for the future of the special civil servants in this world of endless, repeating cycles. In a cramped room, the group reels from the revelation that the director was one of the 8 gods, sensing that something is fundamentally wrong. Dokman rejects the suggestion to call an emergency meeting, leading Maru to consult with him on how to master his ability. Absolute solitude. They fear that public panic and government interference would cause the entire organization to collapse if the truth were exposed. Choosing to keep the secret under wraps to prevent leaks, Maru acknowledges the heavy burden they now carry. Yaoshun removes her heels as the group departs the room, with one member swearing never to return. Dismissing the formalities with a bluntness that causes annoyance, Maru decides it is time to move forward. Exhausted, the men settle into the same room to sleep, with one questioning why the other remains instead of going home. Refusing to head home, Maru persists in staying, despite his roommate's clear irritation at his presence. When Maru dismisses his own quarters as mere storage, the man snaps at him to shut up and get some rest. Suddenly, the man stammers, struggling to find the right words before blurting out that he has met Maru's father. He pulls back the blanket, revealing that his father is dead and cannot be reached. Clutching the sheets in stunned silence, Maru remains frozen until the man offers a quiet, remorseful apology. A tense, heavy atmosphere fills the kitchen as they sit in the dark, leaving Maru startled and lost in deep reflection. As nightmares plague his rest, Maru tosses and turns, but the man watching him simply whispers that everything will be all right. He leans in to offer comfort, insisting that his father deeply missed his family, and urges Maru to let go of his hatred. Drifting into a troubled sleep, Maru ponders what the future holds while the relentless cycle of the abyss grinds on. The space Rakshasa's final warning rings in his mind, signaling that an agent of the 8 gods is approaching as a shadowy entity grins in the dark. This figure cautions that Maru must confront the incoming threat entirely alone, as the end for humanity is at hand. A menacing silhouette looms, mocking the desperate human struggle with a wide, cruel expression of amusement. Terrified, Maru grips his bedding, realizing the true power of the 8 gods dwarfs any monster he has previously encountered. He fixates on the potential reward for surviving, while a mysterious command reverberates toward the one who wields the Rakshasa's strength. An armored warrior stands in the distance, gazing ahead with a calm, predatory focus. Elsewhere, a woman shouts in total disbelief at the news of Ildil's death, frustrated by the vague explanation she receives. She clarifies that a superior being killed Ildu, and the person in the red suit steps forward to claim credit for the deed. An emergency summit of all special civil servant chiefs is quickly convened to address the deepening crisis. The chiefs react with stunned silence to the news of the director's death, struggling to comprehend that such a powerful figure could be felled so easily. Maru hears a report about the chaos following the director's death, a truth that leaves him reeling. Panic surges through the emergency meeting as the leaders realize they must immediately appoint a successor to confront the 8 gods, plunging the room into chaotic uncertainty. Pio voices his skepticism about notifying the government, arguing that since the deities are already descending, the organization is on the verge of total collapse anyway. Funding becomes a point of bitter contention as the chiefs clash, desperate to maintain a shred of order now that the director's absolute authority has evaporated. Young Yoon fears the chaos Maru's secret will cause and snaps at a subordinate. "Don't call me ma'am." She demands a full accounting of the entity responsible for the director's death. Desperate to grasp the true nature of the threat now closing in on them. Buried under a mountain of reports, Maru retreats into the suffocating mundanity of office life. Frustrated by the irony of drowning in paperwork while the world teeters on the edge of the abyss, he wonders if this draining cycle of bureaucracy is truly the inevitable fate of a civil servant, finding the tedious routine strangely more taxing than his battles against the Rakshasa. A colleague suddenly disrupts his gloom by proposing a housewarming party, leaving a bewildered Maru to process the bizarre, jarring shift in his daily routine. Shortly after, the team arrives at the designated apartment unit, forced into a cramped living arrangement to better prepare for the arrival of the 8 gods. He attempts to secure the upstairs unit for himself, but his request is denied, and he is instead paired with Eden to share a room, much to his growing irritation. Tensions boil over into a heated, aggressive game of rock, paper, scissors to settle the room assignments, with everyone forcing their peers to participate in a petty contest. As they finally settle into their new living quarters, Maru watches the scene with a somber expression, feeling the deep, suffocating awkwardness of sharing a home with his colleagues. Lingering in the hollow silence of his room, Maru wrestles with the heavy shadow of the director's death as he and his teammates begin packing their lives for the move. Seeking a moment of solace, he turns toward his new, dimly lit apartment, only to be startled by a sharp, rhythmic knocking echoing from the other side of the door. He swings the door open to find the team waiting in the cramped hallway, their boisterous laughter filling the air as they launch an impromptu housewarming party to pull him from his funk. Though he stiffens at the sudden intrusion, the sight of his colleagues crowding the room softens his resolve, and he recognizes their clumsy attempts to cheer him up as a genuine gesture of care. One teammate gestures toward a seat, hoping to draw him into a conversation, but the fragile piece shatters when a stray elbow sends a mug careening off the counter, splashing liquid across the floor. The kitchen instantly devolved into a scene of bickering over proper cleanup techniques and cooking disasters, while Eden aggressively claims the duty of scrubbing the mess. He channels his mounting agitation into the task, attacking the clogged toilet with such manic, rhythmic intensity that the others pause to watch him in stunned silence. In the midst of the commotion, the group suddenly realizes that Chana is nowhere to be found, having slipped away to the rooftop to escape the suffocating noise. Maru climbs the stairs to find her standing alone against the night air, and he gently asks what is troubling her. Noting the deep, etched weariness in her eyes, she speaks softly of the hollow void left in her chest, now that the space Rakshasa, the entity that killed her brother, is still at large, leaving her untethered and without a clear mission. Shaking off the weight of her own sorrow, she turns her attention to him, issuing a somber reminder that he must now carry the burden of hosting one of the 8 gods. He admits he tried not to think about the toll of his power, but vows, "I'll make you stay sane, even if I have to squeeze you to death." Their talk descends into a darker tone as they reflect on the harrowing discovery hidden in the headquarters basement, acknowledging that the true threat still looms over everything they have built. Reflecting on the basement's grim contents, the team explores a containment chamber housing a chained, mysterious entity. The abyss serves as a prison for these beings, and their cycle of predation demands a constant, wearying cleanup. They stand before the dark opening where Eldu once concealed the space Rakshasa. Because this entity was kept secret from the other chiefs, its true nature remains a dangerous, lingering unknown. Though they demand answers, the prisoner remains silent, forcing them to realize that if this captive escapes back into the abyss, humanity faces an absolute end. The sheer weight of that potential collapse haunts them, as the cycle of the abyss threatens to consume everything they have fought to protect. Turning away from the tension, Maru and his colleagues attempt to relax, hoping that momentarily ignoring the encroaching darkness might offer a sliver of peace. They share drinks, setting aside their burdens to pretend for a few hours that nothing catastrophic will happen tonight. Amidst this forced normalcy, they try to escape the reality of their roles as the ones who must clean up the mess. Their respite ends abruptly when a warrior in dark, scale-patterned armor arrives, signaling that a massacre is imminent as he surveys the city from above. A sudden blast tears through the ceiling, and the team stares in shock as the armored warrior descends directly into their headquarters. An emergency alert blares for all users to report to the 51st floor, while operators scramble to locate Yunjun in the ensuing chaos. Meanwhile, officials confirm that Ildu was killed by one of the 8 gods, leaving the survivors to question how they can possibly survive such a force. The woman warns that after witnessing this level of power, the war has shifted, and catastrophic civilian damage is now inevitable. Officials argue over the mounting Rakshasa threat, but the army chief of staff demands a quiet cover-up, prioritizing national secrecy above all else during this escalating war. Yang Yun challenges him on the global scale of the crisis, yet the National Intelligence Service director denies her access, setting strictly classified protocols. Their heated debate is cut short by an emergency alert, confirming that one of the 8 gods has breached the facility and is currently ascending toward the 49th floor. The Soul Team intercepts the intruder, quickly identifying the warrior clad in traditional red armor as one of the feared 8 gods. Maru notices the creature's eyes have shifted, and as the team advances through a dense shroud of yellow dust, they remain wary of its unidentified power. Ignoring these warnings, one officer impulsively triggers his Tornado Rakshasa ability, intent on eliminating the target before it can react. He lunges forward, successfully decapitating the armored figure in a blur of motion, yet the entity remains standing as if completely unharmed. This momentary triumph vanishes when the opponent pulses with sinister red energy, causing the officer to collapse instantly while he coughs up blood. Vicious red tendrils burst from the floor to siphon his life force, accelerating the monster's resurrection until it shrieks in a grotesque, skeletal form. The archer fires, shouting, "We must stop it," but the entity severs his arm. The immortal Rakshasa mocks their efforts, explaining his condition as a causal effect, leaving the team paralyzed with horror as the immortal foe continues to taunt them. Demanding the whereabouts of the space Rakshasa, the intruder looms over them, forcing the team to commit to binding him with chains at any cost. They coordinate to stop him, yelling, "Let's attack together," as they conjure chains. Maru warns, "If you're not going to talk, then activates his prosthetic to strike." He leaves the warrior suspended in chains to die, coldly commanding his end as the victim falls in agony. Slashing through his remaining foes, he subdues them with chains to ensure no one escapes his reach. A man descends from the sky, causing an explosion that makes witnesses ask, "Was that an explosion?" Inside, a Restoration Rakshasa user prepares to fight while someone screams, "Chief Yu Yunyan needs to get here fast." The men report he's heading downstairs, saying he's looking for the 8 god as they encounter the mysterious figure. Their team leader receives the alert and vows to handle the crisis, ignoring his colleagues concerned about his well-being. A sudden warning confirms that one of the 8 gods has infiltrated the Soul headquarters, shocking the entire team. Maru reveals his fangs in a surge of adrenaline, and his leader orders him to move to headquarters immediately. Gasping as he exhales smoke, he forces his body to channel the agonizing Space Rakshasa ability. He activates his power, revealing a grade and stating, "These are all the spaces I can move." Struggling to navigate the overwhelming complicated paths, he collapses in pain before his friends. His leader yells at the bleeding men to master the ability, leaving them no choice but to push through. An assailant aggressively grabs a woman, heightening the tension of the unfolding confrontation. Maru and his team huddle in desperation, fighting to stabilize their flickering powers as the strain takes a toll on their bodies. Tension flares in the cramped space, prompting a teammate to urge Maru to hurry and attempt the teleportation once more. He triggers his spatial ability, suffering a bloody nose as a swarm of unexpected enemies suddenly bursts into the dim room. Maru braces for a confrontation with these strangers, while an ally curses the arrival of an 8 god entity in their midst. They watch in shock as the intruders display a mastery of the Space Rakshasa power, leaving the hallway quickly littered with their defeated comrades. Standing in a red grid, the group scans the debris and asks, "How many ability users are left?" A silver-haired woman scans the room and confirms that only 2 level 8 Rakshasa users are left fighting on the 25th floor. The crow Rakshasa user summons a flock of crows to loom over the tattooed fighter, The Iron Fist Rakshasa lands to attack, lunging forward with metallic limbs. Maru strikes from the darkness, leaving his tattooed opponent impaled on the stairs and reeling from a deep, jagged slash. Witnessing the overwhelming strength of these new foes, Maru and his remaining allies realize they are rapidly running out of options. Only 3 of them remain conscious in the headquarters to face the encroaching, inevitable threat. With only 3 fighters standing against the tide, Maru swears to make the intruder pay for the carnage. His companion pauses to check on a wounded ally, who grits his teeth and insists he is still fit for the fray. Blood drips from Maru's nose as he forces his focus, grasping at the raw energy to command the space around him. He drifts through a digital void, his mind straining to anchor himself within the complex geometry of the spatial grid. The trio emerges into a facility where a mysterious figure blocks their path, demanding to know where the 8 god is hidden. They scramble to stabilize the crumbling structure, desperate to shield the civilians from the fallout of their war. A warrior throws up a water shield to deflect a lethal energy slash, immediately lunging back with a heavy retaliatory kick. Intrigued by the resistance, the tattooed fighter draws his bow, eager to gauge his opponent's true strength. With a sharp snap of his fingers, he triggers a searing explosion, forcing the others to dive for cover against the rain of fire. A portal tears open the sky, and survivors watch the city burn while struggling to breathe. Surveying the wreckage, Maru accepts there is no other way forward. He glances at his fallen comrade, summoning blue flames to brace for the next turn of the cycle. Determined to hold the line, he pours his remaining strength into healing the wounded. Pushing onward, he declares he will end his opponent here and now. The goddess's blessing flows into him, but the sudden influx of power leaves him racked with agony. He looks down to find his ally collapsed, his heart sinking as he realizes the severity of her condition. Desperate, he screams for a restoration ability to pull her back from the brink. He throws up a shield, narrowly blocking the lethal red grid trap before it claims the others. Anguish sharpens into cold focus as he braces for the archer's incoming barrage. Deflecting the fire arrows, he knows he cannot hold this defense indefinitely. He narrowly avoids a strike, wondering if his path ends in this ruin. A sudden realization strikes him just as a dark energy blade whistles toward his head. Summoning a barrier, he manages to shield the team from the encroaching darkness. He recognizes the distinct signature of the space Rakshasa's power, drawing a smirk from his adversary. The opponent identifies him as a gluttony Rakshasa, leaving him utterly bewildered as the enemy claims a familial connection. Shouting that he is an only child, he prepares to unleash a spatial counterattack. An ally grabs his arm, warning that their enemy is immortal and beyond simple death. The realization that severing the target's body will only worsen the situation leaves him screaming in agony. He realizes with horror that the entity sustains its immortality by consuming human flesh, forcing him to scream a desperate warning to his allies to avoid decapitating the monster. Trapped in this grim reality, he searches frantically for a way to permanently extinguish such a resilient, regenerative threat. The cycle of predation constricts around him as he prepares his final resort, locking eyes with his menacing, red-eyed adversary. The tattooed warrior demands the whereabouts of the space Rakshasa, leaving Maru to wonder if he refers to the entity imprisoned in the basement. When Marav challenges his intent, the man declares that he will drag them all before the Supreme King of the Abyss. Mara mocks his opponent's leadership, but the enemy draws twin swords and declares he has no choice but to use force. The warrior leaps into an aerial strike, forcing Maru to brace his defenses against the blade. Realizing that brute force is insufficient, Maru concludes that only a strike to the brain can halt the creature's rapid regeneration. A spider monster crashes through the floor, and a woman shouts for everyone to prepare to fight. She engages the beast while an ominous figure traps the others inside a barrier. Amidst the panic, the Gangwa Island team arrives on orders from Chief Yu to execute an emergency evacuation. They urge the wounded to escape, but the spider cuts off their path. Ji-won cries out in terror as the group realizes the creature has them cornered. Clutching a glowing, jagged wound, a man warns of their impending doom while his comrade steels himself to confront the threat. The tattooed warrior lunges, catching Maru off guard as he cries out in agony from the sudden, jarring impact. Reeling from the strike, the attacker dismisses the skirmish as a mere nuisance, treating the battle like a trivial inconvenience. He lunges again, attempting to crush Maru underfoot in a display of overwhelming predatory force. A female warrior joins the assault, swinging her blade to cut Maru down. Clutching his mangled arm, Maru realizes the spear's impact has left him severely compromised and struggling to stand. An ally shouts a warning to Chana just as the tattooed attacker charges with his dual red blades drawn. Chana freezes in shock, only to be ambushed from behind by the relentless assailant. The attacker reveals glowing yellow eyes and sharp fangs, his humanity slipping away as he fully embraces his monstrous state. He chokes Maru and holds a blade to his throat, demanding to know why the gluttony Rakshasa protects humans. The antagonist threatens to sever Maru's limbs, mocking his choice to fight for a race that is ultimately nothing more than prey. Maru stares as red markings surface on his skin, preparing to resist the assault. Black liquid pools beneath the attacker's feet, revealing the harvested eyes of his victims as he threatens to drag them all into the abyss. Dismissing Maru as a bothersome pest, the monster's own eyes leak dark fluid in a grotesque manifestation of his power. Standing in the darkness, Maru questions his own numbness, wondering if he has finally succumbed to the void within him. He decides that killing the attacker is pointless, shifting his priority entirely to the safety of his team. Struggling with internal pain, Maru focuses his remaining strength to reach out toward his comrades. The team suddenly jolts, waking up on a futuristic platform as they realize they've been transported outdoors. The Oakman has used his ability to silently move them to safety, pulling them clear of the immediate danger zone. Chana orders an immediate civilian evacuation, while Dokman commands the Ganhwa team to follow him into the fray. Watching him with growing concern, the team wonders if Maru can survive the facility's collapse. A slap jolts him awake as he struggles to stay conscious. He gestures for the others to follow, pushing toward the basement to secure their position. Gathered in the industrial chamber, they finalize their plan to defend the structure at all costs. Maru considers using spatial removal to erase the entire area, hoping to permanently kill the immortal. His allies warn that unleashing such power is far too reckless, forcing them to seek a safer alternative. Before they can strategize, an explosion rips through the floor. As the building structure crumbles, Maru resolves to hunt down the hidden boss he sensed earlier. The enemy waits in the rubble, already poised to attack. The tattooed man looms over them, sneering that he has finally found everything he came here to claim. The antagonist asks if they truly intend to stand in his way again. He mocks their human persistence, challenging the four of them to face him in a final fight. Refusing to back down, Maru insists they will overcome him by leveraging their numbers. A purple energy blast slams into them, forcing Maru to yell for his team. As energy fills the room, the group shouts to make sense of the chaos. The swordsman smiles at the crowd, admitting he is bored of his immortality. The warrior finds the confrontation intriguing, bearing his tattooed skin as he looms over the group. Maru recognizes him as one of the 8 gods, and wonders if this entity orchestrated their entire summoning. He freezes in disbelief as the foe adopts the distinct combat style of the late director Ildu. A man in a floral shirt approaches leader Bei, and commands him to surrender his memories immediately. Through telepathic force, the man probes deep into Bei's mind to extract the secrets he needs. With stolen knowledge, the telepath announces he will take the lead. Maru shifts his stance to execute Dokman's plan, bracing himself against the encroaching tide of red energy. Although the Inchan chief initially scoffs at these orders, the other regional leaders move to follow Dokman's lead. The tattooed warrior laughs at their defensive formation, mocking their desperate attempt to hold the line. He drives a blade into his own chest to fuel a destructive surge. Allies cry out warnings to maintain a defensive stance, knowing their standard weapons cannot harm the immortal foe. As the monster lunges, the team struggles to stall for time while the Inchan chief prepares her delayed ability. She lands on the battlefield, signaling that only 60 seconds remain until her power reaches full activation. The warrior strikes again, his form radiating the suffocating red energy of the abyss. Maru and his allies fight to hold their ground, enduring the relentless pressure of their taunting enemy. Blades flash as the entity impales his targets, threatening to annihilate the entire team in one stroke. Maru shouts a desperate warning to his companions before unleashing a spinning counterattack to disrupt the onslaught. As allies fall, one man unleashes a burst of energy to hold the line. A warrior lunges forward, deflecting magical blades with bare fists before clashing steel against scales, his defense line fracturing under the pressure. The steel scale user screams in agony during a mid-combat transformation, while a cloaked figure dismisses his suffering as mere youthful impatience. Energy tentacles erupt as the combatants trade lethal blows to survive. When a companion collapses, a carnivorous ability user manifests, prompting a frantic report that the first bind is successfully complete. The team rushes to finish the second bind, but the man anchoring the structure warns the Jahalo chief that only 30 seconds remain. An incineration user steps forward, igniting the very air with roaring flames to finalize the target's destruction. With the timer ticking down, they incinerate the foe, though the victory feels hollow as they scramble to retreat from the ruins. A mysterious voice whispers that Maru is destined to fight, leaving him to wonder if the space Rakshasa is truly gone. A sense of smell user suddenly detects the lingering scent of their enemy, just before red tendrils descend to slaughter the survivors. Violence erupts as red energy shreds bodies, scattering limbs while the figure stands amidst the slaughter, slicing an armored warrior in half with lethal, supernatural intensity. The attacker lunges forward, leaving a mangled hand behind as black liquid leaks from a severed finger and red tendrils erupt from the fresh wound. Red energy surges, tearing through the man in the suit until he screams in agony, his skeletal form exposed to the raw power of the abyss. He grips his glowing weapon tightly as a titan-like creature reveals its flayed skeletal anatomy to the terrified survivors. A spear slams into the earth, forcing Maru to shield a woman within a barrier as others flee. After a final strike, the attacker says it is boring and carries his unconscious companion through the ruins. He observes the rubble, then demands the location of gluttony from a captive, vowing to return as he steps through a fiery portal. Distressed, the blonde character stands under falling water, while elsewhere, survivors regroup among the wreckage as a man in a suit screams in terror. The government headquarters lies in total ashes after the violence, and the immortal Rakshasa has stolen the entity capable of ending humanity. Maru acknowledges their defeat while looking up at the night sky, left wondering what move they should make next. The system activates abyssal mist to restrict vision, and officials panic as the government headquarters is decimated, prompting claims of an alien invasion. A streamer reports on the spreading yellow gas, while official news channels mask the truth by labeling the catastrophic explosion a mere gas leak. Amidst the aftermath of this citywide destruction, Maru reels from news of the devastation, his turmoil peaking when his phone suddenly vibrates with an urgent incoming call. His mother pleads for his safety, and though he lies to reassure her that he's secure on Ganhwa Island, The proximity of his usual commute to the decimated headquarters leaves him shaken. Fearing the immortal's escape, he recalls the monster's treatment of its chained captive. Before he can process the dread, men storm the restroom to confront him, insisting he stop hiding and report immediately to Chief Yu at the emergency department. Inside the secluded meeting room, the chiefs deliberate on the risks of their temporary base, fully aware that the immortal is hunting Maru specifically because of his connection to the 8 gods. Tempers flare as the betrayal of Ildu comes to light, with many voicing their deep-seated fears that Maru will inevitably lose his humanity and succumb to the same predatory transformation. Others push back against this suspicion, arguing that he is actively suppressing the gluttony Rakshasa and remains their only tactical asset capable of matching an 8 god. Dokumen intervenes to unify the squabbling chiefs, urging them to prioritize the hunt for the immortal over internal mistrust, while reminding them of his own history as the original team leader. With the target still at large, the team shifts their focus to meticulous tactical planning, banking on a woman's ability to seal the monster if they can only buy her the necessary minute to prepare. Skepticism ripples through the room as one man scoffs at the proposal, insisting that stopping an immortal Rakshasa is a fool's errand. Tensions flare when the others defend the Venus flytrap ability, firing back that his cynicism does nothing to mitigate the looming threat of the abyss. An elder intervenes to silence the younger members, redirecting the group toward tactical coordination to find a way to neutralize their elusive foe. Maru steps forward to suggest trapping the enemy within the black space, provided someone can pin the creature down for 5 crucial seconds. With the strategy solidified, the team offers him their support, placing their faith in him as the only one capable of bearing the burden of this fight. He soon departs for Mani Mountain on Ganwa Island, deliberately positioning himself as lone bait to draw the immortal Rakshasa away from civilian populations. Inside his tent, he sits in the oppressive silence, unaware that a spectral presence is already tracking his movements from the surrounding forest shadows. The solitude is broken when his colleagues arrive at the campsite, firmly declaring their intention to stay and ensure he does not lose himself to the Rakshasa's corruption. Though he feels their sincerity, the realization that Dakeman ordered them to monitor him leaves Maru frustrated by the persistent lack of trust. They settle in to share a meal of cup ramyeon by the fire, their presence serving as a reminder that he is not alone, which helps quiet his anxiety about the cycle of predation. Even amidst the encroaching darkness, the mood shifts as they bicker over their camping gear, clinging to a fleeting necessary moment of normalcy. The group feels crowded as they huddle in the dark, one desperate member pleading for the immortal Rakshasa to finally end their suffering. Suddenly, a yellow dust warning triggers widespread panic, forcing the team to assess the threat level of an entity that has become impossible to track. A figure emerges from a fiery portal with golden energy as he prepares to unleash his strength. They locate the target, but Maru stares at the gate, knowing they found the source. The enemy smiles, saying he missed him as dark purple energy surges from his arm. Maru questions if they are relying on sheer numbers again, but the antagonist notes that fewer allies are present this time. Mocking the small support team, the enemy claims victory is impossible. Yet Maru confidently declares they will see. This is a revenge match, and the group stands ready to face the solitary, ominous figure waiting in the misty forest. An instructor demands the team restrain the creature's feet within 5 seconds, causing the group to clash over his authority. Arguments break out, but others insist they follow Maru, the operations center, while mocking the total collapse of the department after Ildu died. They abandon the uncooperative, and a bald man charges in, eager to test the strength of his opponent. The warrior draws his sword in the rain, preparing to strike as energy gathers in his yellow eyes. He kneels in the downpour, only for his strike to be halted as he is suddenly encased in ice. The team realizes only those with restraining skills were chosen and channel energy to trigger a magical shockwave. They urge Maru to seize this critical moment and unleash his power. Attackers pin the woman with red wires, knowing they must immobilize her because Maru is currently unable to move. The balding man recoils as combatants clash with glowing strings, while a teammate screams for Namble to pull the rope. Another fighter lunges forward, striking his opponent as the cycle of predation demands its price in blood and pain, increasing gravity 20-fold. The warrior readies himself until a powerful shockwave knocks the enemy's weapon away. Maru strikes, leaving his foes broken on the ground as he asserts his overwhelming power. Teammates argue over the collateral damage, but he dismisses their concerns to focus entirely on immobilizing the immortal Rakshasa. He insists on immediate action, desperate to open the black space and confront the source of the cycle. Applying 20 times gravity, he prepares his blade, intending to multiply his slash power to shatter the enemy. Gripping his glowing sword in the rain, he readies the final blow as the abyss hungers for more. A creature orders a defense of the 500-meter radius, forcing the team to hold back the collapsing mountain. They struggle to contain the immortal Rakshasa, fearing it will regenerate elsewhere if they fail to hold the line. Smell-tracking units confirm their roles, while the team prepares for the second phase of the battle. Laughter turns to violence, as the tattooed man relentlessly kicks his opponent, declaring his own overwhelming strength. He challenges his foe to a duel, crushing him until he says, "Caught you." Maru seizes his target, while the suited man taunts the defeated, tattooed warrior for his futile struggle. 4 allies with glowing eyes step forward, ready to intercept any reinforcements and maintain control over the battlefield. The man warns his companion that quitting is not an option, even as the warrior prepares to make a final stand. An entity manifests, and the warrior asks, "Am I in a phantom?" Their leader commands focus, warning that in 5 seconds, the team must strike as Maru channels his power. They coordinate to keep the enemy trapped in this phantom state, creating an opening for Maru to finalize his attack. The entity strikes with its staff and the warrior pins it with a spear. Energy erupts, forcing the man to spit blood as he takes the hit. The combatants swarm their opponent while a creature bites into his flesh. Followers restrain the target, shouting, "We must buy time for Han Maru." Maru unleashes a purple aura as he is swarmed by enemies, while his allies press the attack with golden weapons. After overcoming this adversity, Maru gains new stats and skills, leaving his powerful enemy dead on the ground. The aftermath leaves a desolate battlefield where a lone soldier walks slowly among the fallen. The general notes the retreat, saying, "All the enemies have run away, let's chase them." A warrior joins the pursuit, gripping his father's helmet as the man smirks, fully trapped in the cycle of predation. Nearby, a soldier presents a group of captured civilians to his superior, asking for instructions on how to dispose of them. The commander orders, "Cut off their necks," shocking a subordinate who asks, "They're just civilians, must we kill them?" The commander states, "That is because I like seeing people die," as he draws his blade. He leers at a terrified captive, promising to use the remains of his kills to finally reach his goal. A wounded warrior scoffs at his opponent, questioning if he is being attacked by mere psychological illusions. Surrounded, the man realizes, "They are holding me using the memories of when I was still human," while he channels dark energy to break the mental attack. Exhausted fighters rush toward their target, knowing only 4 seconds remain to coordinate their final strike. He dismisses their coordinated techniques as useless tricks, ruthlessly cutting down his attackers amidst the chaotic fray. Maru and an ally ambush the armored opponent, stabbing him directly in the chest during the close-quarters struggle. Maru confronts the figure as someone warns, "The immortal Rakshasa is going to wake up soon." The warrior dodges a strike and slams his blade into the ground, shattering the earth. The soldier holds a young hostage at sword point, forcing the youth to cry out for his father as the soldier threatens immediate execution. A warrior intervenes with a swift, deadly strike, ending the standoff in an instant. With 2 seconds remaining, Maru gathers his energy while a powerful entity ensnares his allies in red threads. He parries a sword strike with a burst of force, watching as his opponent weaves deadly energy strings through the air. The tattooed Rakshasa lunges as time expires, executing a high-speed assault. Maru counters with a shockwave and a kick as time runs out. While grappling in this duel, he realizes his foes sacrifice an arm to intercept a lethal blow. Dark energy erupts between them, and a teammate warns everyone to retreat, fearing the lethal range of the clash. Facing the source of this power, Maru readies his blade as the count nears 0, his eyes burning with intensity. He shifts the ground to dodge the strike and yells for the manhwa team to regroup. He prepares to act, but is caught by a sudden force with 4 seconds left. Deep in the forest, he kneels with his blade drawn while his team gathers, bracing for the imminent impact. To break the deadlock, he shears his hair with a knife, manifesting a drill-like weapon under the suffocating time limit. A lethal spike impales a comrade, while the enemy shatters the defensive barrier shielding the rest of the squad. As the 5-second countdown begins, Maru feels the heavy toll of his past sacrifices, yet he welcomes their arrival. A mysterious figure steps onto the energy surface, and after being struck by a dark entity, Maru screams a desperate command to seal the space. A woman shrieks as he channels his final reserves, narrowly ducking under a surging purple blast. Exerting every ounce of his power, he surges into the snowy battlefield, vowing to neutralize the threat for good. As the team stands amidst the darkness, Maru collapses in agony, both wondering if this struggle finally marks the end. The immortal Raksasa's presence suddenly dissolves, leaving Maru stunned into silence. His allies scramble toward him, certain they have finally secured their victory. They have barely scraped by, yet Maru drops to his knees, struck by a cold, encroaching dread. A sharp, agonizing tremor ripples through him while he stands isolated in the dark. He feels the gluttony Rakshasa stir within, a realization that pushes him to the brink of terror. From the void, a sinister presence manifests, glowing eyes locking onto the hunger growing inside him. Maru collapses in disbelief, recognizing that the immortal is intentionally provoking the gluttony Rakshasa. He gasps in distress, the weight of his grave error in drawing these two entities together crashing down on him. Understanding that both the gluttony entity and the immortal Rakshasa are now locked in a cycle of predation, he realizes he must intervene before his own mind shatters. He prepares to confront the immortal alone, though his companions refuse to let him face the threat solo. Despite their pleas, he insists there is no other way, even as the dark power begins to erode his sanity. The Gangwa Island team rejects his isolation, rushing into the breach to follow him directly into the void. Maru struggles as he stands alone at the center of the black space. His friends arrive in the abyss, demanding to know why he chose such a reckless path without their support. He reveals that here, he can finally use spatial removal without restraint, hoping to eradicate the threat in one final strike. They resolve to pin the immortal down, racing forward together because they know failure means total annihilation. A figure flees through the darkness as heavy, echoing impacts signal the relentless approach of a pursuit. A warrior slashes with a glowing blade, delivering a strike so powerful it tears through the night. Under the moonlight, the leader orders everyone into formation, though the team struggles with the exhaustion of an endless, draining battle. As he lights a cigarette, the group voices their dread of a worst-case scenario, fearing a threat even greater than the immortal Rakshasa. They realize that if Maru is consumed by the gluttony Rakshasa, it will trigger that nightmare, as the abyss always demands a price. A tattooed warrior lunges forward, his blade crackling with energy as he commands his opponent to wake up. The clash intensifies in the shadows, with 3 fighters charging forward to engage the lethal entity. The attacker reaches out and demands his enemy to bow. He lunges again, his body surging with red lightning as he prepares to strike. Maru channels dark energy to unleash spatial removal, a technique designed to erase matter and break the cycle of the abyss. The tattooed warrior parries the assault with a swing that cracks the air. Energy crackles as a man strikes at a cloaked figure who retaliates with dark tendrils that cause agonizing corruption. Shocked that his spatial strike failed, Maru resolves to immobilize his opponent by aiming directly for the brain. Their duel stalls as frustration grows and their eyes glow with malice. The warrior parries another strike, his arm mutating into a glowing red limb, prompting a desperate warning for everyone to dodge. The 2 silhouettes collide in a flash while trading blows. Blood sprays from a strike, but his opponent counters by impaling him. The assailant grabs his victim by the throat and slams him with a heavy strike. He declares he will kill his opponent right there, intending to use the death to finally awaken the gluttony Rakshasa. The tattooed antagonist presses a blade against Maru's throat, leaving him frozen in the absolute certainty of his own demise. An ally screams for Maru to trigger spatial removal, but their enemy only sneers, threatening to feast on his flesh for his constant interference. Shaken by the lethal pressure of the blade biting into his skin, Maru realizes the horrific gravity of his predicament. Mocking his struggle, the antagonist decides to let his victim rest, watching as Maru collapses into unconsciousness with blood streaming from his nose. Despite his attempt to remain composed, Maru is visibly distraught when his captor forces his jaw open with a cruel grip. Hesitation grips Maru as he realizes that unleashing spatial removal now will inevitably erase everyone present, including his own teammates. Confirming this grim consequence with a cold laugh, the attacker declares that none of them will survive the resulting void. Surrounded by a suffocating dark aura, Maru struggles with the impossible choice while blood drips from his battered face. He attempts to confront the shadowy figure, but is suddenly swallowed by swirling energy as the abyss demands its required sacrifice. Watching in horror, his allies see Maru narrowly dodge the assault and urgently shout for them to flee the battlefield. A dark entity slashes Maru's hand, forcing him to push his inner power to its most agonizing absolute limit. Defeated and broken, he lies on the ground as the tattooed antagonist continues his relentless barrage of dark energy. Maru moves slightly, but his opponent punches him while he lies defenseless. Clapping a hand around his head, the enemy forces them into a fierce struggle where Maru clenches his teeth against the searing pain. The antagonist prepares to pause again, his hand gripping Maru's face until he bleeds and his clothes are shredded from the exertion. Shock registers on Maru's face as his enemy claims to have discovered the perfect method for his execution, right as his space-manipulating abilities flicker and vanish. The tattooed man stands amidst the void, declaring that he and Maru will be erased together as the black space collapses. With a sudden lightning-infused motion, the warrior decapitates his opponent, concluding the struggle with a single, swift strike. He looms over the fallen man, while waves of red energy pulse around his body, sustained by the cycle of predation that binds them both. His eyes glow with intense, predatory light as he flaunts his newfound immortality, fully aware that the abyss demands a heavy price for every stolen life. Maru spots his party, but his focus shifts to the glowing figure rising from the shadows. The opponent mocks his desperation, expressing cold disbelief that he would throw his life away in such a futile attempt to kill. Maru screams that he has no intention of dying, but the swordsman merely draws his blade, reminding him that the debt must be paid in full. A sudden slash leaves Maru gasping in agony as red energy erupts from his own hand, tearing through his remaining defenses. He challenges the man by claiming a form of immortality of his own, even as he collapses to the ground, broken and incapacitated. The antagonist looms over him, preparing to absorb his essence, until a skeletal hand manifests above Maru, leaving the attacker momentarily shocked. As the tattooed man asserts his dominance over a mortal body, Maru realizes in horror that his own flesh has been reduced to a skeletal form. Ensnared by suffocating red tendrils, he cries out in despair, realizing that both combatants are destined to perish within this crumbling prison. The opponent grips his exposed skull, declaring that he will confiscate everything, including Maru's soul, as final punishment for his defiance. The monster claims there is no afterlife and demands to consume him because he broke the rules. Maru can only utter a desperate refusal as the spectral entity descends to finish him off. Days pass within the oppressive shadows, and while the grueling training eventually ends, a powerful creature continues to watch from the darkness. The monster roars in fury, prompting Maru to channel a dark, menacing power as he prepares to strike back against the endless cycle of the abyss. Sharp claws tear into his flesh, the agony of the gluttony Rakshasa consuming him from within. He roars in fury, but a dark hand reaches out to touch his tattooed skin, fulfilling the cycle where the rulemaker is eventually consumed. The beast bites down, leaving nothing but a skull behind as the abyss claims its prize. Maru wonders if the gluttony Rakshasa is truly aiding him or simply waiting for the right moment to devour his spirit. As a claw reaches toward his face, he questions if his end has come, trapped forever in this abyssal prison. The black space begins to dissolve, and a monster looms over him to complete the hunt. He contemplates if this entity protects him only because his own survival is a necessity for the Rakshasa to persist in their parasitic cycle. A sinister laugh echoes, and Maru accepts that while he perishes, Chana and Eden might still find a way to survive. He shouts for them to turn back, and Chana screams his name in alarm. Moments earlier, he had confronted them in the forest, convinced that he could never be defeated. Chaina and Eden now stand in confusion, wondering where he disappeared to after they were forcibly ejected from the black space. They realize he is locked inside, having sacrificed his spatial ability to ensure the immortal Rakshasa is trapped with him. The group stands in the forest, fearing he will die alongside the immortal Rakshasa. Refusing to let him perish, they prepare to take action. Chaina produces a severed finger of his, the only remnant that might allow for a revival if he successfully obtained the immortal ability. They gather in the darkness to find a way to restore his body. Frustrated by the rigid constraints of the system, they offer their own strength to bring him back. They plead for his return, staring at one another in tense silence, hoping against hope that the cycle of predation can finally be broken. He stares into the void with focused resolve, accepting his end. Shadows swallow his vision, while a cryptic entity demands to know the source of that radiance, dragging him toward a looming monstrosity within the abyss. He lunges to confront the multi-headed horror, but a mysterious hand reaches out from the gloom to intervene just as the beast prepares to claim him. A violent surge of energy flares when a red-eyed figure manifests, and he slips helplessly into the dark void. Dozens of glowing hands converge on his position, and he lashes out with a desperate strike that triggers the acquisition of the Demon Eyes trait, revealing the flow of mana and hidden weaknesses. Lying exhausted on the cold floor, he remains motionless until his allies finally locate him, shocked to find his broken body unconscious and exposed. Waking in a haze of confusion, he wonders how he escaped the black space, only to watch his teammates recoil in horror as they discover he has lost both his arms. Overwhelmed by the heavy price paid for his survival, he begs for yellow dust to dull the agony, prompting his annoyed companions to demand he cover himself. The group reflects on the defeat of the immortal Rakshasa and gathers for a somber meal to mark his return, though they remain haunted by the power vacuum left behind by Ildu. Soon after, a mysterious figure answers a call from Young Un, who summons all regional chiefs to an emergency meeting to prepare for the 8 gods. A bloodied figure whispers a menacing promise to meet in Seoul, then turns his back on the wreckage to walk away from the scene of the latest slaughter. The 8 gods remain a looming threat, and Mara waits in anticipation to test his strength against them. Because the abyss acts as a prison and the cycle of predation dictates that the one who cleans up the mess must walk into the tide, he prepares for the next shift. A sudden stinging slap serves as a harsh awakening, fueling his vow to make his enemies pay for the humiliation. Our briefing reveals that the immortality Rakshasa's emergence decimated 90% of the Seoul headquarters, leaving the survivors shattered. Yu Young-yoon notes that if the creature had not retreated back into the abyss, the entire city would have suffered total destruction. Regional chiefs gather to discuss the 8 legions, as Li Hyang demands answers regarding the secret objects hidden by the late Ildu. Recalling the space Rakshasa's prophecy that monsters will pour from the sky like rain, the leaders prepare for the coming catastrophe. Don Yuehua seeks intelligence on the 8 legions, confirming both the immortality and space Rakshasas remain active threats. The briefing turns to Maru, who now hosts the gluttony Rakshasas, forcing the team to brace for the remaining 5 enemies. One official suggests a grim solution to the cycle: sacrifice Maru to the abyss to appease the invaders. Chief EJ watches over Jejudo, plotting to mass-produce high-grade ability users while the abyss is distracted by taking him. A colleague erupts in anger, accusing the leadership of mirroring the cold, sacrificial stance of the late Ildu. Critics argue that abandoning their sole ally against the 8 legions is a foolish strategy, especially after the fatal mistake of eliminating Jong Ildu. The team relied on Bang Chun-sik, yet tensions rise as some question if Yu acted wrongly. Han Maru prepares to address the growing confusion. Reflecting on these events, the group acknowledges they lack the manpower to withstand the 8 legions, so Maru offers food to help settle their nerves. He wonders if this is his final chance, warning that he must never be captured by the 8 legions regardless of the cost. Trapped in a training center for days, Maru grows frustrated by the confinement, until he suddenly realizes something is fundamentally wrong. He feels like he is in a prison without bars, and when Eden enters the room, Maru is startled by the unexpected arrival. Maru demands to know how much longer he must stay locked up, but Eden tells him to take his laundry and get lost. Eden pulls him up and scolds him for being reckless, reminding him that everyone is suffering through hell right now, not just him. The fissure in the city expands at an incredible rate, causing anxiety among office staff who wait for food deliveries while running for safety. Maru laments his disrupted office life, prompting a colleague to tell the team leader that he wants to return to his duties. Fearful that Maru might catch the abyss's eye, the team leader orders him to stay put, a decision he reluctantly accepts. A mysterious figure with red eyes confronts Maru about exposing Ildu, but he reassures them that he will handle the fallout. The rival questions the hypocrisy of the recent decisions, leaving him to feel that everything has ended. An intense alarm triggers and the woman grabs Maru's arm to stop him from leaving, before commanding everyone to move out. Later, Maru rests while others discuss the surprisingly young headquarters chief, who is only 21 years old. They discuss how the space Rakshasa once cherished that young chief, but they soon stop the small talk to focus on the threat ahead. Finding a Rakshasa in the woods, they realize with dread that they are being confronted by 3 of them at once. The Iljuman Gate looms open, flooding the forest in a golden light that leaves the team paralyzed by shock. Nearby, a woman clutches a bloodied knife, watching in terror as spheres of her own blood drift upward to feed the gate. Two warriors brace against a fierce, fiery blast as the vortex pulls everything toward the opening, leaving the onlookers to dread what calamity comes next. Maru struggles in isolation, his body failing to recover since his clash with the immortal Rakshasa, as his yellow sand refuses to manifest when he needs it most. A man with sharp fangs approaches him, mockingly dubbing him the hope of humanity before inviting him to share a meal and chattering incessantly about Busan's pork soup. He rambles on about Kwangali Beach, taunting Maru for his solemnity. Maru shouts back that he enjoys the stories, though he barely conceals his mounting irritation. Insisting that Maru call him Big Brother, the stranger begins to mock his lack of charm and experience, pressuring him to find a girlfriend. When Maru refuses to look at photos of his daughter, the man persists, turning the atmosphere at the table tense and suffocating. He stares down the sweating, distressed Maru, forcing him to maintain a hollow smile as the psychological pressure intensifies. The man tells him to laugh while he can, promising that harder times wait ahead. A month later, Maru finally snaps at his companions, declaring his intent to kill them despite their facade of luxury. He prepares to break the cycle, knowing the one who creates the rule must eventually be met by the one who breaks it. Though he gains the eye of truth, mana detection, and mana manipulation, he feels a growing sense of abandonment as the 8 legions fail to show themselves. On the beach, Maru meets an ethereal entity, offering a reward for his labor. Ignoring the entity's hollow offer, Maru walks away, only to stumble upon thugs beating a man and demanding payment for their lost debts. He interrupts the assault, stepping forward to warn the aggressors that they will soon regret their violence. A pale, long-haired figure looms over the group, yet the thugs merely mock the strange, sudden appearance. The figure closes the distance instantly, pressing a cold blade against the throat to seize total control of the situation. While the confused victim struggles to comprehend the threat, Maru retreats to a quiet spot, desperate to sleep and forbidding any further interruptions. The peace is shattered when a sudden, unseen attack leaves a man mortally wounded, blood spraying from his severed neck. Watching the victim collapse, his companions freeze in shock, completely paralyzed by the swift, unprovoked brutality. The pale assailant toys with his knife for a moment before snatching up another weapon, eager to continue the methodical slaughter. Combat erupts in a frantic blur of speed, ending only when the pale figure pauses to slice into their own arm. A blue-haired man falls with a slashed throat, and as the dust settles, Maru clears the remaining enemies from the area. The survivor begs for his life, as the man in the suit explains that their abilities are lethal. The pale entity looms over a man begging for mercy, ignoring his desperate pleas as he prepares the final blow. Nearby, a woman watches the carnage, her mind fixated on the bizarre, repetitive remark about the target's clothes. The silver-haired man strolls casually along the shore, his eyes scanning the horizon for the entity known as Devour. He tracks Devour down and finds the captive bound in red chains. The captive struggles against the energy and asks what is happening to him. He questions the true nature of the devoured natural, reaching out with trembling fingers as the power remains tantalizingly out of reach. A voice suddenly cuts through the tension, calling out to Maru, who is promptly kicked and urged to wake up by an impatient associate. The man sighs, remarking that Maru is difficult to handle before ordering him to pack for babysitting duty. He contemplates the cycle of the abyss, where one creates, breaks, and cleans up the mess, then tells Maru it is time to go home. Absolute will nullifies Maru's status effects, but he returns to find the headquarters empty, as everyone has retreated to their offices due to the absence of the 8. Yu is confronted about the necessity of the vice directors remaining, but the entire region is placed on emergency alert as notch sightings skyrocket. Monsters swarm the area day and night, dragging the team into a state of constant, relentless combat. Maru ruthlessly cuts down and punches the attacking creatures, fighting simply to survive the onslaught. Told that Soul is in mess, Yu prepares to head back and watches as the others depart. They discuss the uneasy calm before the storm. Maru offers an awkward goodbye and walks away. Sensing an impending shift in the air, he checks his phone and realizes with sudden dread that it is his birthday. Alone in the silence of his room, he receives a surprise call from his mother. She mentions she is preparing soup for his birthday, but Maru dismisses the sentiment, citing the demands of the emergency alert. After the line goes dead, he complains to himself that his co-workers could not even bother to provide a simple gift certificate. He vows to destroy everything his antagonist holds dear, but he is startled when his subordinates arrive, having moved into the downstairs unit to keep him under constant surveillance. They enthusiastically wish him a happy birthday, leaving him shocked that they managed to dig the date out of his personnel profile. One subordinate punches a man for being clueless, then urges Maru to go meet his friends rather than moping alone. Chased out of his own home with nowhere to go, Maru wanders through a dark tunnel, confused by a sudden, jarring sound. He pauses at a street food stall, mind drifting to the Devour knuckle while hunger sets in, leading him to order a quick meal. While eating, he reflects on that creature, feeling unsettled by the severed connection since his escape from the dark space. Trauma from the abyss haunts him, leading him to wonder if the entity he fought in his dreams remains a looming threat within the cycle of predation. He considers attempting to reach out to the Devour knuckle, but the inherent danger of such a gamble stops him, knowing that anyone who breaks the rules of this prison pays a heavy price. A weary-looking, white-haired man approaches, and he struggles to place the face. The stranger expresses hurt at being forgotten, forcing him to feign familiarity to avoid an awkward confrontation, despite having no idea who the man is. Insisting they share a history, the stranger offers a portion of his own food, which he accepts with a sense of relief. The newcomer remarks on how strange it feels to be alone in the human world, a comment that leaves him deeply disturbed. As the man speaks of absolute strength, he senses the danger, especially when he spots a knife concealed behind the stranger's back during the invitation to hang out. Meanwhile, at headquarters, the staff prepares to end their shift as a supervisor orders the team to take him out for his birthday. The office erupts into a bickering debate over the risks of a party during an emergency alert, leaving him lost in the shadow of his own irreversible actions. The office staff grumble about Maru's birthday, though one man pauses in sudden, nervous hesitation as he recalls the danger. A gift arrives at the desk, but the team explains they already sent Maru out to socialize and clear his head. Maru suddenly feels a surge of power as he levels up, while his colleagues depart, telling the others to keep a close watch over him. Midnight passes, and the team grows increasingly concerned because Maru is missing and his phone remains unreachable. They fear the 8 have finally reached him, suspecting he has been pulled back into the depths of the abyss. In the darkness, Maru lies bloodied and motionless, caught in the relentless cycle of predation that defines his existence. Suddenly, a violent commotion breaks out in the apartment, sparking shock and confusion among the residents. Eden struggles to restrain an intruder, while his roommate demands to know why he brought such a dangerous stranger home. The intruder, clearly intoxicated and defiant, refuses to leave, leaving the others to wonder if they should just walk away from the mess. He claims the apartment as his own, bitterly complaining that his birthday was completely forgotten by his colleagues. Exhaustion settles over the room, but Maru struggles in pain as if an invisible force is crushing his throat. An assailant pins him down with a blade, whispering that it is finally time to return to the abyss. Maru gasps in terror as the attacker strikes, the blade piercing through the heat of their struggle. They clash in a blur of motion until the attacker activates a mechanical device to channel dark resurrection powers. A hammer blow strikes home, covering the floor in blood as the violent confrontation escalates beyond control. The roommates burst in, horrified to find the room filled with choking yellow dust and the gruesome aftermath of the assault. The assailant claims self-defense, yet the wounded man stands, grimly warning that the abyss has finally come for them all. Maru stares in shock at the bloodied intruder, demanding to know what kind of person Eden brought into their home. Ignoring the chaos, he slams a hammer into his own stomach to seal his power, while the injured man just laughs through the agony of the strike. The man in the tank top suddenly slams his opponent onto the floor, escalating their violent confrontation into a full-scale brawl. Bleeding heavily, the stranger warns everyone to back off, prompting Maru to level a gun at his head and demand his true identity. The assailant asks if he is a Nachal and declares he will kill him because he is one of the 8. As the intruder laughs through a gaping neck injury, a blast of red smoke erupts from his body, catching the team completely off guard. He lunges forward in haze, snapping an arm and stabbing Maru in the chest, forcing him to vomit blood onto the floor. Panic sets in as Maru realizes his abilities are failing, the red smoke effectively neutralizing his powers. Desperate to survive, he bites deep into his own hand to feed on his blood, hoping to satisfy his hunger and end the fight. He wonders why his Devour ability refuses to absorb the enemy's strength, causing a teammate to scream a frantic warning as the battle rages. The group realizes the red smoke suppresses all supernatural abilities, leaving the injured Maru to struggle against his own failing body. Their opponent lunges to neutralize the Nachal, narrowly dodging a desperate sword slash in the high-stakes encounter. Gunfire erupts in the cramped room as they trade rapid strikes, each combatant pushing to land a single lethal blow. The fighting turns visceral. One man is choked while another collapses from the sheer force of the impact. Seizing a hammer to continue the assault, the attacker forces a desperate intervention to protect a woman from the ongoing violence. Sensing a sudden lethal shift in the air, Maru realizes he must draw the fight away before his friends are caught in the crossfire. He says goodbye to the group and intercepts the intruder with a mid-air kick. Determined to keep the carnage contained, he baits the assailant toward the balcony, knowing the others cannot survive this level of power. A blade bites deep into his side, and the force of the follow-up strike sends him crashing through the glass, plummeting into the dark city streets below. He coughs up blood, wondering why his healing is so slow after the resurrection knuckle encounter. The attacker drops from the heights to loom over him in the downpour, sneering that he missed his chance to finish the job while his prey slept. Ignoring the order to stop struggling, Maru pulls himself up from the shattered debris, laughing as he declares that his shift is over and he is going home. The cycle of predation demands blood, and as the enemy repeats his demand for submission, they both collide in a renewed, desperate flurry of strikes. Maru attempts an upward slash, but his opponent easily deflects the move, responding with a heavy stomp and a kick that rattles his bones. Just as he gathers his remaining strength to throw a punch, a teammate screams for him to retreat, urging the others to leave the intruder to them. A sudden tension ripples through the alley as new figures emerge from the shadows, forcing the combatants to freeze and assess the fresh threat. The antagonist laughs at the futile display, prompting the newcomers to activate a defensive perimeter that traps them all in a lethal struggle. The men freeze, shocked as their powers vanish while red smoke floods the alley. Combatants trade blows, sending one man flying through the air. Their victor looms over him, but they pause as the white-haired man cracks his neck, eager for more. They clash again, and he strikes his opponent down with a single powerful blow. Surrounded by the bodies of the fallen, he stands victorious, his rage still burning. Deciding to change his approach, he leaves fresh corpses in the alley while his remaining enemies panic. The antagonist rushes forward and clashes with his target in midair. After sliding across the ground, he dares his pursuer to follow him into the dark industrial maze. Hanmaru watches the man's intense gaze, wondering at his sudden shift in behavior as the enemy just grins. They sprint through the alley, and he chooses to flee to lure the predator away. He wonders why the power of the 8 is so weak and fears he cannot win. Wounded and sweating, he reaches the school campus to recover, only to stop in sudden, absolute shock. He gasps for air, desperate to find cover while calculating how to bypass the suppression of his devour ability. A body tumbles past the window, a grim reminder of the endless duration of this cycle. Suddenly, a desk shatters into splinters as a figure emerges from the debris to claim command of the room. The man in the floral shirt finds him bleeding and unconscious, yet he refuses to let his prey expire just yet. Snapping under the suffocating pressure, he lunges forward to land a desperate, adrenaline-fueled punch to the enemy's face. His opponent merely laughs at the sluggish movement, mocking the effort while blood drips steadily down his forehead. The fight turns lethal as the antagonist tears his arm away, leaving him broken and staring blankly into the distance. In confusion, the enemy inspects his own rotting limb, taunting him about how the red smoke effectively neutralizes devour. He sneers that an entity of the 8 should never be this pathetic as he watches him lie motionless. Without warning, he grabs him by the hair, demanding to know if he has completely lost his grip on his power. He struggles to recover, his body failing and bleeding as he begs for a momentary reprieve. Red chains erupt from the gloom to bind him. Red energy chains restrain him, trapping him in the very power he tried to contain. His captor dismisses the loss of control, promising that once they return to the other side, Devour will be pulled back into the abyss. The antagonist lands with earth-shattering force, a smile curling his lips as he prepares to abandon the wreckage. Battered and tattered, he finds the will to refuse, his skin marked by a strange, clockwork-like tattoo. He stumbles toward the infirmary, screaming at his own mind to relinquish control as he battles for survival. He strikes his opponent with an explosion, but a man in a suit orders him to ignore his doubts and finish the mission. Collapsing amidst the burning ruins, he can only mutter that this entire situation is nothing but annoying. Amidst the wreckage, the bloodied man searches for his vanished assailant, eventually collapsing as his strength fails. Looking back at the events of the previous month, he recalls the sudden, jarring order to enter a dungeon. His team gathers in the forest, frantically preparing defensive measures against the inevitable return of the 8. A quiet reflection is cut short when a lethal strike tears through the air, claiming a life in a spray of blood. Stepping through a threshold, Maru is struck by a sudden, unnatural chill. Yet he forces himself forward to complete the mission. He shivers at the sudden cold, then readies his fist to deliver a blow. The pressure of his superior's gaze weighs on him until he stumbles from the restroom, collapsing before his stunned co-workers. He gasps out a warning that the 8 have arrived, instantly shattering the fragile peace they had managed to hold. Emergency crews scramble as reports confirm an 8 god is manifested inside his apartment, sparking immediate panic. The injured survivor says nothing of the truth, that Maru invited the entity inside, and stares ahead with weary calculation. He blames his own complacency for the disaster, realizing too late that the reinforcements from headquarters were never going to be enough. As a colleague asks if Maru is safe, the group faces the grim reality of their collective failure. Headquarters receives a status update on the Ganhwa Island team, though confusion mounts as the group continues to guard their captive while Go remains missing. A vehicle pulls into the dark alley, and the sudden arrival leaves the officers waiting in the shadows, stunned. One officer reaches out, sensing the individual they have cornered is no mere human, while a woman apologizes for her lapse in focus, mentioning that an old classmate finally contacted her. Tempers flare as the men argue over a missed report, one of them kicking his companion for failing to communicate the critical incident. He warns that the number 8 is suppressing their abilities, rendering them as vulnerable as ordinary civilians in the impending clash. The team realizes Maru is their only hope, since he can generate his own yellow dust, but even his devour ability has been neutralized by this threat. As search teams scramble to track the entity before it causes mass casualties, a wounded man collapses, forcing his colleagues to rush to his aid. The vice director is alerted to the crisis, his subordinates urging him to witness the emerging threat for himself. Horror dawns on the team as they confirm they are facing an 8, a being created for the sole purpose of eradicating humanity. The man looms over her and threatens to cripple her hand, demanding to know where the Devour knuckle is. She refuses to yield, knowing they are attempting to exploit the hidden body parts used to fuel resurrection powers. The enemy smiles, his predatory nature visible, as he asks how many pieces of the target remain to be hunted. When asked why he cares, he laughs that he needs to know how many times he must kill his target, only to be told he will have to repeat the act 100 times. The officers react with frustration to the impossible demand, but the man rejects their hostility with a cold, singular refusal. He suddenly proposes a way to stop the fighting, leaving the onlookers stunned by the unexpected offer. Declaring that if he must play the villain, he will be the most heinous in history, he insists that Maru be allowed to enter the abyss of his own accord. As the group gathers to process the demand, they realize the stakes involve far more than just Maru, as the cycle of predation tightens its grip on them all. The 8 gods issue their ultimatum, demanding all Nachal users return to the abyss as the sole resolution to the war, leaving Han Maru to sit amidst the stillness and contemplate the cycle of predation. He and his team stare at the sky, wondering if the other vice directors will ever accept the condition that their people must sacrifice themselves to the abyss to finally end the hostilities. Watching the officers on the screen, Han Maru knows that among the 1,500 members of the Special Civil Service, many will perceive this demand as a direct death sentence. The assembly of officers gathers in a tense silence, grappling with the impossible, agonizing choice of whether to end the war by effectively committing collective suicide in the abyss. Hanmaru sits alone in the dark, haunted by the realization that the 8 gods are merely stalling to force this outcome, though he quietly sharpens his focus for a potential confrontation. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman reviews the proposal with the 8, forcing them to assign a watcher for Hanmaru, who now serves as the unwilling center of the ceasefire. A subordinate confronts his captain in frustration, demanding to know why he must monitor Hanmaru, only to be told that no other agent possesses the strength to stand against him. Panic surges through Hanmaru, terrified that he is being dragged back into the abyss despite the truce, especially since he cannot trust an enemy who previously betrayed him under the guise of friendship. He notes the naturals stopped appearing, and as the enemy gives them time to decide, he pauses to file an incident report. Exhausted and burdened by deep-seated guilt, he visits a comrade in a hospital, feeling that his past actions remain an inescapable, festering stain on his conscience. His powers surge with a familiar, dangerous heat, yet he knows that even if he acts to save others, he is the one who caused this suffering, ensuring the cycle of the abyss remains unbroken. Distressed, he struggles with the absurdity of being forced to live under the same roof as his kidnapper, his internal conflict deepening as he navigates the dark, oppressive hallway. Hanmaru explodes in anger upon seeing his own clothes being worn, but the kidnapper only smiles and playfully suggests they fight over the shirt, which still bears its store tag. When Hanmaru tells him to go to hell, the kidnapper replies that he has already returned from there, pulling the shirt over him. Maru eyes the intruder with a melancholic gaze, his desire to end the man's life clashing with the reality of his presence. He finds the silver-haired figure sleeping in his bed wearing his clothes, and the discovery immediately leads to a fight. Though Maru is desperate for rest, the suffocating tension forces him back into a cycle of violent friction with his unwanted guest. The intruder pins him against the wall and delivers a sharp kick, mockingly questioning if his host has forgotten how to sleep peacefully. Lashing out, Maru counters with a kick of his own, his mounting restlessness fueling a surge of raw, unbridled frustration. His tormentor grips him by the face, ridiculing the failed peace deal before landing a heavy punch to demand silence. The assailant muses on the efficiency of wiping out humanity to end the conflict, tightening his fingers around Mara's throat to emphasize the point. They eventually settle into an uneasy silence to eat, Maru acidly asking if his own bed provided any actual comfort to his captor. The silver-haired man feeds him, sneering at his pathetic human need for sustenance and rest, while noting that the devourer ability remains dormant. His companions are thrown into a panic, reeling from the revelation that Maru can no longer contain the gluttony Rakshasa within him, admitting his strength has waned since he fled the void. Maru faces the frustration of his friends, who feel betrayed by his silence. Despite the clear danger posed by his unstable abilities, the group resolves to move forward with the mission as planned. He demands instructions on how to regain his control, but the entity he considers his enemy offers nothing but cold indifference. The intruder expresses annoyance, baffled that someone so human could be this difficult to possess, while Devour remains frustratingly out of reach. Maru wonders if this is the reality she predicted, while the predator stares back at him. Driven by anger, Maru throws a punch, yet the man dismisses the blow with a yawn, offering no comfort as he stretches his limbs after the meal. Maru presses for the truth about his loss of control, but his captor only laughs, leaving the consequences of his weakened state shrouded in mockery. He laughs, warning Maru that his gluttony powers will inevitably attempt to seize control, as the abyss always demands its due. Maru keeps a lonely vigil over the sleeping figure, haunted by the realization of the danger surrounding them. A man enters the room and commands him to come out, reminding him that the cycle of predation demands he face the harsh reality outside. He tells Maru to get some sleep, promising to monitor the intruder himself to ensure no further chaos erupts. Forcefully silencing him with a pillow, he sternly orders his charge to rest before he changes his mind. Before leaving, he warns Maru to avoid the dark path his father took, leaving the emaciated man alone in the shadows. Maru sits in the silence, clutching the pillow while grappling with the somber weight of his own existence. He questions the stability of the peace agreement, yet they are both forced to wait for headquarters to reach a final decision. Accepting the deal means all special civil servants must enter the abyss, while refusing forces them to fight the 8 as mere humans. Maru contemplates this choice, feeling a profound helplessness despite his abilities, as he is no longer the one who creates the rules. He resolves to follow the lead and attempts to rest, though the suffocating darkness of the room offers no true solace. A system notification chimes, confirming his new status and granting him increased stats and passive skills to survive the coming war. He realizes he cannot defeat his opponent while Devour remains uncontrolled, so he can only wait for the final word from the office. His plan is to keep the individual distracted to prevent further havoc, knowing their collective future remains bleak regardless of the ceasefire. As the truce holds, Maru observes his companion at the playground, noting that the cycle has finally slowed its frantic pace. Maru tries to embrace the stillness, but his companion suddenly sprints away, forcing him to give chase because the cycle of the abyss demands he keep the killer and the killed in his sights. He contemplates the grim reality of this predation, and sprints up the stairs to hunt, his face twisting into a menacing grin as he prepares to strike. Demanding to know the other's status, he utilizes a high-speed dash to tear through the dark hallways. Reaching the apartment, he clicks the door shut and startles the silver-haired man, manifesting a dark red aura in the confined space. The intruder tells Maru he smells him, so Maru kicks him in the face, and they struggle on the floor. Shrugging off the blow, the man walks away from a bleeding victim to grab a knife and continue his violent rampage. Maru tackles the attacker, stunned by the carnage and the predator's total lack of restraint. Pinning him down, he demands to know if he is acting on his primal knuckle instincts, refusing to allow this bloodshed to continue. The man merely smirks, claiming the victim was already becoming a knuckle, leaving Maru horrified by his cold logic. In the dark, a man cries out for his mother while a figure watches from the shadows. The observer tracks them through the gloom, hungry for the next move in this endless predatory cycle. Police arrive at the complex as a crowd gathers in shock, and an officer arrests a man for the unfolding tragedy. While bystanders whisper about who called it in, the perpetrator wonders aloud how his secret was discovered. Distressed, the man wanders on through the city, contemplating his next move in the tower's trials. Haunted by the memory of a lost child, he wonders if that woman would still be breathing if that specific person had not intervened. Distress lingers as he questions the morality of those who capture criminals, constantly wary that his companion might reveal a true, murderous nature at any moment. Realizing his mother is in danger with Maru nearby, he rushes to her side to explain his arrival, having missed her birthday meal. Realizing she is in danger, he confronts his colleagues as they leave work, demanding to know their true identities. The colleagues introduce themselves, and one instructs him to take his mother home to safety while they handle the 8. After presenting a mysterious package, they settle down to share a meal, where the silver-haired guest expresses intense, joyful anticipation for the food. His mother asks if they are friends, and the guest smiles, claiming they are childhood companions. As they eat, Maru internally accuses the demon of hypnotizing her, then offers to cut the meat for her. He frustratedly demands the scissors to perform the task himself, while his mother pleads with the guests to look after her son. The visitor clarifies that he is the one receiving help from Maru, then reveals a tragic past, admitting he has never once enjoyed a home-cooked meal. Anger flares as they realize the guest is lying about his background. Maru shouts that the man came here to kill him, but his mother simply scolds him to keep eating. Embarrassed to be coddled in front of his guest, Maru hesitates, but his mother insists he eat to prevent his health from regressing to the state it was in during his childhood. The white-haired man casually recounts how Maru suffered from infantile anorexia following his return from the mountain with his father. Stunned by this sudden disclosure, Maru searches his mind, only to realize he has no memory of the period when he stopped eating after that trip. His mother recalls taking him to a psychiatrist to address his severe emaciation, yet the root cause of his condition remained a complete mystery to them both. Visibly distressed, Maru questions if his suffering was truly that profound, while his mother attempts to lighten the heavy atmosphere by offering him fruit. Watching them, the guest realizes this early trauma was the catalyst that taught Maru how to weaponize his own life to keep the gluttony rakshasa on a leash. He decides to nap until an emergency arises, pausing to praise how impressively the young Maru once managed to contain such overwhelming power. A sudden gnawing hunger strikes, echoing the deep isolation of the abyss where the gluttony rakshasa first demanded to be fed. Inside him, the entity pulses with violent red energy, forcing Maru to confront an insatiable predatory hunger that screams to be satisfied. Later that night, the two men stand by a waiting taxi, exchanging brief, tense pleasantries before parting ways beneath the moonlight. Maru grows visibly frustrated when the man suggests setting him up with Chana, demanding he simply leave already. With a smirk, the silver-haired man declares his intent to drag Maru into the abyss, refusing to sit idle any longer. As they prepare to depart, the system confirms the completion of the tutorial floor, instantly transporting all participants into the waiting room. Maru finally snaps, furious that this intruder manipulated his mother and fabricated a friendship just to lure him toward the abyss. Maru turns on his companion, spitting out accusations of feigned affection toward his mother and mocking the man for posing as a savior, only to lure children to the abyss. The silver-haired man scoffs at the very notion of goodness, a dismissive retort that forces Maru to grasp the darker reality behind their clash. Tension spikes during their standoff as the stranger calls him an idiot, leaving the young hunter fuming at the constant, suffocating manipulation. His tormentor notes with disbelief that Maru has managed to fell 2 of the 8, while the hunter realizes the peace treaty is a hollow loophole that leaves civilians defenseless. A grim warning follows that accepting the treaty is already futile, leaving the protagonist standing in a somber, trapped silence. Far away, a powerful, enigmatic figure sits in deep meditation, radiating an ominous aura as the predatorial cycle grinds onward. Maru demands to know why it is already too late, but the silver-haired man simply walks away, perfectly indifferent to the turmoil left in his wake. Watching him retreat into the distance, Maru braces himself to confront the consequences of a reality that continues to shift beneath his feet. Suddenly, a woman lunges forward with a knife to strike, forcing Maru to throw himself into the chaos to intervene. The silver-haired man smirks at the sudden violence, while Maru rushes to check on her, desperate to keep his allies from being discarded. Reflecting on his desperate struggle for survival, he hears her mockingly ask if he even managed to say goodbye to his mother. He admits to feeling a pang of jealousy toward those who can celebrate birthdays with family, a quiet confession of the humanity he fights to hold on to within the abyss. Maru announces he is heading out for a run, prompting Shauna to offer her company. They jog through the night air while he asks for her birthday, hoping to bridge the distance between them with a celebration. Cynicism colors her tone as she dismisses the date, voicing a grim fear that the 8 Legions treaty is merely a death sentence for them all. He notes her detachment when he presses about her safety, though she remains indifferent, claiming she has no family left to worry about. When he reminds her of her mother, she abruptly shifts the focus back to him, chasing him down with a sudden, urgent intensity. Maru stands his ground, shouting that his concern for her safety is genuine. Noticing her pale complexion, he asks if she is ill, and she admits to struggling with anemia for several weeks. He questions if field exhaustion is to blame, but she insists the condition stems from an incident deep in the mountains. She explains that her blood was drawn into the gate during that mission, which she believes is the root of her worsening health. Maru asks if she reported this to Chifu, only to learn that other teams have reported similar alarming symptoms. Shauna smiles, feeling momentarily better, and invites him to dinner on her next day off to make up for missing his birthday. The familiarity of the moment leaves him feeling distressed as she looms over him. Later, he lies in the dark beside his colleague, his mind racing with nervous anticipation regarding their upcoming meal. He tries to force himself into sleep, unaware that an entity with a single red eye is watching him from the shadows. Waking with a start, Maru wonders if the event has finally begun, while a mysterious figure acknowledges his confusion. An entity manifests inside the chamber and paces the floor, surrounded by an aura. The figure levitates and manifests a red orb of energy before consuming the red fruit. Inside the chamber, the entity remains incapacitated, trapped in a state of intense, agonizing transformation. A powerful force manifests, enveloping the room in destructive flames as the cycle of predation tightens its grip on the abyss. Meanwhile, uniformed agents travel in silence, converging on headquarters to execute a coordinated assault. Shock spreads through the halls as these field agents storm the building, leaving the staff to question why their own organization is under siege. The invaders block the entry and strike the man, warning him that access is prohibited. Maru fights back against the security personnel swarming him. Realizing the scale of the disaster, he sees with horror that all 13 branches are being attacked simultaneously. Yu reports that their defenses are failing, as the Seoul headquarters itself faces an imminent collapse. Field agents continue to swarm the facility, prompting desperate calls for an immediate evacuation as the situation spirals out of control. Yu receives an urgent call, but the identity of the caller remains unclear, as the true source of this coordinated chaos is revealed. An ancient tomb has emerged in Chongcheng, and agents are rushing toward the disaster zone. Their erratic behavior confirms they are possessed, so the team demands Maru's immediate presence at the site. A mysterious woman watches from the sidelines as the emergence of a new 8 legions. Rakshasa signals a deeper, calculated betrayal. They realize they were fooled, and Maru prepares to use the subjugation Rakshasa technique. Betrayal burns through Maru as he realizes the enemy used his trust to dismantle their defenses. Searching frantically, he finds her apartment abandoned and the imposter vanished into the night. Reports soon confirm a new threat. The subjugation Rakshasa has emerged in Gangju to claim territory. This entity builds a puppet army from anyone it trains, forcing its victims into a relentless cycle of predation. Connecting the dots to the earlier reports of drained blood, Maru fears his own proximity to the gate may have fueled this nightmare. The burden of being the rule-breaker weighs heavily on him, forcing him to accept that his failure allowed this crisis to ignite. He demands to know where she is and rushes toward the site of the emergence. Panic grips him, certain that she has been captured as a pawn by the throne-bound entity orchestrating this war. Speeding through gridlocked traffic, the team races to intercept the subjugation Rakshasa before its growing army can escape into the abyss. The peace treaty reveals itself as a hollow trap, and with her tactical expertise missing, the team struggles to maintain their composure. Inside the vehicle, accusations erupt as they confront their own naivety and the bitter failure to guard their comrades. Maru admits his blood remained his own, yet he cannot shake the guilt of failing to monitor the enemy's true movements. Trembling with lethal resolve, he knows they must storm the gate to halt the subjugated agents before they are lost to the abyss forever. Maru questions the meaning of his companion's cryptic words, his nerves fraying as the car speeds toward the site. The ally explains that the 8 legions plan to weaponize the subjugated staff against him, forcing him to face a human army in the desert. Watching from the perimeter, the woman and her partner scan the horizon, realizing Go Diotman was right about the ambush waiting for him. They struggle with the dilemma of how to neutralize their former colleagues without causing harm, as any sign of hesitation could lead to their own capture, prompting a desperate search for the Gangwon director. While the group frantically tracks the director, the arrival of uniformed agents in the distance signals that the trap is closing in. The tension peaks when the bus screeches to a halt, and the team stares in disbelief as Maru steps out to confront the threat alone. He stands defiant before the sea of enemies, his fangs bared and his gaze lethal as he demands they reveal Channa's location before he begins his assault. The guards lose their target and ask where he went, while Maru finds a hidden entrance. He reaches the dark, arched doorway, ignoring his pursuers to press forward because he knows the cycle of predation must be broken. Resolving to eliminate a member of the 8 legions to shatter the subjugation, he grits his teeth against the mounting strain. A figure in regal red robes commands their subordinates to capture him and cast him into the abyss, creating a prison for his soul. The subjugated scream in agony while huddling together in the rain, trapped in the cycle of the 8 gods. Maru collapses in pain as the ground shakes, joining a mass of people falling into the dark, dusty sky. He tumbles down a cliffside, swinging his weapon to release a burst of energy as he prepares a final counterattack. After narrowly avoiding a lethal strike, he slams his hand into the ground to battle the shadowy assailants. Wincing in pain as a giant monster opens its maw, he confronts the beast head-on. He dodges a claw, but the high-speed combat forces him to suffer a sudden, painful impact. As warriors struggle, the monster slashes through their defenses, leaving him wounded and bleeding. He avoids being cut because he fears his own immortality skill, a relief only tempered by his intense desire to survive. Skidding through the dust, he realizes he must reach the interior to kill the subjugation Rakshasa and end this suffering. Blocking a blade with his fist, he unleashes a black shockwave into the viscous liquid beneath his feet. Black energy erupts from his head as a tentacle ensnares him, dragging him into the abyss where the cycle continues. A tentacled creature drags him into the depths. Trapped and gasping for air, he writhes as the entity constricts his body, threatening to crush his ribs. He seizes a scrap of fabric and lunges, dragging his opponent through the debris in a desperate bid for freedom. The physical transformation inflicts agonizing pain and dark blood leaks from his neck as his body fights the corruption. Standing over the coughing, gagging man, a teammate watches the grim spectacle of his suffering with a heavy heart. Their leader demands he look ahead and run, threatening anyone who dares interfere with his survival. Lunging forward to feed, he relies on his team to carve a path through the encroaching swarm. They collapse in total exhaustion, yet the leader screams for them to repeat the movement without pause. A powerful figure lands nearby, and the leader shouts a desperate command to flee before they are overwhelmed. Stopping the ground, he dashes through the corridor to ruthlessly cut down the enemies blocking his way. He smiles in relief at his progress until a teammate screams a frantic warning for him to look out. The creature decapitates a figure in the fray. Lying wounded, he realizes his immortality skill is consuming flesh and blood to fuel its growing power. He retaliates with a glowing fist, unleashing a blast that obliterates the surrounding enemies in a flash of light. Witnessing the sudden destruction, the survivors react with shock and visible physical strain. He wakes in a blood-soaked parking garage, confused and shivering from the lingering cold of a freezing container. Staring at his blood-stained hands, he is horrified by the carnage he has wrought in the darkness. Two figures lie dead in the pool of gore, the final remains of the latest massacre. He stares down at his blood-stained hands, struggling to comprehend the massacre unfolding within the tunnel. Nearby, Myung-sik slumps against the wall, his life fading rapidly as the Busan headquarters falls to the invaders. As his regeneration fails, Myung-sik succumbs to his wounds, becoming yet another casualty in the cycle of predation. Mara wonders how to halt the calamity, only to see reports claiming he died in the operation. Across the front, the forces of the Abyss press their advantage, unmoved by the staggering toll of this endless war. A red-haired entity sits on a throne and commands his men to kill those who resist. The order is given to kill everyone who hasn't been subjugated, sending the army into the rain to hunt them all down. Terrified agents look on as they realize the subjugated forces are executing a perfectly coordinated, simultaneous assault. Maru brandishes his blade to shield the survivors from the creature's attack. They scramble to minimize losses, paralyzed by the horrific realization that they are being forced to turn their own powers against one another. The battlefield dissolves into a slaughterhouse as horned entities cut through their ranks with lethal, calculated precision. Agony fills the air while these monsters and the agents trade mortal wounds in a frenzied, desperate struggle for survival. Amidst the scattering debris, a blonde observer watches the carnage with a faint, chilling smile as the others ready their final strike. He offers a curt nod to his rescuers, but dismisses their gratitude, fully aware that the slaughter is far from finished. Panic ripples through the unit as they realize they are entirely encircled by a tide of shadowy figures, forcing them to brace for the monster emerging from the gloom. He glares at the mastermind, swearing to make the creature pay for this devastation as the team readies their weapons amidst the swirling dust. Temptation flares to deploy his invisible hand to carve a path, yet he recoils from the idea, knowing the price of succumbing to that corrupting influence is far too steep. Suddenly, a horned assailant launches itself forward at blurring speeds, drawing a sharp curse from him as the melee explodes into motion. He meets the charge with a mid-air collision, spinning away only to channel a lethal technique intended to tear his opponent apart. Drenched in pulsating energy, he shatters a stone monolith with a single blow, though the backlash of his own raw power leaves him staggering. As a comrade dives recklessly into the fray, he charges in his wake, his clothes soaked in gore, while his ally mows down the encroaching shadows. He dodges the shield just as it pulverizes the ground where he stood. He draws on a surge of strength for a vertical slash while being watched. He touches the fresh gash on his cheek, feeling the weight of the fight. Standing alone in the wreckage, he acknowledges his failure to shield his friends and resolves to shoulder the burden for every drop of blood spilled. When questioned about his sudden ferocity, he bellows for an all-out assault, insisting that these human puppets are merely being twisted by an unseen hand. The antagonist laughs off the value of their lives, leaving the others reeling in horror as they struggle to fathom how he breached their most secure stronghold. He collapses into a deepening pool of his own blood, taunting his enemy's momentary hesitation by forcing them to confront the gruesome reality of the abyss. Across the field of scattered corpses, the grim truth finally settles in. In this relentless cycle of predation, there is no place for mercy. A member of the Yellow Dust Task Force watches a mysterious individual vanish into the haze, leaving the aftermath of the slaughter behind. That same monster then reveals to the survivors that Seonwoo Eden is actually the son of the late director Il-do, the creature lunges at him, grabbing Maru to bite down with the intent of consuming his very essence. Falling through the darkness, Maru drifts into a somber, rainy void where his consciousness begins to fray. His allies huddle beneath a protective shield, desperate to survive the looming monster that towers above them. A man yells in shock upon spotting Deokmin and Yosok, while another frantically signals for silence to avoid detection. Deokmin instructs Eden that they are the only ones left capable of resolving this mounting crisis. Desperate for a way out, a man asks his companion for a plan as the chaos intensifies around their position. Maru declares he will unleash his darkness, though a comrade warns that such control will surely consume his humanity. He insists he can manifest that power without losing his sight through death, a claim that leaves his companion stunned. Reflecting on his fate, Maru realizes that dying is the only way to enter the darkness as the sole living soul. He stands in the void, surrounded by a blue aura, unaware that a mysterious being is watching his every move. The irony remains that those with the most authority are often the ones who understand the least about the abyss. Maru realizes he needs total clarity to see through the encroaching dark, just as a cloaked assailant ambushes a figure nearby. He explains to the team that once a soul departs for the underworld, there is no coming back from that final transition. Cryptically, Maru asks Eden to kill him without drawing blood, a request that leaves his ally in utter shock. A task force member stands ready for the end, while another questions why a high-ranking hunter would even care about this dungeon. They refuse to wait any longer for Mara, fearing they will be slaughtered before he ever returns. Standing in the dust, the team worries that young Yoon and Bang cannot hold their lines much longer. A tornado of piranha-like fish forms in the air as the group launches a desperate attack against the entity. One man activates his piranha rakshasa powers, while an elderly woman watches the unfolding chaos with a cold, detached gaze. Maru and his team carve through the predatory swarm, fighting back as the piranha-like entities threaten to devour them whole. The creatures tear through the formation, their ravenous violence leaving the survivors to realize that in this cycle, such carnage is inevitable. While an ally moves to dress his wounds, Maru ignores the pain, diving headlong into the murky water to resume the battle. Exhausted and caked in grime, the fighters collide in the dust, gasping for breath as the relentless struggle refuses to grant them a moment's respite. A desperate command rings out as a man points toward the slaughter, begging his captor to look at the destruction unfolding before them. With eyes clouded by stress, a fighter swings his blade, cutting through the shadows to dispatch the encroaching attackers. A hand tightens around a man's throat, forcing him to close his eyes and steel his resolve for what he believes is the coming end. Maru swears and unleashes a fiery vortex to reset the battlefield. The woman channels her waning power while monsters emerge from the red haze. The survivors watch in horror as their Rakshasa abilities abruptly vanish, leaving them defenseless while red energy floods the void. Shock grips the team upon discovering the neutralization Rakshasa has arrived to exploit their vulnerability and launch a fresh attack. Realizing the bloodshed has made the subjugation permanent, Maru reaches out toward a fallen comrade in a vain attempt to save them. The enemy smiles maliciously and declares the end, delivering a final, blood-spraying blow that shatters his opponent's defenses. The suited man strikes his opponent's face, slamming him into the ground. Witnessing the carnage, the men panic, yet Maru realizes their current efforts remain woefully insufficient to stop the tide. The white-haired man continues his assault, and the team realizes with shock that his brutality is actually aimed at aiding them. He decimates the remaining foes, providing the group an opening to rush forward and seize the subjugated directors. They click the metal restraints into place while the woman directs everyone to check the casualties littering the ground. The silver-haired fighter lands a heavy punch, his gaze remaining fixed on the shifting chaos of the battlefield. As a young boy launches a kick, the team contemplates whether this neutralization Rakshasas has truly become an ally. Maru confronts the figure lurking in the shadows, questioning if this bleak future was always intended for them as the captives lie bound. The silver-haired man looms over his injured opponent with a predatory smile, asking if they have finally finished them all off. When questioned about his motives, he admits he is simply furious that a subjugation Rakshasa dared to interrupt his personal deal with the humans. The young man offers a reassuring word, though he remains contemplative, wondering if Maru has already abandoned them to fend for themselves. A sudden rumble shakes the earth as a helicopter descends, prompting the muscular man to shout into the wind, demanding to know who is arriving. The figure crashes into the earth, triggering a blinding explosion of energy. Maru kneels in the center of the crater, his intense gaze scanning the smoking aftermath of the battle. The newcomer steps forward, confronting the exhausted fighter and asking if he was attempting to use his resurrection powers to slip away. He voices his appreciation for the assist, and as they stand back to back, he resolves to finally escape the dungeon and start over. Mara fixes a murderous gaze on the newcomer, demanding to know where Chana is being held. Eden confirms she is gone, so Maru vows to kill anyone to find her before entering. As the figure approaches, Maru warns the team that the Soul S-Class dungeon is active. He confronts a man who scoffs at the idea of a level 7 challenging a level 8 Rakshasa. The enemy lunges and grabs Maru, who struggles to contain his devour ability. Ignoring the risk to his sanity, he orders Eden to stay behind and not follow him into the abyss. Eden refuses to back down, demanding he retrieve Chana or die trying to save her. Maru smirks and steps into the portal to begin his hunt. He emerges into a throne room teeming with soldiers, where the cycle of predation waits for the next rulebreaker. Observers whisper among themselves, wondering if he saved these elite forces only to turn them into his own private guard. Searching the darkest for Chana, he is suddenly blinded by a flash of light. A monster lunges from the void and stabs into the shoulder. Gasping in agony, Maru realizes his fight feels different as he spots the creature looming before him. The armored creature swings, forcing him to dodge a lethal slash as his own power flares in retaliation. Metal rings out as a weapon slams into Namyosoke, leaving him dazed and vulnerable. The creature seizes the white-haired man, tossing him to the floor, where he lies bleeding and still. Maru clenches his fist to counterattack, but collapses as the blade whistles just inches from the injured man's head. Pain racks his body as the armor leeches his ally's blood, forcing him to stand against the monster by himself. He deflects a searing energy beam, knowing she will bleed out unless he intervenes right now. Fearing the subjugation Rakshasa will strike her down, he lunges forward in a final, desperate gamble. He crashes into the beast, his red energy slash ringing out as it meets the monster's weapon. The force sends him flying through the air. But despite his bleeding wounds, he keeps his focus on killing the target. Ignoring the pain, he strikes back, but the creature pins him down. An explosion tears through the cavern, burying Maru in the rubble. A mysterious presence looms over his battered body, demanding he spill his secrets before slamming him against the stone. The giant creature towers over him, and Maru stares back, frozen in shock at the sheer scale of the threat. 5 figures later gather in the dark chamber, where a man stares at the moon and orders them to split up. A titan appears on the rooftop, and Maru summons his shadow Rakshasa soldiers to meet the entity head-on. Maru stares in shock at the shadow, realizing he has finally incapacitated the elusive entity. He watches the director's power, muttering that it does not matter as the fist ascends. Lunging forward to land a heavy punch, he remains bloodied and injured from the ongoing assault. A violent explosion rocks the arena, leaving him clutching a gaping chest wound in agony. Sliding across the floor before being slammed into a wall, he grows frustrated because his attacks pass through these shadows like air. Wondering how to kill ghosts, he stares with wide eyes as the light flickers around him. He grabs the wall to steady himself and unleashes fire to hit the creature. He gasps in relief, but the moment is cut short as a red creature slashes him, forcing him to endure fresh waves of pain. A female warrior in a red bodysuit strikes him, prompting the realization that he must heal himself to stay alive. Vowing to heal without draining the living, he lunges forward once more as the cycle of predation demands he fight or die. Leaping away from grasping shadows, he finally escapes the cursed tomb with a bloodied hand. Reaching his stone gate, he prepares for battle, only for his system window to task him with becoming a true hunter. He shouts in triumph, but freezes when he sees the creature's yellow eyes. Blinded by the blast, he gasps as he realizes his body is paralyzed by those eyes. Terrified as the snake creature smiles, he realizes the abyss breaks every rule. The serpent Rakshasa shifts into its true form with a hiss. Maru stands frozen before the giant beast, his mind struggling to process the sheer scale of the threat. He stares into the creature's eye, paralyzed by the fear of the abyss. Shaking off the dread, he forces himself to walk through the darkness while the ground rumbles beneath his feet. Digging his hands into the dirt, he hunts for the truth, driven by the cycle of predation to uncover the rot hidden below. A wave of shock grips him as he realizes these events are no mere coincidences, but a meticulously calculated trap. Clenching his fist in frustration, he stares down at the defeated monster he just vanquished. He vows to kill his true enemy, confronting the creature while a mysterious figure watches from the shifting shadows. The entity expresses deep disappointment, mocking him for his continued failure to master the power of gluttony. High above, the mysterious woman sits on her platform, lamenting that she could not bring him under her control. She grips her own red braid, struggling to contain the intensity of her power as the atmosphere darkens around her. Maru stands amidst swirling red energy, looking down at the fallen figure in the gloom. The woman points forward, threatening to drag his corpse into the abyss to finish him once and for all. He lunges toward the ornate golden gate, moving at high speed to deliver a decisive strike against his opponent. A serpentine beam intercepts the warrior, as the trio stands united against the giant, scale-covered beast. The serpent lunges with its jaws to rip him apart. Amidst the chaos, a traumatic memory of loss overwhelms him as he rushes to embrace a fallen companion. He kneels beside the lifeless body, finally accepting the cruel, heavy cost of the path he has chosen. Clenching his fist, he resolves to shatter the cycle of predation, thrusting himself forward from the creature's gaping maw. He manifests dark, tentacle-like appendages to lash out at the serpent, while a woman in red boots watches the carnage unfold in stunned silence. With a desperate sprint, he plunges his blade into a shadowy assailant, fighting for every second of survival within the abyss. A claw casts a shadow on the ground, revealing the territory of the entity seated on the throne. A defeated warrior collapses before the throne, where she prepares to strike with a chilling, predatory smile. As he lies broken, a pale entity lunges with razor-sharp claws, intent on delivering the final, fatal blow. The masked figure on the throne lifts him telekinetically, accusing him of stealing the son of the abyss, before gripping him tightly by the throat. With a cruel motion, she impales the warrior, leaving him to bleed out while she readies her departure through a golden portal. She stands in the heart of a firestorm, consuming the residual power as her clawed feet tread upon the scorched earth. Gazing upward, she calls out to her mother, her eyes burning with a menacing, otherworldly energy. She carries the unconscious body through the realm as red tendrils wrap around his hand. Ensnared by the giant entity, he is consumed as it bites down, dragging him deeper into the lightless void. Amidst the violent burst of energy, she declares her intent to harvest every human host of Rakshasa power, leaving him abandoned before the palace fires. A mysterious figure warns that more of their kind will arrive to claim compensation for the Rakshasa taken from them, as their decrees are absolute law. An entity manifests and the character cries, "Oh, mother!" as the creature prepares to feed. The woman in red robes gazes forward in confusion, finding herself trapped within a fiery, illusory environment. She laughs wildly across the wasteland, questioning if this entire reality is merely an illusion crafted by her mother. Her eyes burn with a powerful ocular ability as she snarls, baring her sharp fangs at the empty air. Hours earlier, Maru stands amidst the ruins, contemplating how to halt the catastrophe he views as his inevitable destiny. A wounded man greets him, and Maru prepares to use his ability to view the man's memories, hoping to decipher their dire situation. The toll of his powers weighs heavily on Maru as he discovers the man broken and defeated in the pouring rain. Fragmented visions flood Maru's mind the moment he makes contact with the kneeling, wounded soldier. He struggles to draw breath, realizing the subjugation Rakshasa hides behind a wall of human shields, leaving him without a clear path to victory. The wounded man urges Maru to consume him, insisting it is the only way to gain the strength required to survive. Maru reacts in disbelief, yet the man clings to him, desperate and insistent that he will not let go. Though the man pleads for him to rush to a clinic, he refuses, his hand falling motionless as his life force fades away. He explains that consumption is the only method to break the subjugation, despite Maru's desperate questions regarding his family. With his final breath, the man commands Maru to apologize to his loved ones before he collapses entirely. Standing alone with his back bloodied from the ordeal, Maru stares down at the phone left behind by the fallen man. Later, a subordinate approaches his captain to discuss the identity of the one who finally struck down the Demon King. He listens, visibly shaken, as the contact explains how Maru inherited the vice director's abilities, recognizing that this legacy remains his only true leverage. Admitting the deception tactic failed against the resurrection Rakshasa, he resolves to withhold that power until he reaches point-blank range. Maru lunges from above, diving into a dark, blood-filled chamber where 5 figures watch the cycle of predation unfold. He clashes mid-air against a shadowy warrior, unleashing dark energy as the abyss demands its due from the rule-breaker. He falls through the corridor and parries a blade, realizing his opponent is an S-rank hunter. Standing over a defeated foe in the grass, he watches as the victim begs to be forgotten before finally going still. Clenching his jaw, Maru identifies the location and infiltrates Kang's consciousness to confront the tree-headed subjugation Rakshasa. He observes the cultists binding victims with red threads, turning their minds into a conduit for the creature's control. Realizing Bei had already uncovered this truth, he dashes toward the entity to sever the connection. Descending into the swirling energy, he locks his golden eyes onto the demonic figure and prepares to strike. The antagonist mocks him for using a petty gimmick instead of his inherent powers, questioning his lack of dignity. Unsheathing his blade, Maru retorts that, because they believe they subjugate everything, a petty gimmick is all he requires. He unleashes a surge of energy, striking down the creature in a final move to clean up the mess left by the abyss. The warrior readies her blade on the platform, bracing for the inevitable clash. Without warning, an invisible strike slashes her face, leaving her reeling in shock as she demands to know what hit her. She looks up in distress as a wound opens and blood gushes across the floor. Retaliating with a blood-stained strike, she watches as a man steps forward, preparing to address the unfolding questions. Hanmaru squares off against a cloaked figure, who warns him that destroying them will only trigger a far greater catastrophe. A spider-like creature stalks the floor while a voice warns him that he will inevitably regret his actions. Labeled a traitor, he gazes forward before approaching the altar guarded by a serpent. He faces a group of enemies, engaging in a violent, bloody encounter that leaves him reeling from the shock of their numbers. Waking up disoriented and covered in gore, he struggles to recall where he is. The realization hits him that the tomb is collapsing, and the team stares in horror as the ceiling begins to cave in. The earth shatters under his landing, leaving the survivors standing in the wreckage. As the task force watches the secondary explosion, a man shields a woman with his own body from the blast. A rocky creature crumbles as a shadowy entity looms, while he holds the woman close to protect her from the debris. Inside the gymnasium, he sits amidst swirling energy, struggling to process the rapid changes in his body. When a man brings food, he tells him to leave it behind, because the appetite to eat has completely vanished. The man demands he eat to keep producing yellow dust, igniting a desperate, violent struggle between them. Suddenly realizing the gravity of the situation, he asks about his allies, only to learn Go Deokman is trapped in a meeting. Maru clarifies that he does not mean the old man, even as Yosak begins leading the team on a tour to keep everyone focused. Because the neutralization Rakshasa requested this tour, the others follow along to supervise, leaving Maru shocked when he realizes Chana is tracking their movements. He stands isolated in the quiet corridor, deep in thought, before reaching out to pull back the heavy curtain. Silence envelops him in the shadows while the others rest, all of them, exhausted by the cycle of predation that defines their existence in the abyss. In the hospital room, a confrontation erupts as an assailant threatens a man with a knife, demanding he relinquish his hard-won immortality. The attacker holds his companion at gunpoint, forcing a sacrifice to prevent the target from blowing himself up. as the target expresses his frustration about the inconvenience caused by self-destruction as an escape method. The victim questions if the peace treaty was merely a lie, but his captor simply corners him, ready to drag him back into the abyss. The threat looms as the captor orders him to surrender quietly to protect the humans, brandishing a glowing red object. Clenching his fist, the antagonist suddenly shifts the mood, asking about the pork soup in Busan while baring his fangs. Later, Maru travels by train with the group, explaining that he and Chana are simply there to grab a meal together. He questions why the others are tagging along, but his companion snaps that he is only there to babysit them. A chaotic struggle breaks out on the bus, yet one woman remains enthusiastic, acting as if they are on a casual road trip. The man in the red hoodie aggressively demands their agreement, though he is questioned about why they chose Busan for this mission. Upon arriving at their destination, they are greeted by a man with fangs who cheers for them as the hope of humanity. The man with fangs continues his relentless chatter, insisting they visit Hyundai and Gwangali to sample the local pork soup. Maru barely registers the banter, his mind focused on his surroundings as they navigate the bustling streets. They sit down to eat, but the man devours the food with such animalistic intensity that the rest of the team grows visibly uncomfortable. As a sudden storm rolls in over the beach, Maru orders his team to retreat to the hotel so he can settle his business with the dangerous individual waiting nearby. After a brief, tense farewell, he remains alone in the downpour, stretching his limbs to prepare for the inevitable clash. He confronts the silver-haired man, standing in the rain, warning him with a sharp, aggressive tone to cease his provocations. They debate the nature of the abyss, a place defined solely by endless slaughter, and question why anyone would willingly return to such a hell. With a taunting smirk, the man mocks Maru's lost immortality, pointing out that the current circumstances give him the upper hand. The confrontation turns violent as he forces Maru underwater, successfully dampening the red smoke and nullifying his defensive abilities. Pinned beneath the surface, Maru feels the pressure mount, realizing that while his throat is protected from the man's strike, he is effectively trapped in the depths. The man declares he could end the struggle right now, but spares his life as a twisted reward for the recent defeat of the subjugation Rakshasa. Kneeling in the rain, Maru listens as his tormentor proposes a new path, joining forces to finally destroy the cycle of the abyss. Reaching out through the falling rain, the man waits for an answer, inviting him to abandon the war and simply live out their lives in this world. Maru remains motionless under the downpour, his body still and silent as the weight of the man's proposal settles over the beach. He stands to reject the passivity of their current defense, arguing that staying on the back foot only invites further attrition. Driven by the ghosts of his past, he insists that they must strike first to neutralize the Supreme King of the Abyss before more innocents are caught in the crossfire. The entity says, "I'm going to drag more humans down to the abyss. As a subordinate pledges, I will follow your every command." Baring his fangs, Maru warns his allies that he intends to end their collective torment by forcing a confrontation on the enemy's own terms. Though an associate objects to his reckless pace, he remains unmoved, sensing that the window for hesitation has finally slammed shut. A hand grips his arm to stop him, sparking a confrontation over the secret driving his haste. The gluttony Rakshasa within him is fading. They must strike while he still wields its power, because once the entity perishes, Maru will either be stripped of his strength or die alongside it. This grim, symbiotic bond leaves no room for error, as his own life is now inextricably tied to the creature's survival. They debate shifting the war away from Korean soil to stop the prophesied reign of Rakshasas, though they dread that the government will never sanction such a desperate final gamble. He teases the chief, "Looks like you're gonna get even more gray hair, huh?" before stretching to discuss intelligence. Maru contemplates revealing his own secrets while vowing to kill his opponent, yet the pale-haired youth only mocks his desperate curiosity regarding the abyss. They attempt to glean information through the distraction of video games, but the youth remains uncooperative, forcing a colleague to remind him of his oath to help them combat the abyss. After the team is scolded for wrecking the house, they finally subdue the youth, promising him anything he desires if he simply provides the necessary intel. Later, they wander through an amusement park wearing novelty headbands, struggling to extract answers while huddled together in a cramped, dark space. When asked how to slay the Supreme King, the youth reveals that the entity is the dimension itself, and thus impossible to destroy, though Maru refuses to accept this and insists on finding a way. Staring at Maru in disbelief at such ignorance, the youth watches as the team pivots their strategy toward wiping out every Rakshasa, hoping that even such a partial victory might buy them 20 years of peace. He warns, then they'll just recruit more Rakshasas and attack again, realizing they face an endless war. When questioned about the possibility of a peaceful settlement, the white-haired man laughs, mocking the naive idea that the Abyss would ever deign to negotiate with mere humans. He explains that the Abyss intends to drag humanity into the dark to serve their own ends, a revelation that leaves Maru seething with visible frustration. Beside them, the woman reflects on the mercy she showed when she saved Maru from being sold into slavery in this cruel, unforgiving world. Their hopes are swiftly dashed when the authority figure firmly denies the request for an expedition into the Abyss, leaving the entire group in stunned silence. The leader refuses, saying, "Regardless, I will not authorize an all-out war," citing the risk of civilian casualties. She warns that upsetting the current delicate balance of power would only leave the door wide open for outside intervention. The demon describes the 16 Hells 8 of flowing lava, and 8 encased in solid ice, where souls are forced to suffer for all eternity. because the abyss serves as a dumping ground for the worst of humanity, discarded after surviving those hells. Its supreme king loathes the task of managing such garbage. Unable to leave her domain, she created the 8 legions to act as proxies, intending to use the space Rakshasa to invade the 16 hells until it betrayed her, fled to this world, and possessed a human. Maru reflects on the fact that he once held that same body, only to be warned that the Supreme King will hunt him for devouring the space Rakshasa, and that entering the abyss is essentially suicide. The 8 legions wait in a wasteland, where an entity warns that facing the abyss means total annihilation. Maru looks around the dark, unfamiliar terrain and realizes with sinking dread that this is not the dungeon he knows. The team wonders if stepping into the abyss seals their fate, even as they share a Ferris wheel car to survey the horizon. A man asks about the other generals, but the rabbit-eared boy only smiles in uncertainty as the man remembers his old dream of being a hero. Seeking sugar to clear their heads, they duck into a pink-themed cafe to break down the threats of the gluttony, space, immortal, and enslavement Rakshasas. The youth addresses the eater as the Annihilation Rakshasa, sparking a tense debate over the abilities stolen by the Immortal One. Refusing to betray his kind for mere honor, the Rakshasa questions the true loyalty of the humans sharing his table. He delivers a sharp insult, then bites into a strawberry and mocks humanity, declaring himself the supreme king of the abyss. Tension spikes as a man slants his hands onto the table, demanding to know if the entire conversation is a cruel joke. The blonde Rakshasa tells him he is lucky their conflict has paused, and asks if he agrees. Silence descends upon the room, and Maru decides to treat this fragile, uneasy truce as a temporary vacation. Crossing the parking lot, they discuss the grim necessity of entering the abyss despite having no other choice. The silver-haired man mockingly suggests he might just slaughter every human heading into that void, his boots tapping rhythmically as he paces. Maru confronts him for his lack of cooperation, but the Rakshasa just smiles, claiming the human world is far too entertaining to leave behind. They prepare for the journey, piling into a car to begin the long drive toward their next destination. A sudden violent struggle erupts inside the vehicle, and the man with glowing eyes looms over his target to silence him for good. The silver-haired youth laughs as he repeats the mantra of the abyss, the creator, the breaker, and the cleaner before Maru lunges at him, tired of his games. He slams the youth's head against the interior, the sudden impact leaving his opponent bleeding from the nose as the car shakes with the force of the blow. Vaulting over the dazed man, Maru keeps the pressure on, his hand reaching out to pin him down and force the cycle of violence to a halt. 4 men from the team crowd into the vehicle, questioning if this violent initiative fits their existing agreement while brandishing weapons to threaten him with death. Coughing up blood, the injured youth wheezes as his captors ignore the carnage, casually joking about rice soup and complaining about the lack of legroom. Back at the temporary Soul headquarters, the team leader cuts through the tension to announce the new mission, the total eradication of every Rakshasa within the abyss. Yu Young-yoon proposes forming a special task force, and despite the suicidal nature of the operation, volunteers step forward to finally face the abyss head-on. An older woman warns the recruits of the danger, but Reiki and her companion insist on going on the offensive, brushing off mockery regarding their limited combat skills. Only specialized agents are permitted to join the ranks, and the board quickly moves to finalize a roster for the upcoming offensive. Jumak asks about the consequences of failure, and the directors confirm that a loss means the death of every agent, forcing them to designate their successors. Branch managers like Mole, Gung, and Goinam begin their final preparations for what they openly label a suicide mission. Maru watches the group struggle with the logistics of entry, until the team introduces Siru, a gate opener who was previously banned from the Jeju office. He awkwardly asks who she is, only to learn that her unique ability to manifest gates makes her an essential, albeit dangerous, variable in their plan. They explain to Siru that her unique gate opening powers are the only key to the Rakshasa world, as no rifts have naturally manifested since the enslavement Rakshasa appeared. She grumbles about being forced to handle such dangerous, dirty work, but the team points out that Maru is not yet a general and lacks the strength to pierce the veil alone, because she can only anchor gates to locations she knows. They insist her participation is non-negotiable, prompting Maru to ready his gear. He politely excuses himself while she begins to channel her ability, her expression shifting into a cold, intimidating mask. In a heartbeat, the world twists and Maru finds himself standing alone in a desolate, red-toned canyon, trapped deep within the prison of the abyss. He stares ahead, pulse racing, as a giant spectral figure looms over a restless horde of monsters, signaling the true start of the cycle of predation. Nearby, a suit-clad agent collapses, his spirit broken by the sheer terror of the location as he refuses to take another step. The leader looms over him, warning that her presence is strictly required to ensure the rest of the battalion can safely navigate their way back. Exhausted by the endless planning, the group steels their nerves and begins to move out, fully aware that the abyss is a prison for them all. One operative snaps at his companion, reminding him that this mission is strictly business, not a game. As they face the unknowns of the room, Maru steps forward, claiming he has already deciphered the truth and promising to ensure everyone's safe return as he joins their ranks. Their leader officially welcomes the recruits to the Abyss Battalion, the group tasked with finally cleaning up the mess left by the 8 gods. He notes that Chana has also signed up for the suicide mission, stepping into the fray alongside them. Shana immediately mocks a soldier's muscle mass, leaving him flustered in front of his peers, though he grumbles that such sharp wit must run in the family. Miles away and oblivious to the portal's opening, a man sprints through the driving rain, desperate to reach the hospital in time. The team debates the lack of official government approval, but they agree that the escalating threat leaves them no room to wait. Commanding the operation, the leaders decide to head out at first light to confront the regresses on their own turf. A sudden sense of impending doom washes over Maru, and as he reaches to call his mother, an unexpected notification pings on his phone. He pulls out his device to check the notification, his thumb hovering over the screen as the meeting continues around him. A cryptic message flashes across the display claiming a sighting of Suwon, and Maru freezes, his heart hammering against his ribs. The text insists his father is alive, compelling him to slip away into the shadows to track down this impossible lead. He corners an informant who swears by the sighting, refusing to entertain the notion that it was merely a case of mistaken identity. The contact describes spotting Suwon in a dense crowd, lost to view only after a desperate woman pushed past in search of her partner. Maru sinks into a chair, overwhelmed by grief, as he realizes the chaotic throngs had robbed the witness of a chance to follow the man. A chilling warning follows. He is told never to meet the entity's gaze, as he struggles to decipher his father's true intent. Exhaustion weighs on him, and he wonders how his father could have abandoned his mother to suffer in such a broken state. The weight of the upcoming mission presses down, especially as he recalls that Suwon's sole obsession was reaching the heart of the abyss. He finally understands that his father had been hunting the source of the cycle all along, a revelation that leaves him reeling. Staring at an old photograph, he finds the visual proof he needed. His father has been alive and moving through the world this entire time. The fear that his mother will shatter completely if he also disappears grips him, hardening his resolve to return to her at any cost. Later, an associate corners him at the training center, mocking his somber mood as they prepare for the final deployment. Stepping into the room, he feels a surge of disgust for his former self, while staring down the man who orchestrated their path to the abyss. Maru brushes off the looming pressure of the mission, insisting to his companion that he possesses more resilience than he appears. Their bickering escalates into a heated confrontation when the other man snaps, vehemently denying any personal accountability for their current predicament. He lunges forward, gripping the man by his collar and demanding to know why every burden of this war is forced onto his shoulders. A scuffle breaks out, prompting Delphin to intervene because they've reached a breaking point. Soon after, a man enters their quarters carrying a bag of alcohol, casually tossing it down and gesturing for the group to drink with him. They settle in for a meal, yet the air remains thick with suffocating tension as the group begins to consume the liquor. Maru freezes in surprise when he spots an uninvited guest at the table, who lets out a sharp, mocking laugh of defiance. The stranger sneers a final farewell, predicting their imminent demise, before setting his glass down as the mood shifts into something darker. Petty bickering over social decorum and personal history flares up, finally snapping when a shot glass slams forcefully onto the wooden table. A mysterious figure, visibly intoxicated, begins to study the man's features with unsettling scrutiny, feeling the friction among the gathered guests. Maru observes the growing chaos with cold detachment until a hidden signal alerts him that the perfect window for action has finally opened. As the boss slumps over into a drunken stupor, Maru approaches, gently stroking the unconscious man's hair while fishing for vital intelligence. He turns to silence those who dare oppose him, brushing off their cries of cowardice as he signals for the rest of his team to advance. Watching the scene from afar, the director seethes with fury, already mentally plotting a way to eliminate the group before they can complete their mission. A subordinate warns her about penalties for her language and notes she is on her 17th bottle. An observer interrupts the group, berating them for squandering funds earned through sacrifice. The team decides to rotate their shifts, yet Maru recoils from the girl, sensing a sickening, ominous aura radiating from her. Staring at the carnage staining the floor, he is assured the victims aren't dead and that sand will stabilize their condition. His pleas to end the violence fall on deaf ears as a comrade is struck down in a sudden, savage outburst. The assailant sneers at their frailty, mocking their lack of power while striking them. Despair takes hold of the survivors as they realize their allies are bleeding out before the mission has even commenced. Clinging to the last shreds of consciousness, the bloodied man tries to offer his thanks, his voice barely a whisper. Maru clenches his fist in mounting tension, only to be told by a woman that Yuwa is just shy and needs a moment alone. A man in a suit pins a victim to the ground, forcing the helpless person to reach out and plead with King Maru for salvation. Having seen enough, Maru prepares to intervene, though he finds the entire battalion mentally fractured and doubts they will survive. Doubts deepen about the Abyss Battalion when they spot the enigmatic Sang Rim embedded among their ranks. One fighter eyes the mastermind, contemplating his elimination, while nearby, another undergoes a violent, agonizing transformation. Reflecting on the mission's likely failure, a combatant finds a strange manic surge from a cocktail before charging into the fray with red energy. A red portal tears open the sky, and a man dares the others to continue their fight in hell. He laughs with unhinged mania as the surrounding crowd recoils in horror from the carnage left in his wake. As the red gate stabilizes, a man kicks open the door, shouting for the immediate cancellation of the entire Abyss operation. Amidst the chaos, Maru watches his companions drink heavily, their frantic need for alcohol signaling a desperate attempt to escape the mounting tension. The sky shifts to red as the gate manifests, leaving the group to wonder what is happening. Maru realizes the surrounding red smoke is a dangerous anomaly, yet he remains annoyed by his friend's reckless intoxication. Walking away from the scene, Maru and his ally traverse the night, the silence between them heavy with the weight of an uncertain future. He questions why she volunteered for the task force, warning that the abyss is a death trap for those who dare to enter. She insists on going to honor her family's memorial, suggesting they simply flee together if the battle becomes too overwhelming. Recalling how he protected her before, she vows to shield him this time, a promise that leaves Maru visibly embarrassed. Back at the base, frustration boils over as the team frantically searches for him, demanding that he return to them immediately. He reports that the handover to the branch manager candidates is complete, allowing him to finally focus on the immediate threat. He argues that she should stay behind to lead, but she refuses, noting his power only lasts 30 seconds once they cross into the abyss. She mocks his inability to distinguish friend from foe, while he struggles with the lingering trauma of burying his fallen comrades. The cycle of predation haunts them, as Maru dreads the prospect of becoming the sole survivor of yet another disastrous mission. He admits he is only attracted to power, citing the late director June as the standard he measures others by. Approaching the doorway, he senses a presence like the space Raksasa and realizes the danger. Maru is left to handle the cleanup of his incapacitated friends, grumbling about being trapped in this endless, messy cycle. He wonders if the others have already reached the abyss, while a comrade considers himself lucky that his low stats spare him from that hell, even as he frets over Maru's fate. Left to his own thoughts, Maru checks on his sleeping companions before walking toward the darkened doorway. Deokman blocks his path, ordering him to get some rest. But Maru pushes past, insisting he has unfinished business. Inside the cafeteria, he corners a man, and they trade sharp barbs as the man admits he can never truly lower his guard around him. The man scoffs at Maru's plan to enter the abyss without any intel on the 8 legions, but Maru retorts that it is the only way to protect his loved ones, just as a monster lunges from the dark. Steeling himself against the inevitable cycle of predation, Maru stands firm in the encroaching shadows. Confirming his resolve, he ignores the man's dismissive taunt as a spoon is thrown his way. The utensil clatters to the floor, and in that instant, a massive surge of energy swallows Maru whole. He strikes the man with a palm, driving him to the ground, while his own power flares in tandem with a ghostly entity. Agony rips through his body as his veins begin to glow, the abyss demanding its pound of flesh. A violent strike erupts from him, his eyes turning a burning red under the heavy weight of the Rakshasa's power. As a figure looms within the red void, he hears his name called until he finally wakes, disoriented and gasping on the floor. The moment of departure has finally arrived, and a man shouts to rally the team for the mission. Dark smoke pours from Maru, and as they scan the ranks, the team realizes Sang Rim is opting out. Si-Ru is summoned to the front, where she bows, signaling her readiness to initiate the operation. Stepping through the gate, the entire squad tumbles into the narrow, suffocating corridors of the abyss. The team stares in confusion at the sight of a bear wearing a necktie, while a character steps forward to prepare a riddle about the creature. This bizarre creature forms a visual pun on the Korean word for gate, leaving the men stunned as the abyss uses such deceptions to confuse those who cross its threshold. The bear collapses instantly, prompting Deokman to order the team to push through the gate, knowing this is the only path forward. Chaina calls out to Maru, who stands bleeding and broken after pushing his limits to save the gluttony Rakshasa within him. As the gluttony Rakshasa, Maru is seized by a monster emerging from the red mist. His allies watch in shock, realizing he has retreated into his own consciousness to protect the entity, leaving them to hold the line until he returns. They uncover a secret Rakshasa hidden by the space Rakshasa, a creature kept secret even from the high-ranking chiefs, and step into the bloody mist to confront it. The man demands to know why it was hidden, but the woman admits the space Rakshasa never told her anything. A warning echoes that if the abyss claims this specific Rakshasa, humanity is doomed, as the cycle of predation demands a sacrifice that threatens to consume everyone. Disbelief grips them as a barefoot figure approaches, signaling that the final phase of the battle for the abyss has begun.